So guys, what if Naruto became dark and fell in love with Asia Argento in high school DxD movie? Life was too short for one to be weighed down by the fears implemented by social standards. No matter what anyone told him, Issei pursued his unsavory dream with determination. A single spark had all it took for him to go down the path of pleasure. His unwavering will had brought forth more pain than pleasure in the high school setting. Through reasons he did not think much on, he had been given a chance to fulfill his desires under the servitude of his new master. Rias Gremory, an unfortunate incident with a fallen angel had led to his reincarnation as a devil. Flirting with death was an experience he did not want to repeat, yet, here he was again, with his life on the line fighting against the enemy who had killed him before. With his new life as a devil, he was no stranger to pain. Even though he had grown accustomed to the sensation, it did not lessen anything. Ha ha ha. You can't beat me, Issei. The fallen angel Reiner sneered with a twisted smile plastered onto her features. It will only be a matter of time until I get the twilight healing, and then I will be unstoppable. Ending her arrogant proclamation, Reiner's twisted smile grew in proportions as the light spear she held left her hand and found a place in Issei's leg. Seeing the pain and determination clash on the face of her target, Reiner's crazed laughter returned in full force. Simply catching a glimpse of Issei's expression was enough to bring forth a cry of ecstasy. Snippets of her laughter could only be heard by the newly reincarnated devil as he struggled to stand up with both of his legs impaled by light spears. Blood soaked every inch of Issei's body, saturating his school uniform to the brim, leaving him in nothing more than rags skewered by the spears Reiner so happily launched at him. For any devil, having not one, but both of their legs impaled by light spears, the weapons created to specifically combat them, was enough to force them to a stop. The burning light hungrily gnawing at Issei's demonic body could be heard, visibly bringing sadistic joy to Reiner. I am going to find little Asia and rip the sacred gear right out of her. It's just too bad you won't be around to see it. The smell of burning flesh was heavy in the air, completely shrouding the metallic scent of blood that once occupied the space. Cynical laughter was all that was heard as Reiner's mirthful eyes lingered on Issei's brutalized body. As Reiner occupied herself with Issei, a rogue exorcist who had followed the pack of other rogues was engaged with a second devil just outside of the church. Whilst Reiner finished her joyous laughter, she gave Issei another sneer before walking away, leaving the mentally and physically wounded Issei bleeding on the church floor. She had a nun to hunt down and a sacred gear to retrieve. Issei would simply die of blood loss. She had wasted enough time on the pitiful devil. In a cloudless night, the moon proudly sat above heavens, casting a faint silver light upon the sleeping earth. Animals and humans alike slept in order to preserve energy for the upcoming day. Though many slept, there were a number of twinkling lights still visible through the thick blanket of darkness. Visible in the darkness was a giant floating fortress with a number of pillars and layers upon layers of plants entangled around the fortress walls. Entangling amongst one and another, the fortress could be described as the unification of unsightly disorder and luxurious beauty. Light poured from the numerous floors, illuminating the night sky in a series of dazzling rays, shining brighter than the swath of stars above. The fortress held the touches of both elegance and trepidation. It truly was a sight to behold, intimidating in image yet graceful in design. Roaming the halls with a dignified grace, a woman with depraved beauty adorning a cloak as dark as the night sky shrouded her fragile frame. Eyes twinkling in a mischievous light, Semiramis continued to glide down the halls in graceful steps. Her august movements drew the attention of men and women alike. With gazes of yearning and awe from both sexes, Semiramis merely ignored them in favor of marching towards her destination. Navigating through the labyrinth of hallways, she soon found herself standing at one of the many balconies with company by her side. Standing beside her with a slightly arrogant smile on his features was Naruto Uzumaki, blonde hair swaying in the gentle breeze. Naruto's bright blue eyes twinkled as he gazed at the blanket of stars. Naruto, I have news, Semiramis declared in a gentle voice. Oh? Naruto murmured as he turned his attention to the beauty beside him. Naruto held his steady gaze as his senses took in the pleasant aroma of fresh herbs the woman emanated. While the fragrance was alluring and seemed to be drawing him in, Naruto knew better than to allow the smell to intoxicate his mind. No matter how appealing the woman was on the outside, her intentions were what truly mattered. Semiramis was the reason Naruto's mind had been set in that way. The woman was an expert in utilizing her beauty to obtain her desires. The fragrance Semiramis emanated was possibly a poison created to cloud the mind of anyone who inhaled it, or an extremely well-made perfume. Naruto was leaning towards the former. It's the girl you wanted me to keep an eye on, Asia Argento, Semiramis said as she leaned on the balcony. Avoiding the blonde's gaze, The fallen angels seem to have had an eye on her for quite some time. A little birdie told me they plan on removing her sacred gear. Naruto mimicked Semiramis' movements and leaned forward. But his features were visibly tense, fists gripping one another till the blood flow was forcefully stopped. Naruto's cool blue eyes narrowed to some degrees, though the slight changes in his posture were hardly noticeable. Semiramis had known the blonde far too long to miss the sudden changes. Her curiosity that had sparked when Naruto had asked her to perform the task had flared to life once again. Brushing a stray strand of hair to the side, Semiramis shifted her gaze from the blonde to the dark forest below the floating fortress. Are you going to tell me why you wanted me to keep an eye on the girl? In exchange, will you allow me control of the Hanging Garden? Exchanging a look, Naruto gave the woman a challenging expression and she too gave one of her own in return. Neither breaking away from the contest of wills, Naruto had finally relented when a gentle breeze brushed against his exposed skin and returning his attention to the matter at hand. Semiramis followed in kind as the two shifted their attention to the stars once again. Ignoring the feeling of nervousness consuming his mind, Naruto turned to Semiramis once again. The mere idea of Semiramis allowing Naruto control of the floating fortress-like structure was absolutely out of the world. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon was Semiramis' treasure. Allowing members of their little group occupy the interior had taken excessive amounts of negotiation. Allowing someone other than herself control the structure was simply out of the question. Will you help me? Have I not been helping you? You know what I mean. I need your help to send me to Kuo. Semiramis did not answer immediately as she eyed Naruto for a minute or so before she sighed. With a flick of her wrist, a black magic circle shimmered into existence, giving her a nod of appreciation. Naruto placed himself on top of the magic circle. As magic particles began dancing a coruscating waltz, Naruto held his gaze with Semiramis. Just before the magic circle consumed him and transported him away, a final decision had been made. She's important to me. As those final words left Naruto's mouth, the blonde was consumed by the magic circle. Semiramis eyed the spot where Naruto had once occupied. Lips twitched ever so slightly. Semiramis swiftly left the balcony with long, graceful strides. Getting out that much from the prideful Uzumaki was considered a win in her books. Outside of Sao Sao, Semiramis doubted anyone knew anything personal about the blonde. Bounding down the empty streets of Kuo, Asia's eyes were wide with fear. Shallow breaths were all she could hear as she continued to run down the baleful streets. Devoid of any signs of life, Asia's mind still lingered on the events that had transpired in the abandoned church. Moments such as these always reminded her of the curse of weakness that plagued her life. It had always been like this, no matter what horrendous acts someone committed. Asia could not bring herself to fight them. Fighting went against her very nature. Taught by the church, Asia's ideals reflected her pacifistic upbringing among the idealistic priests on a small village. No matter what, she could not bring herself to hurt another being. The thoughts that were running amok in her mind were forcefully suppressed when a loud jeer resonated above her. Well, if it isn't the nun, why don't we go back to the church? Our session isn't over yet. Reinare's cruel voice cut through the ominous silence like a hot knife through butter. Asia was stopped dead in her tracks as she turned to face the fallen angel. Shaking in both frustration and fear, the nun could do nothing but stare at her soon-to-be killer with fear-ridden eyes. Heart-pounding in anticipation, Asia could feel the surge of energy provided by the dose of adrenaline pumping into her body. Yet, she did not move, even with an opportunity to escape the clutches of the fallen angel. She did not take it, no matter how she denied it. Asia knew deep in her raging heart. She could not escape. Issei had bought her time in order to escape Reiner, and she had not gotten very far before the fallen angel had found her. A feeling of defeat filled the empty void that once housed her hope. Biting her lips in order to restrain the tears burning away at her eyes, Asia could not help herself as guilt soon found its way into her damaged heart and ran its course. If Reiner was here, then Issei was probably dead. Issei-san, I am sorry. This is all my fault, Asia thought as her blurred vision turned away from the fallen angel. First, her brother had been brought down by her and now Issei had fallen because of her weakness. Unconsciously digging her nails into her exposed palm, Asia could feel fresh blood escape from her self-inflicted injuries. Reiner was smiling joyously as she witnessed more suffering. Her twisted smile never left as she slowly descended from the sky and landed before the girl. Snatching Asia's arm in a firm grip, Reiner gave the girl a murderously glare as she began adding more and more pressure on her hold. If you ever run again, I will kill you, Reiner hissed. Yanking Asia closer to her, Reiner dug her claw-like hands into the girl's bare arm. Aside from the joy she had received from watching the suffering of both Issei and Asia, she knew her plans had been delayed by quite a few hours. Using her free hand, Rainier delivered a sharp blow to the girl's cheek, drawing out a small cry of pain. Satisfied with her work, Rainier unleashed her wings and prepared to take flight. Just as her wings began carrying her upwards, a golden flash caught her attention right before an object impaled one of her wings. Screeching in pain, Rainier immediately dropped Asia as she too collapsed onto the earth with both her wings pierced. Upon impact, the objects had not only tore two glaring holes into her wings, but they also pushed her back significantly, creating distance from herself and Asia. Asia's body fell freeing down to the earth as the girl allowed gravity to do its job, not fighting the fundamental force dragging her down. Asia awaited the back-breaking pain from impact, but it never came. Instead of a painful landing, Asia had collapsed against a much softer object. "You're grown so much, Asia." Asia's tired eyes shifted until they finally gazed directly at her savior, past the patch of unruly blonde hair. A familiar pair of gentle blue eyes returned her gaze, heart leaping in surprise. Asia could only stare at the blonde. "Big brother?" Asia murmured before unconsciousness consumed the blonde nun, leaving her in the arms of Naruto. Gently shifting Asia's body into a more comfortable position, Naruto's gentle gaze soon hardened as an untamed ferocity entered his eyes. Raising his head to glare at the screeching fallen angel, Naruto's eyes flared in a fiery rage. Rainier ceased her screeches as her shivering body finally recovered from the brutal attack. Forcing herself onto her feet once again, Rainier's sadistic gaze heated. Forming a light spear in one hand, Rainier glared at her mysterious attacker, but, compared to the glare she was receiving, her own murderous glare paled in comparison. In normal situations, the fallen angel would have begged for mercy or ran for her life, but this was far from normal. Blinded by her rage and deprivation of power, Rainier could no longer restrain herself. Shrouding her mind in a thicket of murderous intent, Rainier now found someone to unleash it on. "You. Do you know who I am?" Rainier hissed as killing intent leaked from her body like a flood. "I will kill you for that." "Silence, you crow." Naruto snarled. "Your presence in this world is no longer welcome. Scatter." With that declaration, the space behind the blonde began distorting in a haze as golden ripples opened way for an array of weapons to come forth. Swords and spears alike sprouted from the hundreds of golden halos. Each and every weapon held all sorts of eye-catching ornaments. Even in the dark of night, the weapons shimmered in an ethereal shine. The weapons bustled in the air after Naruto's verdict, one after another. Every weapon launched from the golden halos like bullets of mass destruction. The air was obscured with dust from the pulverized ground. Rainier's screams of surprise only lived for mere seconds as the thunderous impact of the weapons consumed all. Settling down, the shroud of dust vanished, exposing the world to the destructive scene left behind by the blonde. Rainier was no more. There was no other possible way of saying it. The fallen angel Rainier was no more. Nothing was spared after Naruto's declaration. Scatter she did. Pieces of her once whole body splattered the decimated streets of Kuo. Blood splattered in every which direction, painting whatever was left of the streets in a crimson hue. Rainier's body, whatever was left of it, held the appearance of suffering a savage death in the hands of animals. Bones cut into pieces with bits of muscle and skin left attached to them all were a common theme, shimmering in the gore. The weapons launched at Rainier shimmered in their ethereal hue once again and disappear in particles of golden light. Only her head remained unscathed, left laying in a pool of her own blood. The horror-stricken face simply said it all. "Oh ho, so this is the girl?" Giving Semiramis a nod in response. Naruto eyed her with a neutral gaze as the black-clad woman sauntered forward, overlooking Asia's unconscious body with a critical gaze. The poison-loving woman returned to hold Naruto's neutral gaze, breaking their senseless staring contest. Semiramis walked to the table saturated with an array of foods and drinks, pouring herself a cup of wine from the available selections. The woman took a sip and her features immediately scrunched in dissatisfaction. A frown graced her elegant features as it remained frozen in a look of displeasure. The wine was pitiful compared to the types she had the pleasure of consuming. "I thought you had better taste than this, Naruto," Semiramis said in a tone fitting of her irritation. "I do," Naruto responded as the air behind him shimmered and twisted as a golden gate opened way for a bottle and two cups to appear. Much like his weapons, both bottle and cup were made of gold and heavily decorated by gems and jewels alike. Handing Semiramis a cup, Naruto poured the contents of the bottle inside and did so for himself. Tossing her previous drink into the bin of trash, Semiramis took a sip of the blood-red wine. The aroma did the drink no justice. A simple sip had been intoxicating. The liquor, no, nectar was something only imaginable by the mind. Such a taste was heavenly compared to the wine she had consumed prior. Neglecting her own facade of neutrality, her frown had soon dispersed upon the taste of the divine nectar. It seems, my selection is quite pleasing, no? That snapped Semiramis out of her trance. Crumpling her lips together, she turned to Naruto and gave him a slightly irritated look. The arrogance lacing his own voice had been enough to spark a flare of anger, yet, a part of her questioned the contents she had consumed with such vigor. Such a drink seemed impossible to brew by mere human hands. As a master in the art of creating poisons and brewing other forms of liquids, she could not point out a single mistake in the drink. It was as if it were made the gods themselves. It was a revelation that paved way for a new question in her mind. What is this made from? I don't human hands could brew such a drink. Whether it is weaponry or wines, I only have the best. You should have known this by now, Semiramis. There was that arrogance once again, lips twitching in anger. Semiramis merely placed herself in one of the many seats left available and sent Naruto a silent glare. When it came to liquors and other forms of drinks, she had prided herself in creating the best. In a matter of minutes, her pride had taken a blow. Unwilling to let the strike go unapproached, she leaned into her seat and pondered on the contents her taste buds had been exposed to. The taste was heavenly yet indescribable at the same time. Without a proper flavor to compare the taste to, she was hardly able to point out any mistakes. And did you use your best to brutalize the fallen angel? Semiramis asked as her tone calmed and her graceful voice returned. HMPH, a mongrel such as herself cannot fathom what honor she had received. To have been touched my treasures alone was far more than a cur like her deserved. Shaking her head, Semiramis pondered on the blonde's words. The gate of Babylon was a grand power blessed upon the blonde. From what little knowledge she had on the ability, she could say it was one of the stronger abilities wielded by the members of their little group. The ability to call forth what seemed like an endless array of weaponry. It was no wonder Naruto pitched the weapons like mere stones. Her only experience with the ability had been limited and thus her knowledge of it was scarce. There was only one person she could deem knowledgeable on it, yet he refused to answer her questions. If the girl is important to you, then why didn't you bring her in long ago? Naruto did not show any outright reaction to the question as he took a gulp of the drink in his hand. A scowl marred his features as his mind wandered. I refuse to bring her, involve her in our plans. For her own safety, it is best she did not affiliate herself with me. To complete my ambition, I cannot risk her when I embark on the path of blood. Nodding her head in acceptance, Semiramis quieted down. Neither spoke any more words as they enjoyed the pleasantries offered by the heavenly nectar. A series of knocks rang from the door and a servant entered. Lord Naruto, Lady Semiramis, Lord Cao Cao has asked for your attendance in a meeting, a servant said as he swiftly bowed to them both. Grunting in annoyance, Naruto walked out of the room, outright ignoring the servant. Giving him a graceful smile, Semiramis followed only steps behind the blonde. Inside a well-lit room, 8 seats placed behind a large circular table. With 6 of the 8 occupied already, 2 remained open for use. Flying proudly at the room's end, a banner of red and gold sat. A number of other decorations furnished the room, giving it a lavish outlook. Filling the seats were 6 unique individuals who all had varying expressions on the remaining members' absence, from annoyance to amusement. None of them had the same outlook on the situation. Time ticked away as a cloud of silence descended upon the group. None of them spoke as they all found a form of distraction to bypass the wait. Cao Cao, the leader of the hero faction, sat in silence, his messy black hair cascading down his head and his brown eyes shimmered in amusement. Though his eyes held amusement, it was masked behind a mask of indifference. As the leader of their faction, Cao Cao lived for order amongst the members, yet, no matter how many times he preached it, Naruto and Semiramis both cared little for his rules and showed up only when they wished to. Next to him was Jean, a young girl who possessed a wondrous beauty limited only by the innocence brimming from her calm blue eyes. Unlike a few of the members who were descendants of heroes, Jean carried the spirit of her ancestor, Joan of Arc, her ancestor that now resided in her own body, providing her with the skills and abilities wielded by Joan long ago. Beside Jean was Siegfried, the descendant of the legendary hero, Sigurd, adorned in a set of steel armor drawing attention to his snow-white hair. Siegfried's bemused blue eyes only shined on as time slowly ticked by without a conclusion in sight. Georg, a bespectacled young man with a patch of sloppy black hair and a pair of bored brown eyes, simply sighed in annoyance. Though his time was occupied by a book he had carried around, it did not stop his annoyance of the situation to grow. He had already disliked Naruto's lack of respect towards Cao Cao, and situations such as these only infuriated him further. The only one who did not really mind the tardiness of his fellow members was Leonardo, though it was impossible to really tell what emotion Leonardo was really feeling. With an emotionless mask always on his young face, there was really no way of telling. The most vocal of his displeasure was Heracles, the descendant of the Greek hero Heracles. He was an extremely muscular man with choppy black hair and a permanent scowl marring his rough features. Growling at his wasted time, Heracles could only glare at the double doors in distaste. In no longer than a few minutes, the doors opened and Naruto walked in, followed closely behind by Semiramis. Neither of them even cared for the gazes directed at them. As they seated themselves in the remaining chairs, Cao Cao coughed into his hands and drew attention to himself, eyeing all 7 pairs of eyes staring at him. A moment of silence passed by before the meeting began, with no one willing to mouth a word. After the arrival of both Naruto and Semiramis, Cao Cao decided to take the initiative. Roaming the halls of the Hanging Gardens with no real destination in mind, Naruto wore a look of annoyance as he sent a silent glare at his unwelcomed companion. Walking beside him in long, graceful strides, was Semiramis. The graceful woman was either oblivious to his annoyance or she simply chose to ignore it. Naruto was leaning towards the latter. This was not the first time she had been keen on accompanying him, either welcomed or not, drawing attention from other occupants of the fortress, the wave of silent murmurs only multiplying his annoyance. Perhaps it was the gnawing unease produced by his sister's condition that had ignited the aggravation swelling in his heart. Semiramis' persistence to accompany him did not quell the emotions pounding in his chest either. Bypassing a small crowd of occupants, Naruto headed straight for his chambers. It did not take long for a mischievous smile to play on her lips. Leaning closer to the blonde, Semiramis steadily breathed down his exposed neck and spoke in an alluring tone. "How bold! Already taking me to your room," ignoring her words. Naruto continued to walk past her without a single hint of acknowledgement toward her words. Semiramis' lips jerked into what looked like a pout. Shaking off the spark of annoyance, Semiramis' smile returned in full force. Perhaps it was the prospect of a challenge that had ignited a glimmer of excitement. Her first impression of the blonde had been less than satisfactory. His arrogance and dismissive of anything he deemed unworthy of his attention had been a factor in her annoyance. Yet, a part of her desired to break the permanent neutrality that adorned his visage. That could have been a possibility for her interest in the blonde. "Why do you follow Cao Cao?" Semiramis asked suddenly as she stared at the blonde in question. "I do not follow Cao Cao," Naruto replied with annoyance obvious in his voice. "I am merely working alongside him. As long as our interests align, I see no reason to make more enemies." "And what will you do when Cao Cao's interests change? Those accords he made, you did not favor them." "No matter what, I shall continue to pursue my goals." Semiramis pondered on his words with narrowed eyes. Naruto seemed far too nonchalant about the situation at hand. Her persistence had only brought forth a snippet of information. But, it was far too paltry to paint an accurate picture of Naruto's motives. Compared to Cao Cao, Naruto was a wild card. His actions were unpredictable yet expected at the same time. Complete dualities that he managed to perfectly blend into his actions. Even so, she could not deny the sense of excitement swelling in her chest. The curiosity for the blonde had only grown over time, and she was determined to find answers for her tabled questions. It did not matter if he ignored his comment about Cao Cao's newly formed accords. The goals worked so desperately to complete were far more interesting. The absolute feeling of elation was all Rizevim felt. His joyous emotion reflected on his maniacal laughter as it filled the cavern he occupied. Echoing throughout the dingy underground chamber, an overwhelming explosion of joy consumed his heart. Never in his life had he experienced such a feeling. By far, this was the most emotional he had been for as long as he could remember. Everything he had done was leading to this event. Now, with success just around the corner, the feeling of elation was not unexpected. Climbing an altar damaged by time, his eyes focused on a glimmer of crimson-red energy resonating from the distance. Running his hands against the century-old stone and caking his hand in the process, the twisted smile marring his pale visage widened. His laughter was crazed and unchained, a laugh filled with uncontrolled glee. Trailing behind Rizevim was his ever-so-loyal follower. Euclid Lucifuge, the superdevil, was far too occupied with his glee to have cared for his surroundings. Just over the horizon was the main component of his grand scheme. Laying on top of the massive altar was the beast that would bring forth a new world order. A beast so powerful, the biblical god himself had been forced to add extra seals over the existing set for safety. Trihexa, or more commonly known as 666, the beast of the Bible. The seals placed upon trihexa were all forbidden seals which required a great deal of work to bypass, but, with the prospect of unstoppable might, whatever endeavor he had to endure would be ultimately worth it. Shattering the biblical god's forbidden seals would take some time, but, the final seals placed upon trihexa would be an issue. Reaching the altar's peak, Rizevim gazed upon trihexa's sleeping form with waves of delight escaping his shaking form. unlike many whom would shake in fear upon the sight of trihexa. Rizevim's body shook in pure excitement, even though trihexa slept. An overwhelming force of ruinous energy absconded its form. Simply standing in the beast's aura was enough to draw forth a twitch of insanity in Rizevim's heart. Any normal human standing in its presence stood no chance of remaining sane, sweeping away his fascination. Rizevim released another laugh, a laughter of pure insanity. No longer did the light of compos mentis linger in his eyes, deluged with euphoria. Rizevim simply stood there cackling before the apocalyptic beast. Lord Rizevim, is this it? Euclid managed to ask, is this trihexa? The apocalyptic beast? Yes, Euclid. Yes. Rizevim bellowed in his demented voice, this is the key to my ambition. This glorious creature you see before you will clash with Great Red himself. Once we awaken it from its slumber, the world will be mine. Euclid merely stood there with his mind racing, though his unwavering loyalty kept him by Rizevim's side. A part of him questioned his lord. A beast as powerful as trihexa seemed out of Rizevim's reach. A beast greater than Great Red himself slept before him. The same beast that his lord wished to control. The appearance of trihexa had been enough to beat the breath right out of his chest. The dull black fur that shrouded its primate body shone in a musky light as the 7 separate heads of 7 different monstrosities with a crown of horns adorning the top slept soundly. Standing before it felt like he stood before the reincarnation of destruction itself. No, he was standing before the reincarnation of destruction. A feeling of the homicidal aura that eluded its slumbering form was enough evidence of the claim. My lord, what of the other seals? Euclid asked as he finally regained control of his senses, overcoming the mixture of awe and fear that had forcefully taken hold of his mind. Ah, yes, the seals placed upon trihexa by the damned Uzumakis, Rizevim mused. If knowledge proves to be correct, there is one Uzumaki remaining. In order to destroy the annoying seal, a sacrifice is needed, for only the blood of an Uzumaki will awaken trihexa from his century-long slumber. Will it be enough, my lord? Thousands of the clan had sacrificed their lives in order to create the blood seal. Will one be enough? If one is not enough, then I shall use the Holy Grail to bring back the ones that have died. No matter what, the Uzumakis are the key to our plan. The last Uzumaki shall be the one to awaken trihexa. After his chaotic declaration, Rizevim released another insane chortle. The prospect of showering the Uzumaki-built altar with their own blood was enough to bring forth laughter. The immense swirl that trihexa had slept on would soon be painted in the blood of the Uzumakis. Anticipating the destruction trihexa would bring forth when awoken was better than any drug. Thinking about it resulted in the shivers of excitement bubbling in his heart. My apologies, Lord Cao Cao, but no one without Lord Naruto's consent may enter this room. Standing outside a room in the medical ward, Cao Cao frowned at the handsome man garbed in green robes who stood between himself and the door. A twinge of annoyance and anger ignited in his heart as the frown that marred his face only deepened. Seeing no signs of hesitance from the green-clad man before him, Cao Cao's impatience was beginning to show, the repetitive phrase uttered by the man only adding more pressure into his already growing frustration. Dearmood, stand down. I am the leader of the hero faction, not Naruto. I hold authority over the faction, not him. I will not ask you again. Get out of the way, Cao Cao muttered with a savage wave of annoyance dripping into his tone. I cannot do that. My lord's orders comes before all others, the newly named Dearmood responded, ignoring the growing frown that impaired the Longinus wielder's countenance. Dearmood's determination only grew after the comment made by Cao Cao. The lord ordered that no one enter the room without his consent, even you, Lord Cao Cao. Dearmood's loyal declaration had only managed to fuel Cao Cao's frustration. Not only did one of his subordinates dismiss his orders in favor of other members. He seemed to be finding these actions more common. After Naruto's declaration of distaste over his decision involving the hero faction, more and more members that had loyalty towards Naruto became harder to control. Dearmood was one of the most prominent members loyal to Naruto. If any conflict were to break out between himself and Naruto, Dearmood was an obvious danger with his skill set and the unwavering loyalty that drove him forward. Cao Cao, what a pleasant surprise, walking through the halls with a neutral expression and a tone that did not betray his visage. Naruto approached both of them, followed closely by Semiramis. Cao Cao shook off his frustrated frown and replaced it with a smile, or what disfigured smile he managed to form with the negative emotions plaguing his heart. The issue that had been in the air had been tormenting the faction needed to be resolved. A conversation with Naruto would shine some light on the issue, or perhaps add more fuel to the raging flames. Naruto. Cao Cao acknowledged with a nod, facing the blonde. Cao Cao had eliminated his disfigured smile and an obvious frown took its place. Semiramis. Cao Cao, Semiramis greeted with her usual smile. Giving Semiramis a nod, Naruto returned his attention to Cao Cao. Semiramis, on the other hand, walked past them both and made her way towards Dirmud. Acknowledging her with a nod, Dirmud kept his gaze on Cao Cao. If need be, the ever-so-loyal man readied himself for an intervention. It was no secret that both men had clashing ideals when it came to situations involving the hero faction. A fight was keen to happen if words did not solve the issue at hand. Knowing Naruto and his lack of concern of issues that did not pique his interest, both Dirmud and Semiramis expected a fight if Cao Cao sparked Naruto's anger. The need for privacy had directed both Naruto and Cao Cao into the less populated areas of the floating garden. With no exchange of words as of yet, Cao Cao was attempting to find a solution in order to appease Naruto and quell his distaste. The situation was dire if Naruto decided to abandon the faction and leave. A good number of the members would follow him, though a number of them Cao Cao would care if they stayed or not. A small group of Naruto's followers were indeed important to the fighting strength of the hero faction. Semiramis and Dirmud were both candidates in that area. If they lost Dirmud, Siegfried would be tempted to leave. Losing someone he deemed as his rival would be a driving force in that decision. Now, if Semiramis had decided to support Naruto and leave, it would leave the hero faction in a vulnerable state. Losing Semiramis meant losing their base of operations and spy network. Cao Cao could not afford to lose either one. Naruto, I understand you are not pleased with the direction the hero faction is going in, Cao Cao began, slowly testing the waters with caution hidden behind a sigh. But, if this continues any longer, then the hero faction will fall. The members loyal to you are unwilling to listen to. I have amused you for long enough, Naruto said as his eyes narrowed in annoyance. I have participated in your meaningless games for far too long. You are only leading the faction because I have little interest in doing so. Do not take my kindness for granted, mongrel. The only reason you still breathe is because of him. Cao Cao's smile strained drastically as his eyes glimmered in rage. The tone used on him only added to his fury. Appeasing Naruto was going to be tough. There was no doubt about it, Naruto's arrogance had no bounds. Cao Cao prided himself as the wielder of the true Longinus. The strongest of all 13 Longinus, with the potential to destroy the world. Being talked down by Naruto damaged his pride. Making no remark to Naruto's words only ignited his fury further. At his situation now, he could not afford more enemies. Having Naruto as an enemy was not something he would look forward to. While Naruto had his ambitions, he had his own. The desire to pit humans against other mythologies. In order to test humanity's limits, he needed to accumulate enough strength in order to fulfill his ambition. Naruto, enough. I grow tired of this. My patience has reached its limit. If you test my patience once more, the wishes of my dear friend shall no longer be heeded. I advise you to not. I have little time to spare on you. Completing his sentence, Naruto walked away without a look at the hero faction's leader. Leaving behind an enraged Longinus wielder to his thoughts, as he left, Cao Cao slammed his fist against the stone walls in indignation. Eyes boiling in restrained rage, Cao Cao allowed the emotion to escape through the punches dealt on the wall. It was only a matter of time now. When preparations for his plan were made, dealing with Naruto would come soon enough. For now, he would play by the Uzumaki's rules. Then he would draw blood. Azazel stood over the destroyed streets of Kuo with an analytical gaze piercing the shroud of magical energy surrounding the streets. The ruling devils had erected an illusion over the street in order to draw mortals away. Buying time in to fix the streets before opening it to the mortals once again. Even so, his visit to Kuo had been purely for research and he had not been disappointed. Leaving Grigori in the hands of his subordinates and brothers, his search for a Longinus had ended in success. Somewhat, it was just too bad Issei Hyodo had been turned into a devil. If he had not, opportunities to study the Longinus would be much more common. But, the trip had not been a total loss. Besides the backlash created by some of his subordinates' actions, Azazel had discovered a much more interesting figure to study. Occupying the spot where Reiner had been brutalized by what could only be described as a pack of savage animals. Azazel could not deny his interests in the death, aside from pulverized rubble and gaping hollows. Remains of blood still lingered in uncleaned areas of the destroyed streets. And the metallic smell of fresh blood still dawdled in the air. Reminiscence of magic was eroding from the attack on Reiner. Only fragments of magic still lingered, scattered in every direction. Magic particles drifted off into the sky before vanishing completely. Whoever had obliterated Reiner had bombarded her magical attacks that had an unnatural amount of magic in whatever was sent her way. The more his mind wandered on this situation, the more his interest grew. You asked for me, Lord Azazel? Azazel turned to the source of the voice and nodded his head in response. Standing inside the shadows, a handsome young man with a large Midnight Black Dog seated by his side, Tobio Ikus and his independent sacred gear named Jin. Tobio Ikus was one of Grigori's strongest fighters with immense combat capabilities, being one of the few humans capable of going head-to-head with powerful beings others could not. His sacred gear was one of the 13 Longinus Canis Lycon, a sacred gear that had a mind of its own that allowed the user to utilize shadows for offense as well as utilize blades. Tobio. I have a little job for you. You heard what happened to Rainier. Azazel began as he received a nod before continuing. I want you to find out who did it. Take/dog team with you. Whoever did this, I want to know about. Very well, Lord Azazel, Tobio replied as he left with Jin following loyally from behind. Returning his attention to the destruction left behind by Rainier's killer, a twinkle of interest filled his eyes. Whoever did this could be a possible threat in the future. Sunlight danced across the skyline as the sun slowly climbed higher and higher. Birds sang their unorchestrated melodies, gracing the earth with a symphony of chirps. A gentle breeze swept through the sea of trees, brushing against branches and sending leaves into a sedate waltz. Burning past the lingering aspects of night, morning bloomed into existence. Awakening from their slumber, humans and animals alike began performing their morning rituals, keen on starting the day right. Though the day had just began, Naruto was wide awake, going through the motions of a normal day. Basking in the sun's warm embrace, the blonde panted lightly as he stood in a field choked with weapons. Swords, spears, pikes, axes, halberds, you name it, he had it. An arrangement of weapons surrounded him in a circular formation. Impaling the sword he wielded, Naruto exchanged it in favor of a spear. Effectuating a dance with the spear in hand, a second exchange came. Sheathing the spear into the earth once again, the blonde returned his attention towards other weapons he had yet to practice with, owning an almost unlimited arsenal of weapons under his command. Mastering every weapon was simply beyond him. A single weapon residing in his treasury had taken a single hero an entire lifetime to master. Sure, a number of heroes had managed to master more than a single weapon, but an arsenal of every treasure bestowed upon humanity, impossible. Yet, that never stopped Naruto from continuing his uphill battle. Every single treasure residing in his vault had a unique ability differentiating it from others. Mastery over a single weapon unlocked doors hidden to the tenderfoot. His ambition of slaying the apocalyptic beast required power. There was no way around it. Trihexa was the beast of the Bible. A monster so great that the biblical god risked his life in order to prevent whatever seals left binding it from eroding. With power that was said to outmatch Great Red, the dragon of dragons. It was beyond foolish to challenge Trihexa. Challenging it only brought forth a one-way ticket straight towards purgatory. Or however long one spent inside the underworld. If Trihexa was unleashed, a team-up between Great Red and Ophis the Ouroboros dragon could only defeat him. Even so, Trihexa's nature to destroy covered all. No matter if one was an angel or a devil, upon its awakening, all whom dwelled upon the world would die, scattered into the vast emptiness that Trihexa would forge. Big brother. Naruto's thoughts faded towards the back of his mind. Turning his head towards the source of the call, Naruto stopped his movements and hushed his panting. Regaining breath and eliminating the need to refill his supply of oxygen. Naruto calmed his nerves, running towards him with a basket in hand. Was Asia. Awoken from her traumatic slumber, the girl had rebounded quickly. Their first meeting in years had been short and lacked any real conversation between the two. Simple snippets of a real conversation were formed and Naruto had left. His actions regarding his hasty retreat branched from the mixture of anger and small hints of fear that took hold of his heart. An unlikely fear of losing Asia was enough to drive him away. Asia, Naruto acknowledged as he dismissed his weaponry with a flick of the wrist. Big brother, I brought you breakfast. Miss Semiramis said you would be here, Asia replied with a smile exploding from her gentle features. Placing the basket containing food, Asia shuffled awkwardly before him. Naruto, on the other hand, studied her form and shifted his attention onto the food delivered by his sister. Digging her nails into the unprotected portions of her tender flesh, Asia nervously stood there looking over her brother. A train of thoughts rushed through her mind as hundreds of scenarios played without an end. Emotions ran thick in her scenarios, all of them pushing her mind towards possibilities as to why Naruto had left her. With no end to her nervous thoughts, Naruto had decided to do something he had been deprived of for so long. He smiled. Thank you. From despair to elation in a matter of seconds. Asia's anxious smile brightened dramatically, a wave of euphoria washed over her form. Cleansing her mind of negative thoughts that had taken hold. Clear of her doubt, Asia could only nod in response to Naruto's short words and smile. Growing up beside Naruto had always been strange, to say the least. a brother that held abilities that far outshone many grown men. Naruto was always training his body and mind. Events prior to the travels alongside her brother were blurry and out of place, from what she was able to gather. An incident had forced Naruto away from their parents with only her as company. There was just too much she did not understand to fully form an opinion of the events thus far. Big brother. Asia stopped herself from completing her sentence as her lips crumpled together. Big brother, I missed you. The heartfelt words had caught Naruto's attention. What decisions he had made were not perfect. Far from it, leaving Asia behind in the care of the church was a mistake altogether. But his path in life was beyond dangerous, taking her along in order to fulfill the ambition passed down from each generation in the Uzumaki clan had its own set of faults. Following him would only lead to more pain and suffering. The church had been much more promising. Armed with a gentle heart, Naruto had not expected Asia to have been abandoned. Twisted anger was all he felt. The church was clearing wrong on their decision and radical beliefs, and Asia was a mere victim of the status quo. I missed you too, Asia, Naruto replied as the smile he wore flattened to some degree, and I am sorry. His sister suffered because of his decisions. An apology was the least she deserved. Asia's smile only widened after his response, eyes blurry with tears of joy. Asia had wrapped her arms around Naruto and laid her face upon his chest. Naruto did nothing to stop her. He merely stood there, holding his crying sister. The questions that lingered in Asia's mind quelled. For all she cared, her brother was back. That was what mattered. The church had never seen it coming. A good number of churches under their command all suffered a fate condemned by their lord. Following a common pattern, none of the churches that had been attacked were left standing. All of them had been burned and the ashes that formed were scattered in the wind. Accounts of such attacks spread far and wide, all of them following a similar pattern as witnesses declaimed what they had seen or heard, terrified screams, followed by the blood-choked cries and then, silence. As fires were set upon the churches, death lingered in the eerie silence. Lord Dulio, you must not act so carefree. Our churches have been attacked by an unknown enemy. This no time to act so. Dulio Gesualdo, the strongest exorcist to ever grace the ranks of the angel faction. Never cared for situations such as these, lax in nature and compassionate as a fault. Dulio already knew the reason for the attacks. All of the churches guarded an Excalibur fragment. The attacks could simply be brushed off as attempts to obtain all the fragments, but there was a hole in that theory. Another church that had no association with the Holy Sword met the same fate. It did not take long until realization dawned. Dulio now knew the motive and individual whom had ordered the attacks. The feeling of sadness and pain clutching onto his heart, refusing to let go did not help either. No need to worry. Dulio declared rather lazily, I will handle this myself. Upon his declaration, Dulio began ushering the undesired guests out of the room. Slamming the door behind him, Dulio's slipshod smile dropped, visage wan with emotional pain. The strongest exorcist walked across his luxurious room and looked out the window. A small, agonizing smile marred his features as Dulio looked off into the distance. Is this your doing, little brother? Is this your message to me for failing to protect Asia? Destruction, pure unmatched destruction was only visible in the distance. Everything had been annihilated, leaving behind only the eerie silence of loss. Death lingered in the dingy air as dust clouded the heavens, blanketing over the rubble of a once graceful village. No signs of life remained in the ruins, tendrils of blood stretched far and wide. Bodies littered the bloodied ground, the unsavory clash of blades rang clear in the silent ruins. Echoing throughout whatever remains of the villages were left, a group of crimson-eyed men surrounded a single woman standing amidst the hostile group, tied into a ponytail. The woman's unruly blonde hair swayed under the gentle wind, sword in hand. The woman's regal features remained calm as a slight smile played on her lips. The woman's brutish blue eyes scanned each and every one of the hostile opponents with little interest escaping the ocean blue orbs. Growling in outrage, the men, no vampires, circled around the woman in hopes of locating opening for an attack. No matter how uninterested her outer appearance looked. A dragon rested beneath the fragile outlook. Mordred Pendragon was many things. And defenseless was not one of them, as a descendant of the traitorous knight. She had inherited the natural talent of a swordsman from her ancestor. Combating her at close range was suicide, unless an individual's skill was equal if not greater than an adept swordsman. Surviving the clash of blades was nigh impossible, with only a few swordsmen at their disposal. The vampires were at a tight end. If any of them broke off from the circular formation, Mordred would gain an opportunity to escape the encirclement and strike them individually. Filthy human, die. Shifting her attention onto the speaker, Mordred gracefully dodged a slash aimed at her being. Dancing around a number of slashes, Mordred quickly brought her own blade forward and sank it into her attacker's exposed stomach. Yanking the blade free of its target, the Pendragon grunted in annoyance as more and more vampires flooded the field. Swiping for blood, a few vampires chose to engage her in close combat whilst others blasted her with magic bullets. Neither of the attacks nor magical bolts managed to land a hit. Swaying past attack after attack with the agility of an cheetah and the grace of an eagle, Mordred danced past the attacks with relative ease, with strength unexpected from such a petite frame. Mordred swung her mighty two-handed blade, seeping the barren ground with the blood of her enemies. Motivated by the cries of pain, Mordred charged and split a second vampire in half, forcing her blade past the layers of muscle and bone. Mordred's endeavor ended when her once beautiful silver blade escaped the vampire's body and splattered droplets of blood onto the remaining bloodsuckers. From horror to fear, a series of emotions bypassed the enraged masks that her attackers wore. Leaving them in a small state of shock, it was all the time she had needed. Rushing forward with her menacing blade in tow, Mordred sheathed her blade into the bodies of stunned vampires, leaving a few others to cry out in surprise. Silencing the remaining vampires and splattering muscles and blood in every direction. Flicking away a string of blood, Mordred sheathed her mighty blade and observed her handiwork with a tiresome gaze. The job had been complete. Wiping out the vampires that had bypassed their territory, Mordred no longer held any obligation to remain in the unsavory forests of Romania. Littering the earth with vampire remains was not exactly her ideal mission, but it was better than staying inside that godforsaken fortress dealing with Semiramis. Well, I can't have you slaughtering the members of my faction now, can I? Turning her head towards the origins of the voice, Mordred narrowed her eyes upon sight of the speaker. Doll-faced and eluding an aura of self-importance, Marius Tepes stood in the shadows with a respectful smile adorning his fragile features. Grabbed in robes fit for a king, Marius gave Mordred a mocking bow as he continued to smile. Masked underneath his pleasantry, Marius continued to study Mordred with a glimmer in his crimson eyes. It was no secret that Marius was not as pleasant as he portrayed himself, far from it, cruel and manipulative under his smile of friendliness. Marius was never an honest individual, willing to do whatever the cost in order to benefit himself. HMPH, you will be cut down just like your men, Mordred declared, allowing her annoyance to seep into the tone of indifference. If you challenge me, even the pact you have made with the Chaos Brigade will not save you. Quite arrogant of you. Mordred. Marius never finished his sentence as a soaring blade impaled itself inches away from his head and sheathed itself into the trunk of a tree. A snarky laughter filled the silent forest, followed by the crunch of stone. Launching herself from the ground, Mordred had shot towards Marius whilst leaving behind an interstice of destroyed earth. Retrieving her blade, Mordred made use of the surprise generated by the sudden throw of her blade. Aiming for Marius' head, Mordred worked hard as her attempts at beheading the vampire increased, with every slash forming a shallow cut on the agile vampire. What are you doing? Oh, I was ordered by Uzumaki to kill all the vampires, you just happened to be one. Unrelenting with her pursuit, Mordred's smile widened upon every cut she dealt to the doll-faced vampire. Kicking him to the ground, Mordred's smile widened when she had foiled his attempt on casting a spell. Simply breaking the caster's concentration would suffice. Instead, Mordred had done a far greater deed, removing the Marius arm. A wondrous cry of pain escaped the vampire's lips as he clutched the newly formed stub. Attempts of quelling the raging flames only ended in failure. Mordred continued to watch the display with a brutish smile playing on her lips. Well, be back to collect the Sephiroth Grawl. Next time you get in the way, Uzumaki will kill you. The gathering of clouds just about the Hanging Gardens continued in a leisurely pace, swirling into a single blanket of darkness containing droplets of would-be rain inside. Situated inside his room, Naruto seated himself behind a large desk adorned with wondrous decorations and a single chest set placed before him. Holding onto a night piece, Naruto merely gazed at the darkening sky in contempt. All the pieces were gathering. The time to act would be upon him soon. All plays were in need of an opening act. Slamming the knight onto the board, a glimmer of thought flushing his features. My lord. Storming into the silent room, Dearmood's worry-filled tone snapped Naruto back to reality. Setting a steady gaze on the ever-so-loyal knight, the blonde beckoned for him to speak with a wave of the hand. There was no need to reprimand Dearmood. The man knew better. The situation was either dire or important for such an intrusion. Depending on the revelation, forgiveness would vary. Knowing Dearmood, there would be no need for a punishment. Lady Semiramis and Lady Asia have left the Hanging Gardens, Dearmood announced whilst performing a bow of his head. To where? Naruto demanded with a slight frown forming onto his calm visage. Kuo, my lord. Lady Asia mentioned the need of thanking a friend for helping her. I believe the two were headed there in order to do so. The frown continued to increase as Naruto thought on the words. Semiramis was a wild card, that was for sure, most of the time unwilling to any of the orders placed upon her. Granting Asia's request to visit Kuo was an abnormality. He needed to know the reason behind her actions. We are heading to Kuo. Walking through the streets of Kuo, Semiramis graced passing humans with a charming smile while both her and Asia headed towards Kuo Academy. Turning a number of heads, the almost flirtatious smile did little help the men from staring. Appealing in all areas, Semiramis continued to smile with no signs of stopping as she allowed Asia to guide her along. It did not take long until they stood at the gates of Kuo Academy. Already have sensed a number of demonic signatures surrounding the school. Devils ran this school. How ironic a nun would come upon it. Issei-san. Asia called out in a mixture of joy and relief. Upon hearing the nun's call, a plain-looking male eluding a minuscule amount of demonic might bounded forward with a cry of his own. Happiness marring his features, Semiramis found the smile albeit disturbing. Ignoring the feelings dancing across her chest, the woman watched on as Asia and the newly named Issei hugged. A spark of interest filled her eyes upon sight of the affectionate gesture. Her interest did not align with the relationship between the devil and Asia. It branched from Naruto and Asia's relationship. The thought of Naruto's reaction was priceless. The woman almost felt bad for the devil. It was no secret Naruto took great care of anything that belonged to him, and a sister whom he clearly showed love for spending time with the devil. How amusing. Issei. Get away from them now. Issei and Asia both were snapped away from the hug as a commanding voice pierced the serene silence. Quickly backing away, Issei turned to the origins of the voice and blinked in surprise. Standing a distance from him with her peerage was Rias Gremory. Crimson locks swaying under the slight breeze, the Gremory heiress stood firm and approached the three with narrowed eyes guiding the way. Semiramis merely smiled one of boredom, signifying the lack of interest involving the Gremory. Issei was simply standing there with confusion spreading across his simple features, looking from the two attractive girls to Rias. The perverted pawn knew little of the true dangers of interacting with Ossie Argento. Why are you here, in Gremory territory, witch? Rias growled with her eyes narrowing dangerously. HMPH, if it isn't the spoiled devil, Semiramis muttered with a mocking smile adorning her regal features. Be careful with your words, little girl. I may not be as brutal as my lord, but I will not hesitate to end your meaningless existence either. You are in Gremory territory. I rule this land and not only have you trespassed, but you are threatening an heiress of one of the remaining 72 pillars. I will not stand. Then kneel. The sudden declaration had silencing Rias and brought attention onto the new voice. Entering the fray with a golden magnificence only befitting of a king. Naruto Uzumaki strolled out of shining teleportation circle with arms crossed and a displeased frown adorning his features. Following closely behind, Ddraig held his two faithful spears and directed them at the group of devils. Looking upon Naruto, Rias and her loyal peerage members knew only of the untamed pressure seated above them. Issei eyed the man with a critical gaze as the boosted gear soon formed on his left arm, readying himself for an attack. The perverted devil felt the world freeze when he locked eyes with the blonde. It was not anger of a simple man. It was the untamed fury of a lion. Despite the might that eluded the blonde, Rias had quickly snapped out of her stupor. Regaining her bearings, the Gremory heiress stalked forward and placed herself beside Issei and glared at the blonde. Perhaps it was the naivety that had drove her or even the stupid bravery. All she knew was absolute fear when Naruto turned his gaze onto her. All forms of courage escaped Rias as she flinched under the glare. Yet Rias had found solace upon her own words. The humans were at her territory, and attacking the sister of the current Lucifer would be punishable by death. Asia on the other hand, feared for what Naruto's dislike of devils would bring forth. I am the sister of Searzek's Lucifer. I will not stand for the laughter. Mocking laughter escaped Naruto's lips as he outright released his mirth upon the face of the naive devil. Semiramis joined in with a giggle of her own, clearly amused by the sudden declaration as well. Nothing more than the laughter of both hero descendants filled the air with little to combat the mockery. Finishing the laugh, Naruto sent her an arrogant smirk. Well then, mongrel, you're pit bastard. Issei bellowed as he charged forward with the boosted gear glowing with magical might. Before he could even reach Naruto, Ddraig sprang into action. Bring his cursed spears forward. The man retaliated with a slash of his spears, successfully slicing the boosted gear along with his shorter spear. Ddraig kicked Issei back, sending the pervert back. Ddraig readied his demonic spear once again with a frown marring his features. I, Ddraig Uadwivna, shall never forgive anyone whom attempts to attack my lord. You, devil, prepare yourself. Mine honor will not allow such disrespect towards Lord Naruto. The first issue Issei noticed was not the stinging pain of his newly acquired wound, but the lack of power multiplication from his sacred gear. It had been more than 10 seconds already and his Longinus had not double his power. You have noticed, my demonic spear, Guy Ddraig, the Crimson Rose of Exorcism severs the connection between magical enhancements and its source. Your boosted gear allows you to multiply your strength twice its amount, but, with Guy Ddraig's curse, the boosted gear's ability is rendered useless. A horrified expression disfigured Issei and Rios' visages as the two looked at Dyrmund. Such a powerful ability from the spear had neutralized a Longinus in a single strike. The sheer potential with the spear was enough to draw on the greed all devils held from within. Severing the connection between Issei and the Red Dragon Emperor was an admirable feat. It only paved way for more questions to surround the demonic spear. Rios was quick to react, shrouding herself in an aura of demonic red magic, directing a blast towards Dyrmund, slashing the bolt away. Rios looked upon the spear in shock. Her power of destruction had never failed in vaporizing weapons before. Then a thought of realization struck her. Perhaps it was the curse placed upon the spear that had allowed it to neutralize magical connections. Let's leave our servants to fight, shall we, devil? Naruto mused whilst calling forth the gate of Babylon, showering the space behind him with a sea of weaponry. If you wish to fight so much, then I shall grace you with my presence. Bounding forward, Asia shook off the moments of fear and approached her beloved brother with confidence exploding upon her visage. Placing herself between him and Rios, the blonde nun drew looks of curiosity whilst she stood before her brother with defiance obvious in the actions performed. Semiramis marveled at the girl's willingness to face Naruto. The latter's legendary anger resulted in the deaths of many individuals that had disrespected him. Now, faced with an overly spoiled devil, the witch wondered how she remained alive thus far. Many have died for much less. Big brother, please, they help me. Asia pleading with desperation in her eyes, hoping to stop her beloved brother from eradicating her first friend and his master. Naruto remained silent as he held a steady gaze with his sister, neither willing to back down from their decision. Both siblings held the silent battle. Relaxing his shoulders, Naruto snapped his fingers and the golden majesty of halos illuminating the space behind him vanished, leaving no signs of their presence. Eyeing his sister for a minute longer, Naruto beckoned for her to follow as he began to leave the school grounds. Remember this, devil, Asia's benevolence has saved your pitiful lives for this much longer. Next time we cross paths, expect your numbers to be reduced. My tolerance only extends thus far, pray we do not meet. Completing his words, a flight of doves shrouded the four hero descendants in their welcomed shadows. Vanishing, the four that had once been in the center of the birds too followed the example of the birds, leaving behind only a group of dazed devils. Yet, they had not gone through this situation unscathed. Issei had lost the connection between himself and the Red Dragon Emperor. For how long the effects of the curse lasted none of them knew. All that was on Rios' mind was the upcoming raiding game that was to decide her future. Inside the Hanging Gardens, Naruto had returned to his room without a single word to Asia. Residing in the darkened room without much light illuminating it from the incoming darkness. Naruto's piercing blue eyes bore directly into the welcomed shadows. The door leading into his room were forcefully opened as light flicked into existence, slaying the shadows and bringing forth light to quell the arising darkness. Semiramis shuffled to Naruto's side without a care for the glare sent her way. Ignoring the deathly glares had become almost of a habit. Spending so much time with the blonde, the glares of annoyance never really meant much compared to the outrage he had shown at times deemed necessary. Are you not going to offer a lady a seat? Semiramis asked with the ever so graceful smile gently stretching her lips. I care little if you sit or stand, Naruto mused as he stared at the chess set. Tell me, have you any news of the fragments I have been asking for? Yes, the so-called Excalibur fragments have all been located by my doves, it was only been a matter of taking them. Prompting her to continue, Naruto already knew a complication had arisen. There had been little times he had been able to operate without an issue coming up with the plan, forcing him to compromise. The churches holding them had already been attacked. I only managed to secure one of the blades left untouched by the chain of attacks. The others have been lost or still remain in the possession of new holy sword wielders, that much I am certain of. What of the stolen ones? Any clue as to who had stolen them from the church before we could? No. Though I do have my suspicions, the devils are immediately out of the equal. They possess no members able to wield holy swords without hurting themselves in the process. The fallen angels are more likely, possessing quite the intricate network of spies. They are some of the more likely candidates. Unlike the devils, they can wield holy swords without pain in return. Other factions are questionable as well. though many care little for other factions, so it is less likely than the fallen angels. Very well then, I want the blades found, Semiramis merely smiled in response. Finding comfort in the soft cushion she sat on, with the conversation dying down. The witch decided to have her fun, leaning forward. Semiramis eliminated the distance between their faces to a paltry number of inches. Even though they were inches apart, Naruto kept his calm demeanor. His reaction was not the one Semiramis was looking for as she leaned forward, cutting the distance between themselves even further, stopping her attempts to fluster him. Naruto pushed her back and flicked her forehead in retaliation, rubbing her forehead in annoyance. Semiramis left in a huff. Pesky woman, Naruto muttered with hints of amusement laced into his voice. As she left, Naruto returned his attention to the chess set, lips twitched upwards. The neutral gaze he had wore was shattered by the ghost of a smile, undeniably so. The smallest hints of a smile played on his lips, though he would not admit it. The Uzumaki found her attempts quite amusing, refusing to give her the satisfaction of victory. Naruto was adamant on winning the little challenge Semiramis had issued. Inside the busy kitchens of the Hanging Gardens, Asia gingerly stirred the heated pot placed before her. A serene smile had snaked its way onto her countenance. Watching her purposefully work, a number of workers had eyed her with curiosity rolling off of them in waves. Here she was, Asia Argento, the supposed guest of one of the faction's founding members. Naruto Uzumaki worked tirelessly on a dish. The look of determination that had taken residence upon her face had been enough to quell all offers of assistance. The situation had lasted for no longer than a few minutes before the blonde girl had vanished into the background, returning to their work of preparing meals for the hungry heroes. The kitchen was soon buzzing with activity once again. An hour had ended with a cheer of joy escaping Asia as her smile exploded into existence. Resting on the counter was a steaming bowl of broth and noodles, glistening under the dim lighting. The bright smile that had encased her very being continued to brighten as seconds ticked by and anticipation guided her actions. Gently placing the noodles onto a tray, careful not to spill the contents, Asia happily grabbed hold of the tray and began making her way out of the kitchen. Navigating through a maze of hallways and a sea of occupants, Asia headed straight for the quarters. It was not long until she had found herself staring at the door leading into her brother's room. Knocking in an enlivened fashion, Asia waited patiently for an answer. Her smile never dimmed. Minutes passed without an answer from the other side. Making up her mind, Asia tested the door and found it unlocked. Venturing inside with the meal in hand, the young nun found herself inside a well-kept room adorned with a number of decorations. Taking in everything, Asia placed the cooked ramen on the desk and looked around once again. Big brother must be out training again, Asia thought. As her eyes scanned the room, a slightly opened desk drawer caught her attention. Uncertainty washed over her as a small debate between her curiosity and manners ignited. Finally, in what seemed like hour-long minutes, Asia had decided to take a look inside to satisfy the growing curiosity. Quickly positioning herself on the desk's other side, the blonde nun pulled the slightly open drawer, allowing herself to gaze at the contents stored inside. Even though the drawer contained a number of interesting objects, Asia's gaze fell directly onto the picture frame resting face down inside. Grabbing hold of the frame, a spark of recognition filled her eyes. Compared to the luxuries her brother boasted, the simple frame decorated in a childish manner was pathetic compared to the other riches he possessed. The frame was orange in color and had small yellow stars plastered along the edges, giving it a homemade feeling. Upon seeing the picture frame, Asia's eyes sparkled in joy. During their time spent in the church as orphans, the two siblings only had one another. Celebrating holidays and birthdays had brought forth a lackluster of handmade gifts incomparable to the possessions professionally made. The picture frame was one of the many prosaic gifts Asia had given to her dear brother. Seeing how the gift remained relatively the same since she had given it to him, her smile grew in size. Asia knew her brother loved her. There was little doubt, but, after his disappearance, a small hinge of uncertainty had spiked in her heart. That uncertainty still remained. Compared to their worry-less childhood, Naruto had been far more distant as of late. Doubts revolving around her brother's feeling towards herself had all been vanquished upon sight of the frame. In comparison to other gifts that had seemed grandeur, that simple frame she had given was frankly dull. Yet, here it was, still in his possession. How much her brother treasured the gift had warmed Asia's heart greatly. Gazing at the picture safely tucked inside the frame, memories of the past flooded her mind. The aging picture was taken years ago, with both her and Naruto standing in front of Dulio. Asia remembered that day. It had been her birthday. Dulio had been kind enough to take them out to enjoy a fair. Those were simpler times, just the three of them together. How much she yearned to see those days again. Naruto, how have you been, little brother? Naruto, whom had been tiring himself out in his ever-so-painful training regime, jumped upon hearing the all-too-familiar voice, turning to face the originator of the voice. Naruto bit back the indescribable emotions that erupted inside his heart. Standing there with a gentle smile drawn upon his lax features was Dulio himself. Grabbed in the traditional robes of an exorcist, Dulio continued to smile, masking his nervousness that had forcefully invaded his heart. Both joy and anger marred Naruto's features as his fists clenched upon the sword he held. How Dulio had managed to find him was an immense breach in security. "What are you doing here, Dulio?" Naruto finally asked with his emotions kept at bay. "For 2 reasons, Dulio responded as he calmly walked through the maze of weaponry, "to apologize for my inability to protect Asia, and to ask you to stop pursuing your foolish goal. Leave trihexa alone. The beast cannot be slain without the powers of both Great Red and Ophis. Facing it is comparable to scaling a never-ending mountain." Anger flared to life as Naruto attempted to rein in his emotions. The attempts were vain. The explosion of both anger and frustration had come in the form of words. "Then I will find another way. Weren't you the one who taught me hard work and determination could accomplish any goal? The Uzumakis, my family, have been hunted down for centuries. With our blood being the only key to awaken trihexa, we are the targets of both good and evil. Those that wish to force trihexa to sleep forever and those who wish to awaken it. I have to kill it, even if I die. Without trihexa, the Uzumakis no longer have to suffer." Dulio flinched at the words, using his own teachings against him. Even so, it did not stop his own frustration from expressing his view on the situation. "Then what about Asia? If you die, then what about her? I can't just let you throw your life away. We have been through far too much. Think about her, would you? How would she feel if you died?" "I am thinking about her," Naruto bellowed. The blade he held onto shivered under his intense grip as the clash of ideals between brothers began. "Asia's life was entrusted to me. For the future of the clan, for her future, I have to kill trihexa. She already suffered enough being an Uzumaki." Dulio stamped both his feet in frustration and anger. What Naruto spoke was true. The Uzumakis had been hunted down to near extinction for uncontrollable reasons. Possessing Uzumaki blood already painted a target on one's back. The mindset of many wished for the death of all whom possessed Uzumaki blood. Be it child or adult, if no Uzumakis walked the earth, then the blood seals placed upon trihexa would forever remain in place, giving no chance for people whom wished to awaken it a chance to do so. That was how Dulio had found the 2. He could still remember it, coming off as an exorcist in training. Dulio had found the 2 siblings huddling inside a ruined fireplace. Their village had been wiped out. Family, friends, elders, neighbors, all gone. That was when he had taken them in. After all, fellow orphans had to stick together, right? "My lord, I will be taking my leave." Dulio stole a glance at the approaching figure and relented with a sigh, giving Naruto one more look. The exorcist retreated into the woods, feeling much worse than he had felt before the talk. The attempt in talking Naruto out of his outrageous plan was for naught. Opportunities would still arise. If they did not, he would make opportunities. For now, he would leave. A fight was unnecessary between the 2. Naruto acknowledged the haunting words with a nod. The explosion of anger had left him emotionally taxed. Yelling at Dulio, someone he had looked up to for as long as he could remember, was not a pleasant experience. Sure, the 2 had tussled. What friends didn't? No, this was different. It was the idea of fighting Dulio that had been the real pain. To bring himself to fight his friend, the one whom had taken him in and taught him of the world, yet, none of it had effected his determination. In fact, it had only strengthened it. Rizevim was in a joyous mood. How could he not be? With all his plans and schemes falling into place, there left plenty of room for pleasure. With a sickening smile twisting his pale features, and a glass of blood-red wine situated in a hand, the son of Lucifer sat upon an extravagant throne, inside the lavish room. The throne, like all others, was built to draw attention towards it. Decorated with gold and other forms of precious materials, it could only be described as grand, for decorative purposes rather than necessity. Imposing stone pillars stood dignity like sentinels. Beside him, with a tray which a bottle of wine sat, Euclid stood firmly beside his lord with his unmatched emotion-free expression, filling the room with sickening laughter. Rizevim conveyed his happiness through a lengthy laugh. "My lord, is it not best to dispose of the bodies?" Euclid asked. "Oh, don't worry so much, Euclid. Worry is bad for the skin," Rizevim cheerfully responded with a wave of the hand. "Have Marius handle it. Enjoy yourself, Euclid. My plans are almost complete." Euclid relented and returned to his former action, unwillingly spread across the grand floor. Bodies of various vampires littered the Polish ground. oozing out profound amounts of blood, killed in unimaginable ways. The bodies were left there by ever so cheerful Rizevim as he enjoyed the pleasantries offered by wine. Inside Tepes' castle, a ritual was currently in the works. Valerie Tepes, the current wielder of the Sephiroth Graal, to make contact with the principle of life, in order to proceed with his plan, to awaken trihexa. The dead needed to be brought back to life. The necessary conditions had to be met, to awaken the apocalyptic beast. It was comparable to waging war against the world. He was in need of a force to complete an ambition he had worked tirelessly on. Euclid, is the Sephiroth Graal ready? No, my lord, Marius is still working on the extraction. Rizevim responded with a nod of his head. Nothing could ruin the joyous mood now. Everything was going according to plan. All he desired now was the blood of an Uzumaki, that could easily be acquired. He simply needed to slaughter a few more humans, get the last Uzumaki's attention and then kidnap him. Easy. Though the only issue would be the hero faction that he currently headed. Though Cao Cao officially ruled over the hero faction, it was no secret Naruto Uzumaki held a massive amount of influence over the faction, with a large number of supporters backing him. A struggle for power between the two would soon come to life. If he played his cards right, Rizevim could secure the help of Cao Cao and the Uzumaki. Euclid, I need you to meet up with our friend, Cao Cao from the hero faction, Rizevim cheerfully ordered as he drained his glass of wine with a withering smile. Give him the information I have given you, then let him go and play with the Uzumaki. At once, my lord. Euclid inclined his head and bowed, forming a teleportation circle with a flick of his wrist. Euclid proceeded forward and left Rizevim to enjoy his wine. Mordred grunted in annoyance as she walked the halls of the Hanging Garden with a scowl marring her features. Undeniably angry with an issue best left alone, the descendant of the traitorous knight stomped through the halls, drawing attention from other occupants as she did so, drawing forth a growl of anger. Mordred sent withering glare at Semiramis, whom only stood at the hallway's end with a smirk adorning her features. The anger that had been residing in her heart exploded into activity upon the sight of Semiramis. The witch always managed to make her blood boil, even with a simple smile. Oh, Mordred, how nice of you to arrive tardy again. Semiramis tutted with her smile widening when she caught sight of the anger influencing Mordred's actions. Naruto is going to be very pleased. Just lead the way, witch, Mordred growled. Semiramis huffed at the epithet, while originally orchestrated by Naruto. She never really taken a liking to the displeasing name. Preferring something more beautiful in comparison to her unsavory nickname, Semiramis never lived down the name as others continuously reminded her of the unlikable name, though the usage of the name only came from either Naruto or Mordred. Having someone such like the descendant of the traitorous knight use the name only angered her. Perhaps it was the annoyance for the woman she had grown during their time together, or perhaps she simply desired to tease the young woman out of boredom. Proceeding forward, an illusionary wall that had sat at the hall's end shimmered out of existence, allowing both women to bypass the reassurance. Placed behind the illusionary wall was a door, leading into a room built specifically for meetings best left in secret. Beckoning for her to follow, Semiramis ushered Mordred inside the room and cast a swift illusion with a flick of the wrist. There was no need for anyone to find out about the events of this meeting. Information exchanged in these secretive gatherings was not for everyone. Killing someone for hearing anything would be a shame. Inside the dimly lit room, Naruto sat at the far end with Deermood situated beside him with a stern expression set in stone. Among the gathered members, Avabran, a tall man garbed in fully bodysuit along with a blue mantle, a featureless golden mask shrouded his face, preventing anyone from looking upon his face, was present. An immediate reaction came from Mordred, with a raised brow, seated herself far away from Semiramis and turned her confusion onto the other members. Meetings such as these were filled with more than 5 members, thus leading to the birth of a question. The other members are away, Naruto said as he answered the unasked question. Citing the odd look sent by Mordred, Naruto held back a snort of amusement whilst scanning the gathered members before nodding his head in acceptance. Now, since everyone is here, let us begin. Confirmation of consent by the various members were in various forms, a simple nod from Rizevim, a flirtatious smirk by Semiramis, and lastly, a grunt from Mordred. A final glance was sent to every member before Naruto relaxed in his seat, in preparation for the meeting ahead. Motioning from Semiramis to begin, the witch merely smiled before gathering the attention onto herself with a cough. My doves have learnt of a meeting between Cao Cao and a devil, Semiramis began. Glancing at the neutral expression sent her way, the witch continued, though I was unable to listen in on the entire conversation, I have more than enough information to conclude their actions. The devil had a proposition from his master. A mention of cleansing the hero faction was said by Cao Cao. TCH, that bastard. Mordred snarled with distaste lacing her voice, "We can't just sit here. If he wants a fight, then we give him one. As expected from a brute such as yourself, waving that sword of yours without any thought. You damned witch." Shaking his head with a sigh escaping his lips. Naruto watched on as the two battled it in a fight of words. With snide remarks from Semiramis and cheap insults dealt by Mordred, it was beginning to look like every other verbal spat the two participated in. Beckoning for Deermood to break up the fight, Naruto entangled his fingers and leaned forward onto the table in an attempt to hide the amused smile playing along his lips. Once Deermood had regained control in the room, Naruto forced his smile to die down before he garnered every occupant's attention. "As you can see, Cao Cao has aligned himself with the devils. There is no escaping the fight Cao Cao is preparing for. That is why I ask you all here. I want to push our plans ahead of schedule if possible," Naruto said, allowing the words to sink in before continuing. "Ivesebren, I need to know how many golems you have created." Ivesebren, the member whom had remained silent the entire time, acknowledged the question with a nod before speaking in a voice filled with neutrality. "The Gogmagogs you asked me to reproduce have been delayed. I am currently studying their magic enchantments made by the ancient gods. Though the progress is slow, the other golems have been coming along quickly. I managed to reproduce 400 of them so far." A pleased smile crossed Naruto's as a nod of both gratitude and acceptance was sent towards Ivesebren. Accepting the talented magician into his ranks had been a very beneficial decision. Ivesebren, the descendant of Solomon ibn Gabriel, had inherited not only his ancestors' Latinized name, but his work as well, studying the vast amount of knowledge his ancestor had managed to accumulate. Ivesebren had been keen on continuing the research of Solomon. The ultimate goal in creating the golem of all golems had been left incomplete, and thus Ivesebren worked tirelessly in order to complete the ultimate golem. Finding work under Naruto had been an opportunity that had been beneficial to both parties. While Naruto provided him resources and protection, Ivesebren in return provided Naruto a vast number of destructive golems. "Semiramis, what about the fragments?" "I found them." The fragments had been stolen by a rogue exorcist by the name of Fried Selzen who now works under the priest Valpyr Gallier. The only fragments left are wielded by two church exorcists, Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shidu. None of them pose a real threat to our members. "Good. I want them found." And lastly, Mordred, is the Sephiroth Graal ready for extraction? "Yes. But that bastard Marius made another deal with the devil. They are probably extracting the sacred gear at this point." Mordred scowled with displeasure marring her features. "Tepes castle is under heavy fortification and is filled with vampires. It's going to be hard to get the Sephiroth Graal, Uzumaki." Naruto frowned at those words before a look of realization crossed his features, bringing forth a smile, turning to Mordred whom looked pained with her bruised ego. Naruto's mind was already racing. Marius had never been reliable. Denying them of the Sephiroth Graal was an obvious declaration of war. "Then storm the castle," Naruto declared, drawing raised brows from every member. "Since Ivesebren has been so kind to provide us with a small army of golems, we will use it to regain what was promised to us. I want you to take 20 golems with you to sack Tepes castle." Directing the order at Mordred, Naruto watched as a sinister smile arose from the ashes of the scowl. The prospect of gaining revenge on Marius was enough to draw her in. To sack an entire castle, that was an opportunity that was scarce in a lifetime. Accepting the orders wholeheartedly, Mordred pondered on the possible outcomes with the smile still in place. That smile she wore only fell when Naruto's next sentence became audible. "Semiramis, I want you to assist her. If they have not finished extracting the sacred gear, do not let them. I can handle this alone, Uzumaki. I don't need help from the witch." Mordred scowled with anger burning into existence. "My decision is final. The two of you will work together." Mordred growled in defeat as she saw the determined gaze sent her way. When it came to decisions, Naruto remained stubborn as a mule. Unwilling to back down at some of the worst situations, the descendant of the traitorous knight honestly could say arguing was useless. Semiramis took the orders with a smile. Though the smile held traces of annoyance, Mordred and Semiramis working together was going to be a sight. If they were able to work together, a dangerous combination they would become. That is if they did not kill each other before attacking Tepes castle. Naruto had finished the meeting with relative ease after the orders had been issued. Though a few amusing spats between the two females had ignited, nothing of importance had been dabbled on, heading for his room with intentions of rest. Naruto had found company along his path. Asia, who had been in a hurry to reach Naruto's room, cursed her luck with a mouth unsuspected of a nun. Having ran into Naruto during her dash for the other blonde's room was an ending to her attempt in recovering the now ruined ramen. Unable to predict his return, Asia had left the ramen there for the blonde to eat when he had returned. With no signs of his return, Asia had realized the dish she had created was now ruined. Asia, what are you doing here? Naruto asked with a raised brow. I wanted to spend more time with you, big brother. Asia shouted through a rush of thoughts. It only took a second before realization dawned upon the nun. Clasping her hands over her mouth, Asia froze with her blue eyes enlarged in shock. The random thought had been sudden and desperate, though it held some form of truth. Naruto eyed his sister closely before a sad smile twisted into existence. Accepting her brash answer with a second smile, Naruto guided her forward as the words Duilio had spoken returned. Focusing on the statement made by the strongest exorcist, Naruto had completely encased himself around the possibilities if his plans were to be fulfilled. Big brother, are you okay? Oh, I am fine, Asia. Shaking away the thoughts, Naruto entered the room not before giving his sister a confused look. A small yelp that had escaped Asia was quickly smothered by the raging blush that turned her face tomato red. Smiling further, Naruto entered the room without anything to stop him. Upon his entry, Naruto had immediately spotted the tray and bowl resting against his desk. Perplexed by the appearance of the bowl, the blonde's eyes focused on the soggy noodles lazily swimming around the gentle broth. Asia, who had been watching the entire reaction, winced at the lack of words, shuffling nervously. The young nun played with her fingers in an attempt to quell the nervousness that had invaded her mind. Big brother, why you don't have to eat that? IJ just made that and I. Asia's sentence forever remained unfinished as her eyes widened in shock. Naruto, who had been staring at the noodles with a questionable glance, had seated himself and began dining on the ruined dish. Reining in her surprise and hurriedly moving to his side, Asia attempted to stop her brother from consuming the dish with no form of success. Big brother, you don't have to eat that. You cooked this for me, right? Naruto asked after downing another mouthful of brother and soggy noodles. Receiving a nod in response, Naruto merely snorted before continuing the meal. If my sister made me a meal, then I won't let it go to waste. After his declaration, Naruto returned to his meal, leaving Asia there to watch. A surge of warmth filled Asia's heart as she watched her brother dine. Yet, the feelings did not stop there. Nostalgia soon came into existence. Seeing her brother eat an unsavory meal that she had created reminded the blonde nun so much of the past. A smile full of warmth and joy crossed her visage. Asia could not help herself. The gap that had been erected between the two was finally being broken down. The hope of reigniting their relationship as children had only grown stronger. As for Naruto, his own determination had exploded. The simple gesture of cooking his favorite meal had been enough to erase all traces of doubt. Then and there, the two promises that had driven him in life repeated themselves like a mantra, fueling his determination. He would slay Trihexa, he would protect Asia. Tepes' castle was under lockdown. Shrouded in the light of dawn, a small army of vampires stood in the courtyard. Armed and ready for the battle, garbed in differing sets of armors. Nervousness could easily be depicted from their twisted visages. Marius stood before them, dressed in a set of golden armor that sparkled under dawn's first set of rays. Aside from the nervousness that had overtaken them, the army of vampires with Marius at its head remained unmoving inside the stone walls. Sentries were placed atop the walls, overlooking the open space outside the castle. With no reports of approaching invaders, Marius still refused to dismiss the soldiers. The fear of the enemy attacking after he dismissed the soldiers plagued his mind. Just outside the stone walls was an army of massive golems, large and imposing, along with bodies made of bronze and stone. The gleaming red eyes remain in the shadows provided by the surrounding trees. Lord Marius, there is no sight of the enemy, a scout said with fatigue marring his face. It is safe to allow the army to rest. My lord, there is no need to tire out our troops before the siege. Silence. Marius hissed, sending a sharp blow to the scout's cheek. You're a soldier. Thinking is not something a soldier does. Get back to your position before I punish you for disrespecting me. Bowing his head, the scout hurried away from Marius while nursing his wound with anger flashing in his eyes. Among the gathered vampires, anger was a popular emotion towards Marius. Only second to resentment obvious in their tired eyes. 10 hours, the soldiers had been standing there, 10 hours in the uncomfortable armors issued by Marius. 10 hours of pure agony, exposed to the elements, the armor that all soldiers were splattered with raindrops. Hunger and thirst came hand in hand. Ever since their formation inside the courtyard, there was little water or food distributed to the soldiers. Unwilling to lose a single body, Marius continued to drive his men like animals, refusing them the necessities that any living being would need in order to survive. Delusional with fear, Marius knew little of the horrors awaiting him. Uzumaki. What are you doing here? Mordred growled with annoyance obvious in her tone. You said I was to take the castle. I am here for the Sephiroth Grawl, Naruto grunted. I will let you have your fun with the vampires while Semiramis and I will look for the Longinus. Fine, but, I get to kill Marius. If he does not have the Longinus then he could be your plaything for all I care. Inside the woods outside of Tepes castle, a small brigade of golems stood lifelessly. A small camp had been erected by the two female members of the faction. While Mordred discussed with Naruto in a clearing, Semiramis happily remained at the campsite. Situated at the campfire, Semiramis held a devious smile while she mixed whatever ingredients held inside a pot. An intoxicating aroma swirled around the pot, signifying its completion. Even at the distance, both Naruto and Mordred could smell the aroma. Two possibilities came forth from the smell. Either Semiramis was cooking lunch or the witch was working on another form of poison, though Naruto had already assumed the latter. Being wrong in such an occasion could be pleasant. Trekking back towards the campsite, both hero descendants shared no more words, allowing the seductive smell to guide them. Ah, you two are back, Semiramis mused while the smile she wore never left her. Good, I believe we can begin the operation. Mordred grunted in response before walking to the pot that Semiramis had left to the flames. Taking a look at the darkened liquid inside, Mordred shrugged her shoulders and reached for a ladle which rested on against a rock. Dipping it into the supposed soup, Mordred brought it closer for a smell. Accepting the substance's rich smell, Mordred brought the ladle closer to her lips with the intent of drinking the soup. Naruto, who had been studying the layout of the castle, eyed the soup before he cleared his throat, catching his fellow blonde's attention. Mordred, that's poison, Naruto said in a rather nonchalant manner. Semiramis would never cook anything aside from poison, you should know this by now. Dumping the ladle and poison back into the pot, Mordred's eyes widened with anger bursting from her cool blue orbs. Turning to face the mistress of poison, Mordred sent her an anger-driven glare that could have killed. Semiramis, who had been watching the entire exchange, for the most part, held an innocent facade. Any man easily tempted by beauty would have fallen for it. Neither of the blondes acknowledged the innocence as anything but false. Naruto merely continued his study of the castle while Mordred had other intentions. Stomping towards the witch, Mordred tore her blade from its sheath, fully intending to behead Semiramis. You bitch. You were going to let me drink the poison, weren't you? Mordred growled with her sword inches away from the witch's neck. Oh heavens no, it was my mistake. I must have been too busy to have noticed you attempting to drink the poison. Oh, my apologies, this will never happen again. Semiramis called out, with sarcasm leaking from her voice. The response only managed to anger Mordred further. Before the woman could enter a deathmatch, Naruto interrupted their spat. He was sure Semiramis wouldn't have killed Mordred, or he was sure, at the moment, not so much. Enough. Save the fighting for the vampires. Grumbling in protest, Mordred sheathed her blade and stomping away from Semiramis. Though Naruto's words had acclaimed the issue was over, Mordred did not have the same feelings as her fellow blonde. She would have her revenge in one way or another. For now, she would play down her emotions. Marius came first. That bastard was worse than Semiramis, to some degree. Ddraig was a man of honor, when taken in by his lord. He had sworn an oath that would bind him even in death. An oath to forever stand by his lord's side no matter the time, no matter the place. Having been ordered to remain in the Hanging Gardens was rather unpleasant for his part. While he accepted the orders without hesitation, a small wedge of displeasure had taken residence in his heart. There was no doubt Naruto could take care of himself. Saying he was defenseless was a far cry from the truth. It had felt as if he was indirectly breaking his oath. Or perhaps it was the prospect of his lord fighting an unknown enemy that had brought forth such emotions. None of that mattered now. Left with an order from the man he had sworn his life to, Ddraig now focused his mind all on that single task, guarding Asia, no matter the costs, keep her safe. With tension between Naruto and Cao growing by the day, it was obvious both sides were willing to clash at any time. For now, Naruto had prioritized Asia's safety overall. Lady Asia, it is I, Ddraig announced as he gave a gentle knock on the wooden door. May I come in? Receiving a yes in response, Ddraig pushed the wooden door open and entered with a tray of food in hand. Naruto had insisted the former nun be moved to his room while he was away, thus leaving Asia under the care of both Ddraig and Avicebron. If Cao ever decided to flirt with death and have one of his subordinates capture Asia, he'd have to get through an army of golems and Ddraig to ever lay a hand on Asia. With that, Naruto had left to personally retrieve the Longinus, leaving Ddraig behind to act as a bodyguard, a task he had grown accustomed to. Lady Asia, I have brought breakfast as you have requested, Ddraig said, carrying the tray towards the table where Asia sat behind. Is there anything I can help you with? Asia, whom had been seated behind her brother's desk, merely gave Diarmuid a smile before a thoughtful expression crossed her face, debating whether or not to ask the question she had failed to do with the other members of her brother's faction. Asia continued to ponder on the action while Diarmuid waited patiently, not a minute longer. Asia had worked up courage to ask the stoic knight her question in mind. Mr. Diarmuid, can you tell me about Miss Semiramis and Big Brother's relationship? Years of training had managed to force the surprise out of his face and kept it under wraps. The question had been an unexpected one to say the least. Rarely did questions involving Naruto ever tie with Semiramis. Though the question itself brought on a question of his own, sure, Asia was different than others, but it did not stop Diarmuid to wonder why. Glancing at the other Uzumaki, Diarmuid racked his thoughts for an acceptable answer before responding to the question. Such questions were foreign to him, especially when it involved his lord. Hardly did one ever ask about the blonde's relations with others. Most questions involved combat abilities and such, never about relationships. Lord Naruto's relationship with Lady Semiramis is one I am uncertain of. Why do you ask Lady Asia? Diarmuid said with his own curiosity pushing forward the last portion of words. Oh, I asked Miss Semiramis about Big Brother, and she mentioned they had a special relationship. Diarmuid blinked at Asia's words as he thought of them with a critical mind. What Semiramis had told Asia was not far from the truth. How else would you describe the relationship between an assassin and her boss? Though Diarmuid could come up a number of ways of describing the relationship, knowing Semiramis, the mistress of poison, only wanted to agitate Naruto when Asia came to ask him about the special relationship. No one really knew about the inner workings of Semiramis' mind. The woman was far too random for anyone to predict. After all, the woman had been very willing to poison her family without a thought of remorse nor any signs of hesitation. Lady Asia. What else did Lady Semiramis tell you about the Lord? Nothing much, she just said Big Brother is interesting. Giving Asia a nod of thanks, Diarmuid bowed his head and left the room before the nun could continue the conversation. Even after the years, the uncertainty around Semiramis' loyalty still remained. The woman was far too unpredictable for one to plan against. Formerly a member loyal to Cao Cao, Diarmuid worried for what the woman was planning. Among every member working for Naruto, Diarmuid worried about Semiramis the most. A woman who had an intricate web of spies in the form of her doves. She was also unmatched in the use of poison, having no shame in her actions nor clear remorse. Diarmuid had been expecting the descendant of the wise queen of Assyria to poison Naruto sooner or later. His distrust stemmed from the woman's tendency to act behind the backs of everyone. It did not help that Naruto even admitted to the possibilities of the doubts either. Even so, Diarmuid could never understand why Naruto trusted Semiramis so much. Acknowledging the possibilities of her being a traitor and not acting on the knowledge was one of the many questionable acts Naruto had performed in his time. Leaving the room behind, Diarmuid had positioned himself out of the room with both of his demonic spears in hand and a stern expression in place. Vanquishing his thoughts in favor of his duty, Diarmuid's eyes narrowed when they caught sight of Siegfried walking down the empty halls with a smile shining brilliantly upon his visage. A happy Siegfried was an unwelcoming sight. There were little that could bring out a full-blown smile from the descendant of Siegfried. And a fight was among the small list of occasions. Tightening his grip on both weapons, Diarmuid sent Siegfried a glare. Receiving nothing more than a growing smile in response, Diarmuid shifted his body to face the other hero descendant. Mimicking Diarmuid's actions, Siegfried unsheathed his own weapons. Gram, the strongest demon sword, now resided on Siegfried's right hand. Siegfried, what are you doing here? Diarmuid asked while he busied himself with studying his opponent. Cao Cao wanted to push forward with his plans. I am here to tie up some loose ends, Siegfried said with his smile now threatening to split his own face. You know how long I have been waiting for this. Diarmuid remained silent as he readied himself for a fight. Whatever Cao Cao had been planning, Asia was going to be dragged in the middle of it. From what Siegfried had said, Cao Cao was adamant on having him killed. Sending one of the most suicidal fighters amongst his ranks was an obvious sign of that. Siegfried cared little for his own life, utilizing abilities that shortened his lifespan. The man was adamant on enjoying himself in the midst of a life-threatening fight. This was a fight he could not afford to lose. Even if it took his life, he would not allow Siegfried to win this fight. Very well then, shall we begin? Neat place you have here, Avi. Avicebron, who stood upon a podium inside his dimly lit laboratory, stopped working when he heard those words. Gently placing the tools he held onto a tray where others rested, Avicebron stared at the origins of the words with his expression hidden by the featureless mask. Standing at the entrance of his once secret laboratory graciously provided by Naruto, was Jean, rapier in hand. The descendant of Joan of Arc smiled cheerfully. displaying no signs of worry over the small army of golems standing behind Ivesiebren. "What are you doing here?" Ivesiebren finally asked after studying Jean for a minute longer. He cared little for how she had found the laboratory, his only concern was why she was in the laboratory. "Cao Cao wanted me to take care of you, Avi," Jean cheerfully replied with a graceful smile adorning her delicate features, "so, here I am." No further questions were needed. Jean had been quite honest in her intentions, thus leaving him no choice but to fight. Raising a hand, Ivesiebren took control of his golems and motioned for them towards the blonde girl that had been casually sitting on a counter. The rumble of movement soon filled the air. 10 golems circled around the girl, slicing all paths of escape as their bronze-infused limbs lifted to strike. Jean remained still with her smile still in place, still without worry. "We don't have to fight, ya know." Ivesiebren eyed the girl strangely as Jean remained seated with a group of golems ready to pummel her. Her sudden declaration had been enough to stop the assault. It would have been a lie if Ivesiebren said he was not interested. All he cared was for the completion of the golem his ancestor failed to finish. Though his perplexed expression was only known to himself, Jean decided to continue while she had his attention. "Cao Cao doesn't want to fight you. If you were to stay out of the fighting, then Cao Cao won't have me attack you," Jean said. "Or you could even join us, with Naruto and Semiramis both gone. The hero faction is in need of members. If you were to join us, Cao Cao would provide you with everything you need, and more. Think about this, Avi." Ivesiebren gave off the impression of thought over the offer. Yet no response came. Jean waited patiently in the circle of golems as she eyed the mask-wearing man with a calculative gaze. Cao Cao had ordered her to convince Ivesiebren to join the true hero faction, as he had called it. If Ivesiebren was unwilling, the offer of neutrality was up for grabs. Even if the offer of membership was declined, having Ivesiebren out of the way eliminated the threat of an opposing magician as well as an army of magically enhanced golems. "It seems I would have to decline, Lady Jean." "Oh, how sad, Avi, then it seems you would have to." "You seem to have misunderstood me, Lady Jean. I am declining both membership and neutrality. Working under Lord Naruto gives me the opportunity to work on the unfinished project left behind by my ancestors, as well as the opportunity to test out the mobility of my creations." Before Jean could even question the words, all golems surrounding her bustled forward with their limbs raised and orders set in stone. What was the worst 3 humans could do to a castle defended by a small army of vampires? After all, humans were both physically and magically weaker than the latter. With disadvantages plaguing their very beings, one could not blame the confidence that the vampires held. No matter how misplaced the confidence was, Tepes Castle, a once lavish construct that had rivaled the greatest of Romanian castles, had aged poorly, damaged by the unstoppable force of time. Marius, whom had indirectly taken rule of both faction and clan, neglected the castle, thus leaving it unsuitable to fight off an invasion. Even so, not a single vampire could say their chances were slim. The vampires had a force of 1,000, faced with an enemy of 2 humans with 20 golems was hardly a challenge. Though they faced such feeble numbers, Marius had been unwilling to take the chance. The stubborn action had a negative result on Marius' chances of surviving the attack. Not only had he turned his own men against him, but the unwillingness to allow his men any form of rest from the strenuous task of patrol had left them weak and bitter. A worrisome combination when a battle was in the future, diminishing both loyalty and morale in one costly mistake. The hero faction had been willing to wait them out, yet Naruto had declined the game of patience. In the history of attacks, all forms had relied on the element of surprise to guard them against the early attacks defenders would hurl upon them. If one soldier managed to scale the walls, then one could claim the siege was a success. For this one in particular, the art of magic was a hindrance for attackers. With abilities that could topple armies, magic gave way for a new branch of warfare. The Tepes faction had it easy, with walls that kept them safe. Naruto had planned to utilize the very thing that the vampires relied on for this attack. With Semiramis brewing a poison that humans would classify as inhumane, both Mordred and Naruto praised the witch for her talents, though the former did so without uttering a word. Poison was a wonderful tool to utilize, a weapon able to wipe out thousands in a matter of seconds, no matter how others were. Semiramis outranked many in the matter of creating such substances. Before they stormed the walls, some poison would be deposited over the Tepes castle walls. "Are you ready?" Semiramis merely smiled at the question. The black doves that rested in the entanglement of branches stared blankly at Naruto, whom had been speaking with Semiramis. At the outskirts of the forest, Mordred stood diligently beside the small pack of lifeless golems with her blade shining under dawn's first rays. The plan was simple: an attack at the break of dawn. The exhausted sentries from the night shift would be careless at the sight of the sun. That was when they would strike. Now, all there was to do was wait. Now, my darlings, fly, Semiramis commanded with a finger on the Tepes castle. Cawing at her words, the doves shot off of the branches and filled the air. Swarming together, the thicket of black feathers soon hovered over Tepes castle. Casting darkness on the vampires, shouts were silenced by the synchronized cries of the doves. Shimmering into existence under the forest's cool shadows, a golden and emerald ark emerged from the gate of Babylon. Naruto, whom had already placed himself on the high-tech ark, turned to face Semiramis and offered her a hand, accepting the gesture with a smile. Semiramis climbed onto the golden ship and made her way towards the throne that sat at the ark's very end. Vimana, the ancient ship that held destructive capabilities that modern ships were unable to recreate, with abilities ranging from fight to the deployment of ancient nuclear warheads, the ship truly put modern-day creations to shame. Armed with an arrangements of ancient machine guns, along with stealth features and biological weapons, Vimana was one of the more destructive objects stored in the gates of Babylon. Let's go, Naruto said as he took his place at the pilot throne. Once we deploy the poison, Mordred will commence with the attack and we will find the Sephiroth Graal. Semiramis nodded her head in response as she stood at Vimana's center. Vimana hummed to life as a burst of speed sent the ancient ark into the heavens. Glistening in the day's first rays, Vimana shot towards the sea of black feathers which shrouded Tepes castle in an impressive display of speed. Like the sun rising to pierce the darkness, Vimana descended onto Tepes castle with doves flocking away from the golden ship. Unlike the sun that brought forth life and a new day, Vimana only brought death, descending from the hull. Containers pelted the courtyard of Tepes castle upon contact. The containers released a hideous haze of black, spreading in a frenzy. The poisonous gas expanded until it soon consumed the entire courtyard, contaminating the air with the deadly plumes of unbreathable chemicals. The effects were instantaneous, like fish out of water. The vampires that had been the first to fall victim to the chemicals began thrashing around, clutching their throats in desperate attempts to release the deadly toxins they had just breathed in. Vampires fell by the dozens, all falling victim to the horrendous chemicals Semiramis had been so keen to deliver. The few that had managed to escape the toxin were left in a state of shock. The walls that had been once claimed impenetrable came crashing down. Massive stone giants crushed the aging walls with no hesitation in their movements. Flooding the death-ridden courtyard, golems marched forward, picking off survivors of the deadly chemical attack. The cries of pain were silenced by the cause of doves shrouding the skies. Valerie Tepes, the head of the House of Tepes and the leader of the Tepes faction, laid lifelessly inside a dimly lit room, face showing no form of emotion one would possess. The Dhampir merely looked off into the distance, already mentally and emotionally damaged from possessing the Sephiroth Graal. She had been exposed to pain offered by the extraction of her sacred gear. Unlike previous wielders of the Sephiroth Graal, her Longinus was subspecies. Possessing not one, but 3 holy grails instead of one, Valerie remained alive after the painful extraction. Now left inside the dark room, she only looked off into the distance. Ethereal shimmers shrouded her vision. Even though one of her 3 holy grails had been extracted, images of the dead still remained. While Valerie stared lifelessly at the spirits, Rizevim had stood happily over her body with a bold smile in place. Well, that was fun, Valerie, Rizevim chuckled with his smile widening. We should have Marius arrange another playdate. No response. Oh, don't be like that, such a look is unfitting of young girls. The door leading inside the room was swiftly opened, allowing Euclid entry. Lord Rizevim, we must leave now. The hero faction has slaughtered their way inside. All the vampires left guarding the gate have been killed, Euclid reported with a bow of his head. There is little time before they find this room. A small group of golems are demolishing this castle as we speak. We must leave now, Lord. Euclid never got to finish his sentence. Silencing the faithful servant was a golden blade that had sheathed itself against the wall mere inches from Rizevim's head. The sudden attack had caught both devils off guard, but their reactions were immediate. Euclid quickly shifted his body to face the attacker with his magical powers flaring into existence. Rizevim merely brushed off the blade with a chuckle as his manipulative eyes focused on the attacker. Standing there with Semiramis by his side was Naruto. Golden halos danced against the air behind him, opening paths for an arrangement of polished weaponry to come forth. Leaving so soon? If words were to describe Rizevim, Lucifer, insane was one of the few which truly captured the man in a single frame, for he rose above the normal levels of mental insanity and personified the very definition. This was a devil who willingly looked for the most destructive force of chaos alive, and the same devil who was going to face a band of heroes with a glowing grin stretched across his features. Ah, my boy, how nice of you to drop by, Rizevim cooed in delight. his crazed eyes shining in unmeasurable joy. "Oh, how I wanted to meet you for so long, my boy. Look at you, all grown up. I remember when you were just a mere boy." Frowning at the words, Naruto snapped his fingers once again and another barrage of weaponry appeared behind him. As if they were shot from a cannon, the weaponry bombarded the two devils in a flash. When the blades, axes, and halberds slammed against a shield of magic erected by the simply dressed devil, Naruto's frown deepened as his will flared and a new weapon appeared, larger than the previous ones. The halberd shimmered with magical might as it floated a second more before launching at the barrier, tearing through the rather powerful shield. Naruto gave the devils little time to recover as more and more weapons rained down upon them. "Oh ho ho, you grew stronger too. You make me so proud, Naruto boy." The voice remained cheerfully teasing as the smokescreen of dust settled and Naruto eyed the now obliterated room with a critical gaze. Standing in the middle of the destruction had been the two devils without a single scratch on their appearance. The two had managed to find a way to bypass his attack and escaped from any possible harm it could have brought. That idea itself angered Naruto. "You're still alive," Naruto said simply. "Oh, Naruto boy, you're going to have to try harder than that to kill little ol me. I didn't survive this long just because of my dashing good looks. I would love to play with you further, but I just need to go. Ta-ta for now, Naruto boy, don't forget to drink your milk." And like that, the man vanished. In a flash of light the two devils were consumed by a surge of magic and disappeared to a location unknown. As the toe vanished, Naruto's eyes narrowed in rage, giving a shout of displeasure. The blonde slammed his hand against the wall and crumpled the stone like paper. The audacious behavior of the man had seemingly struck a chord in the blonde. In his struggle to obtain power against the scornful scoff of the higher powers had helped little in his own reaction to the teasing words of his former opponent. "That bastard." Scowling at the events, Mordred gave a scoff before turning her attention toward the enraged blonde and Semiramis, emotions masked behind her crafty smile. The witch strode forward in long, graceful strides, moving forward without the consent of the enraged Naruto. Semiramis scanned the room the two devils had left from, smile growing at the contents inside. The alluring woman flashed Naruto an all too pleasing smile. "It seems our efforts were not in vain," Semiramis proclaimed, stretching her arms out open. She shifted her body in order to display the contents within the room. Whatever the devils were after, it was not the sacred gear wielder. She's still breathing. Reigning in the burning rage which had consumed him seconds ago, Naruto nodded his head and beckoned for Mordred to approach. Accepting the wordless order, the knight strode right into the room and scooped up the unconscious vampire in her arms. As Mordred walked out with the vampire, Naruto took in the beautiful appearance of the young woman. Her short, bleached blonde hair seemingly shimmered under the small rays of the sun. The pair of sharpened canines in combination to the girl's delicate features. Naruto took notice of the natural beauty the girl wielded. In contrast to Semiramis' seductive beauty, the vampires produced a sense of innocence, rather than raw seduction. "TCH, let's go. That skinny bastard was all talk," Mordred complained in a sharp call. "He didn't even fight me." Accepting the words with another nod, Naruto swiftly turned and led the girls out of the ruined castle. Trudging through the cluster of bodies littered in the halls with bloodstains plastered against the walls, Naruto gave little attention to the gore he had contributed to. Taking a sharp turn toward the courtyard, the blonde hero beckoned for the unmoving golems toward the castle, spreading them all over the ruined structure. Naruto continued to walk forward with the two following silently. "Uzumaki. Why did you send Mordred?" Never finished. In a flash, the crude echoes of destructive explosions filled the air, tearing through the once beautiful Tepes castle. The golems successfully brought down the structure, leaving remnants of the foundation scorched. The sudden sound had brought forth an expression of surprise and awe clashing upon Mordred's visage as Semiramis continued to smirk. "Ah, how cruel, Naruto," for Sao, his vision of the hero faction greatly collided with the image of his dear friends. It had been a small difference at first, but, through the years it had grown to the point where thoughts of mutiny had been a common occurrence. Throughout his years leading alongside the blonde, the subtle changes in his personality had been obvious for quite some time. For the longest time, he had been alone. The only things accompanying the blonde was his own thoughts, but, in the coming weeks, Can notice the change in his longtime friend's behavior. His stern and demanding personality had been, lax, a great deal more subdued than previously. The change was out of nowhere, until he had caught sight of the young girl walking the halls of the castle. Asia Argento, or Asia Uzumaki, had been a resident of the castle for less than a month, and her effects on the battle-hardened warriors were noticeable. The women that supported Naruto were quite fond of the girl, while other male supporters such as Avicebron regarded the girl without much emotion. The more devoted ones such as Dearmood had seemingly devoted his very being to the girl. It was expected, After all, Naruto's faction was built upon loyalty. It was not a surprise after all. Leonardo, go and help Siegfried. While he does not wish to be bothered, I wish for extra insurance we will capture the girl. Cao Cao said as he turned his attention toward the small child seated in the corner of the room, under the shadows. The second leader of the hero faction easily made out the nod of the child. Make sure she comes back alive. Dealing with an enraged Naruto is not a part of my plans. His only response was a second nod. Good, now Heracles, I need you and Georg to slow down Naruto and his party. Cao Cao called out to the remaining members of the room. I need you two to capture Semiramis if you can. If not, kill her. The castle will float without her. The shuffling of footsteps were heard after his words had echoed throughout the room. A gruff grunt had been his only response as his eyes caught sight of his friend and most trusted companion. Georg, prepare a magic circle for transportation. Sending the two of them had been a smart move, in his opinion. While Georg would be extremely useful in buying time for his plans, Heracles would be capable of potentially taking blows from the gate of Babylon. If not, the bloodthirsty descendant of the original Greek hero would be a fine distraction. As the flash of a magic circle enveloped the room, Cao Cao released a humorless chuckle. Here's to us, Naruto. Come on, you witch. Hurry up with that spell of yours. The annoyed voice of Mordred snapped aloud. I want to be out of this bug-infested forest. I have half a mind to leave you in this place. Semiramis responded with a sly smile stretching across her visage. After all, I don't believe our dear Naruto would miss a brute such as yourself. You little before their current spat could even escalate. Naruto raised his hand and uttered, stop. Heeding his words, the two girls turned from each other and focused on their respective tasks. Semiramis was preparing a magic circle for transportation back to the castle while Mordred was tasked with keeping watch. They had not been in the small clearing for long, but it had been enough time to peeve the hot-headed knight. Yet, as the two traded silent glares, Naruto could not shake the dread in his body. His senses had never been truly wrong. He had always followed his gut and it had paid off. As he pondered on the feeling, a tense feeling overcame him as a glowing circle of magic appeared before them. The magic circle was easily identifiable. It belonged to Georg, Cao Cao's right hand. It seems our friends decided to pay us a visit, Mordred muttered. Just as her words were said, two figures appeared from the transportation circle. Georg himself in the magician robes he commonly donned and a brute of man garbed in armor paying homage to the Greeks. The two were easily enough to be identified by Naruto. While he personally knew Georg, the second man, Heracles was only a mentioned member of Cao Cao's supporters during their meetings. Georg, why are you here? Naruto asked, his voice tense and eyes narrowed. Has Cao Cao finally decided to put his plans in motion? His questions were not answered, however. The only response he received was silence as the two regarded them with little emotion playing on their faces. But, for Naruto, the silence had been enough. The two were here under the orders of Cao Cao, and knowing his longtime friend, they were not here for support. Snapping his fingers and forcing a number of portals to open, Naruto readied the weaponry as the two figures remained still. Heh. I wonder what blonde can do. Heracles cackled as he cracked his knuckles and a violent gleam entered his eyes. Don't disappoint me now, blonde. Charging forward in speeds that people in his body type found impossible. The brute brought a fist forward and punched the air. The glowing aura surrounding him seemingly grew and the area surrounding his fist exploded in a flash of magical energy. The explosion could have been a potential kill for Heracles, if he were fighting some low-leveled threats, but Naruto took note of the aura and opted for shield to be summoned before him, shrouding his companions and himself from the explosion. His actions did little to weaken Heracles' determination. Following the first punch, a barrage of explosive punches followed, crashing against the golden shield. Mordred, go for Georg, Naruto ordered. He then turned his attention toward Semiramis. You, finish the portal and keep the girls safe, we will handle these two. Nodding her head, Semiramis continued her work on the portal. While normally, portals were easily enough to finish, the young woman had finally noticed the surroundings. Gone were the blue sky, replaced with a kaleidoscope of colors. Frowning, Semiramis had finally figured out as to why her normal spells had failed. Georg had transported the forest they occupied to the dimension gap. Ya bastard. Quit hiding behind that damn shield. Heracles growled in a fit of annoyed rage. Acknowledging the words with a snap of his fingers, Naruto returned the shield to the treasury as he prepared to take on the enraged brute with his other weapons. Playing defensively was a smart move, but time was not in his favor. Cao Cao had made that clear when he had sent two of his goons to face him, both of them skilled in tactics meant to slow down their opponents, while Georg personified that. Heracles was a mere distraction to keep himself and his companions away from the dimension-lost wielder. jumping back and dodging an explosive punch. Naruto eyed the muscular man shrouded in the explosive aura and considered his options. Quit dodging, you coward. The enraged growl which escaped the lips of Heracles were responded in kind with a barrage of golden weaponry. The numerous objects ranging from blades to halberds demolished the ground where Heracles stood upon, sending a flurry of finely pounded dust and rubble into the air. Eyeing the destruction in wake of his weapons, Naruto's eyes caught the figure of his opponent on the ground, held still by a number of his blades. Walking forward, Naruto called upon a blade as he brushed off the dust still lingering in the air. The end results had been expected. A sacred gear which exploded with physical motion was a seemingly ideal match against his Gate of Babylon. But the sacred gear was nowhere near as powerful as the multiplicity of weaponry resting in the treasury. I expected more, Naruto said aloud, all that talk, and no actions to back it up. Why, you bastard? Heracles howled once again, his eyes filled with murderous rage. I'll kill you, ya here. Ignoring his words, Naruto's attention was entrapped by the raging battle a small distance away. There, Mordred was being kept at a distance by Georg and his wide range of magic, pushing for a ranged fight rather than close quarters where his weakness lied. The rage in Mordred's eyes were obvious as she continued to growl in hatred when her attempts to close in on the magician was stopped by either a spell or the annoying sacred gear of his. Raising the blade, Naruto easily took off the head of the growling brute in a swift flick of his wrist. Semiramis, how goes the spell? It's done, the young woman responded. It should take us to the castle. Sending us into the dimension gap had been quite a plan. But we survived, somehow. Then again, Georg wouldn't be able to survive if he left us unsheltered from it. Good, we are leaving, Mordred. Growling, the blonde swordsman slowly backed away as she held her sword up. Ignoring the words of the other blonde, the enraged woman charged forward and sliced through the bolt of magic which was shot in retaliation. And once again, before her blade was embedded into the flesh of his opponent, Georg quickly vanished from the spot with assistance from his Longinus. Give up, you three will never escape. My abilities are made for such situations. No matter how powerful you three may be, it is no match for my dimension lost. Georg chuckled with a wide smirk stretched across his visage. That sword of yours won't do anything against me if it can't hit me now. Mordred, we are leaving. Naruto called out, now. Backing away reluctantly, Mordred gave the man a death glare as she quickly sprinted back toward her companions. Her retreat was covered by Naruto as a gleaming blade flew overhead and pelted the magician before he could retaliate. Finally, reaching the fore, Mordred gave the other blonde a glare of annoyance as she waited on Semiramis' transportation spell. This isn't over, you bastard. Mordred growled, I'll have your head next time. Leonardo had found himself standing beside Siegfried as the two of them had a stare-off with Dyrmund in the halls. The shadows at his feet were moving slowly, awaiting his commands to form into the monsters of his desire. The two weapon users were glaring at one another as the emotionless child wandered off toward the target. His silent steps were noticed by Dyrmund as he rushed to stop him, only to meet the resistance of Siegfried. As their weapons clashed, Leonardo silently opened the door leading to the target and found himself facing the innocent smile of the girl Cao Cao had wanted. Oh, are you here to play with me? The sweet voice of Asia wondered aloud as her face lit up in a bright smile. Oh, I am so excited. After Big Brother left for his little trip, I could only play with Mr. Dyrmund. Rushing forward, Leonardo immediately prepared his Longinus to create a monster to aid him, only to find himself being dragged forward by the little girl. The shadow vanishing from his feet, Leonardo's silent recoil of the gentle touch was easily noticed by Asia. Raising his eyes to meet the ones of his supposed target, Leonardo found himself nervous. The feeling had been foreign to him. It had never been an emotion he had experienced before. All he felt was the isolation he had experienced for the longest time, an experience that led to his current, emotionless self. No emotions had been experienced for the longest time under Cao Cao. But, here he was, standing before the girl he was supposed to capture, too nervous to make a move. As the emotions buried deep in his body played out, he found himself asking a simple question: why? I am not going to hurt you, I just want to play. Feeling the edges of his mouth twitch into a barely unnoticeable frown, Leonardo almost snorted at her words. The little girl truly did not know about him. Unlike the other kids in his orphanage, the girl did not fear him for his annihilation maker. If the words were ever true, he would be very surprised. After all, he had always been the one to hurt others, not the other way around. His monsters and the emotions which controlled him had caused a great deal of grief in his life. It always had made sure he was alone. Yet, the innocent gaze of the young child in her pleading visage had struck a chord in him. Oh, okay. Leonardo made out in a silent voice, let's play. Beaming with unconfined joy and excitement, Asia gave a little cheer as she dragged the silent Longinus wielder toward her chest of toys Naruto had been kind enough to supply her with, pulling out a number of toys of various sizes and themes. The young Uzumaki sat on the soft carpet decorating her small play area and turned her attention toward Leonardo. "I am Asia. Nice to meet you," Asia said with a cheery smile decorating her visage. "What's your name?" "El Leonardo," the young child managed to mutter. "My name's El Leonardo." "Nice to meet you, Leonardo. Did you want to be my friend?" Mouth scrunched in anticipation, Asia turned her hopeful eyes toward the young lad. The question had been sudden, but fit for their age, though it was common to make friends with only an introduction. Asia had always been a victim to her sacred gear. The small, yet surprisingly useful abilities of it had kept her at a distance from the other children. They had either seen her as a freak or unapproachable. Though it was considered a gift before her explosion from the ranks of the church, it served as an unthinkable curse. Friends? For the second time, Leonardo was surprised by the girl. He had never expected to be asked the question. Hell, he never even planned on joining the girl in her festivities. His thoughts of the mission were simple: get in, get out. But here he was, sitting on a carpet with the girl surrounded by various toys. His mind had been stuck on the idea of having a friend. He was always lonely. Cao Cao had recruited him roughly a year ago and he had been with the group ever since. None of the members were around his age, and among them, none of them had truly connected with the child. They had held some form of respect for him, but never tried to befriend him. So, when he had accepted the offer, he had escaped a life of total isolation for a life of loneliness. "Why, you want to be my friend?" Leonardo asked, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Why, yeah," Asia replied hesitantly. "Don't you think I am a monster?" "What? No." Blinking at the girl, Leonardo decided to show the girl the reasoning behind his question. If she feared it and him, which he thought highly probable, he would continue on with the mission, closing his eyes in concentration. Leonardo felt the familiar flow of magic from his sacred gear as his mind wandered toward an image of a monster. Shadows twisted around his form as they took on the form of a man, standing taller than both of the children combined. The shadows shrouding the man vanished. The newly formed man held the appearance of a knight. The armor garbed around its body alongside the helmet easily allowed Asia to identify the all-too-familiar man, or in this case, toy, in her hands, was a toy of the same man standing before them. "That's so cool," Asia said with a wave of excitement pouring onto her visage. "Leo, that's so cool." Eyes widening at the words, Leonardo took note of the nickname she had graced him with, and he could not held himself as a small wave of happiness and excitement took hold of his heart. Though it was simple and seemed like an off-handed name, the nickname meant a great deal to the boy. It had been the first time someone had been kind enough to call him that, or even his name, in such an friendly tone, rather than the hesitant or fearful voices the children of his past had graced him with. "You have to show me more," Asia said. "Oh, okay, Asia." The clashing of steel rang in the hall leading to Naruto's bedroom. Synchronizing with the ringing of metal were the grunts of the fighters. Their attempts to overpower one another had left a great deal of damage to the wide halls. A number of slashes and piercings in the walls had easily showcased the power the two had been fighting with. In addition to the damaged walls and floors, rubble which accumulated in masses spoke volumes of the destruction to come. Though the fight had been quite short thus far, neither party could truly say they were not feeling the effects of their physical confrontation. "Give up, Siegfried. I will not allow you to lay a hand on Lady Asia," Ddraig declared as he readied his spear once again. "Once I am finished with you, I shall defeat Leonardo. The lady shall be safe under my watch." I don't think so, Ddraig," Siegfried grunted as the thought of Leonardo brought a smile to his face. That little brat already captured the girl. It's only a matter of time before he takes her to Cao Cao. I don't think you'll be able to do anything about it. Laughing at his own words, Siegfried twirled Gram around in his hands as he found humor in the ideas of his self-declared rival failing at the one task he had been assigned to. The mere idea of Ddraig, the all-so-perfect knight, failing at a mission assigned to him was an opportunity he did not want to miss out on. Watching the all-so-loyal knight fail would be the highlight of his day. "I will never fail, my lord," Ddraig yelled as he charged forward. Thrusting his spear at the chest of his opponent, the spearman found his swift jab parried by the blade of his opponent. Throwing more force onto his strike, Ddraig pulled away and returned for a leg sweep in a single, fluid motion. Backing away, Siegfried spotted his opening and bashed his shoulder against his opponent and sent the spearman tumbling backwards. Taking the opportunity to strike, he raised Gram and readied, but his potentially fatal blow was soon parried. The enraged yell of Ddraig fueled his shove as he pushed the swordsman back and stabbed Siegfried at his armored shoulder. "TCH, a lucky strike," Siegfried hissed, "but no matter. This match is over. I bought Leonardo enough time. We shall continue this next time. Holding Graham up, Siegfried allowed the blade to shimmer in a dull purple light as it changed into another blade. Balmung. The blade glowed as a power gust of wind tore through the halls, covering his retreat, shielding his eyes from the winds. Diarmuid growled at the disappearance of his opponent and quickly ran toward the door. Slamming the door opened, Diarmuid prepared for the worst, but his eyes caught a sight he had never expected to see. Seated together with toys laying before them, were Asia and Leonardo. Lady Asia, get away from him. Diarmuid yelled as he ran to the side of the blonde girl and readied his spear. Stay behind me, my lady, he is dangerous. Frowning at the words, Leonardo readied his Longinus as he glared at Diarmuid and prepared for a fight. Diarmuid, on the other hand, prepared all of his options. Before the situation could get out of hand, Asia jumped from behind Diarmuid and ran between the two. Stop. Mr. Diarmuid, Leo isn't here to hurt me. He's my friend. Asia proclaimed as she stretched her arms out to prevent the two from fighting. Leo, don't fight. Mr. Diarmuid is just here to protect me. The calming words of the girl caught the two by surprise. Her bodyguard more so than her new friend. Diarmuid took the news quite well, other than the wide eyes and gaping mouth. That is, taking a few seconds to process the words, Diarmuid eyed the boy with a calculative gaze as he pondered his options once again. He could not simply disobey the orders of Asia. After all, the orders of Asia were the orders of Naruto. But, having Leonardo, a member of the enemy faction, so close to his lord's sister was simply a terrible idea. Lady Asia, could he be trusted? Diarmuid finally asked, his tone subdued and his eyes wandering toward the small child who possessed one of the most dangerous Longinus ever. Yes, he's my friend. Asia replied without hesitation. I trust him, Mr. Diarmuid. Very well, my lady. Backing off the topic with a nod of his head, Diarmuid took a position near the door and focused on watching his charge. That was all he could do. Currently, he was in a position that left him in need of more assistance. He could not leave Asia alone with a member of Cao Cao's faction, nor could he fight off Siegfried if he ever came back for Asia once he found out Leonardo was here. Split up. Mordred, you head to Avisbron's lab and gather him. Semiramis, you're with me. Naruto ordered as he swiftly strode down the hall. Once everything is all right and no more of Cao Cao's faction is near, we will meet in the throne room. Make sure you are not followed. Whatever, Uzumaki. Mordred huffed out as she stalked off to the lower levels of the castle to locate Avisebron. Just make sure that witch doesn't do anything stupid. Ignoring her words, Semiramis focused her attention on the blonde she was following. As she strolled beside Naruto, one of her birds flew toward her. She allowed it to land on her shoulder. Taking a single glance at the bird, Semiramis returned her attention to the empty halls. They're gathering, Semiramis said as she gave a small rub on the bird's belly. The contingencies are in place, but there are still some loose ends still. What are your orders? Gather the group and kick them out. Naruto replied without any acknowledgement. If we somehow lose to Cao Cao's group, then we make sure the explosives Avisebron has in stock in the lower levels are put to good use. I'll have Avisebron use his golems for rebuilding if necessary. There is more than enough supplies in my treasury to successfully construct another castle. Naruto was angry. It did not take a genius to figure that out. The actions of his supposed friend had finally taken its toll. The rocky relationship between Naruto and Cao Cao had been a highlight of the years leading up to this day. Their once friendly relationship had evaporated throughout the years. Now whatever was left of it had been finally snuffed out on this day. Neither of them were ready to back down. Both of them had already gathered their forces and conflict was unavoidable. Mordred, seal the door and secure the room for Asia, Naruto commanded as he looked down at the layout of the map. Semiramis, highlight the passages in the castle. The mistress of the castle simply nodded at his words and began marking the secretive paths within the castle. Once her work had been completed, she backed away from the map and allowed Naruto to take over. Eyeing the numerous passages with a keen glance, Naruto pondered the various possibilities before making his mind. Alright. Naruto began once again only to be interrupted by Mordred. Naruto, before we start, what are we gonna do about the kid? Mordred said as she directed the group's attention toward Leonardo, who was being kept at the corner of the room with a group of golems guarding him. I mean, we ain't gonna tell him all our plans now, are we? Eyeing the small child curiously, Naruto found himself exchanging glances with the emotionless boy. He could not understand the child. Leonardo had been a member of Cao Cao's faction, yet he had saved Asia. Though the kid was potentially one of the strongest members in Cao Cao's faction, he was not experienced enough to truly be considered as such. Taking a final glance at Asia, Naruto could see the hope in her eyes. While he wished to make her happy, her safety also played a role in his predicament. Avisebron, stay here. I want you to keep an eye on Leonardo as well as command your golems out of battle. take Asia and Leonardo to the safe room. Naruto began once more. The rest of you, we will be facing Cao Cao and his supporters. I want them out of this castle. They have been in our way for far too long. Semiramis, tell them about the secret passages. Nodding her head at the command of Naruto, she scanned the group before starting. There is a network of passages all around the castle. They were built in case of emergency. The tunnels start from the bottom all the way to the top. There is no place in this castle the passages do not connect to. I have already activated the interior defenses of the castle. Dearmood and Mordred, you two will be heading to the lower levels. I know Cao Cao will be planning an escape plan in case they fail. I want you both to put a stop to it, Naruto said as his eyes shifted from both of them. Take the tunnels down and we will meet up with you once we take care of Cao Cao. Come on, pretty boy. Mordred called out as she rushed out of the room with a gleeful smirk on her face. I want to fight now. Nodding his head in acceptance, Dearmood strolled out with the hot-headed blonde in tow. Their echoing footsteps drifted further and further from the group as Naruto ignored their vocal movements and turned to the raven-haired woman standing beside him. Semiramis, let's go, Naruto said. I want to catch Cao Cao before he gets away. When Naruto had spotted Cao Cao, his eyes burned with rage. As he and Semiramis headed to the upper levels of the castle, they had found the cocky man standing inside the throne room situated at the castle's center. Seated atop the throne which controlled the castle with an all-so-arrogant smile etched across his visage, Cao Cao greeted the two with a carefree wave of his hand. Ah, you two made it, the mutineer said with his smile widening. I was getting worried if you would show up or not. Then again, Leonardo's betrayal would take even me some time to plan for. Cao Cao's last comment caught Naruto off guard. While he hid it behind his anger, the blonde knew Cao Cao saw through him. That simply made Cao Cao happy. Clapping his hands with a chuckle escaping his mouth, the man stood and began approaching them. As he descended the stairs with grace, Naruto simply glared at him and gestured for his weapons to come forth, as the air behind him rippled and showed the numerous weaponry pointed at the approaching man. You thought I wouldn't make it back for your little plan, huh? Naruto hissed worth venom in his words. Heracles and Georg may have bought you time. You thought you could kill me. You thought you could go after Asia. Motioning for his weapons to launch, Naruto watched as streaks of gold pelted the very ground Cao Cao stood upon. As miniature expositions rocked the ground of the throne room, Naruto continued his relentless barrage, after launching a volley of weapons. Naruto finally called for his attack to end as he waited for the smokescreen of dust to clear. He didn't expect the attack to do anything really. Cao Cao had seen his ability for years now. He would have been surprised if Cao Cao had fallen for his most basic move. Just as the final shower of dust settled, Naruto's eyes immediately picked up on the streak of curved light moving straight at him. Semiramis eyed the attack and simply raised a hand. A shield of magical energy soon erected before the two, easily taking the blow with ease. The first attack simply opened up for Cao Cao to start his next move. Jumping out of the dust with no change in his perfect image, he channeled more magic into his spear and launched more light magic at the shield Semiramis had erected, forcing more and more power into the beam of light magic aimed straight at the shield. Finally, the attack showed results. Forcing its way through the magic wall, a series of cracks appeared at the point of attack, spreading slowly throughout the shield. Before the attack could pierce the shield, Cao Cao was forced to dodge the spear hurtling towards him courtesy of Naruto. Without warning, Naruto summoned a blade from his treasury and charged forward. Dodging the hail of magic bullets aimed at him, Naruto shot off the ground with a single jump, sending the ground the quake. Cao Cao copied his friend's actions and met the blonde in the air with his spear raised, focusing only on Naruto. Cao Cao pushed against Naruto's sword. His tactic worked, somewhat. Naruto used Cao Cao's push as a way to create the distance between the two. When a small space opened up between the two, Naruto immediately called for his chains, circling Cao Cao. The metal chains shot from the circles as they tightly held onto the mutineer. These again. Cao Cao muttered with annoyance obvious in his voice as he struggled against the tightly bound chains. You know, Naruto, after all this time I still can't find a way to get out of these things. Those swords you have aimed at me don't help either. You sat on my throne, Semiramis interrupted with a scowl on her beautiful face. I should have my doves peck your eyes out. No, that's too merciful. How about some of my poison? You would be a great test subject for. Cutting off her bloodthirsty rant, Naruto gave her a placating look as he grabbed her raised arm. Semiramis only sighed as she felt the grip Naruto had on her. She understood the reason behind his mercy. While she didn't like it, she understood. Taking a step backward, she looked on as Naruto studied Cao Cao with a visage she could not describe. It's about time, Cao Cao simply said as he stared straight at Naruto. Though he was bound and staring his potential killer in the eyes, he could not help himself. Georg will be here in 5 As he was about to finish his sentence, Cao Cao heard the hum of a magic circle. Smirking at the sound, he positioned his body as straight as he could, feeling victory wash over him. He knew Georg could not stand against Semiramis, much less Naruto, but it was not his right-hand Mon's strength that he relied on. Cao Cao, I am here, Georg announced as he stepped out of his magic circle. When Naruto caught sight of Georg, his eyes immediately widened upon sight of the girl in his arms. Asia was being carried by Cao Cao's right-hand man. Anger boiling in his eyes, Naruto called forth his treasury and aimed his weapons at the wizard in training. Staring at his helpless sister unconscious in Georg's arms, Naruto could not stop himself from shaking. His baby sister, the only girl he had left called family, was in the mercy of the enemy. You managed to get past Avicebron, Semiramis commented with narrowed eyes. Not exactly, Georg said with a smile creeping onto his visage. That was when Naruto could feel himself glaring at the man he had placed his faith in. Walking out go the shadows was none other than Avicebron. Naruto's rage had not subsided as he saw Cao Cao and his faction leave with Asia. He simply used the only way he could to vent out the anger he had built up to dangerous levels, using his unused power against the golems left by the traitor Avicebron, crushing the stone warriors in a flash of rage. As he annihilated the small army of golems into rubble, Naruto attempted to rein in his anger with a series of breaths. Watching his anger-filled destruction was Semiramis. Her enchanting visage was filled with amounts of frustration left unreleased. Naruto, they're gone, Semiramis said gently, her voice placating. We will get Asia back. Nodding his head reluctantly, Naruto turned his head toward the woman with a nod. It had been an hour or so since he had been focusing on destroying the golems and venting his anger. For his time in the hero faction, Semiramis had been one of the few who could reel in his anger. He knew Asia was gone and Avicebron had betrayed them. He couldn't help himself as he forced the Avicebron's creations to suffer. When Cao Cao vanished with his faction, he had made his position clear. If anyone involved with Naruto even attempted to recover Asia, her life would be killed. How are they? Naruto finally said as he took a seat against the wall of the laboratory. Anything serious? Nothing major. Mordred is much more vocal of the ambush than anyone else, but shall be fine. A few scratches, but just fine, Semiramis replied with another smile. Dearmood no the other hand is trying to get out of bed to make up for his failure. Naruto simply chuckled. While it lacked any form of joy, he used it as a way to focus on a way to get Asia back. It was no time to brood. Asia's life was in the hand of Cao Cao. Brooding would simply do nothing for her. It would only hinder his plans. Sighing in defeat, Naruto leaned against the wall as he attempted to father his thoughts. While he would have loved to have a chance to kill Avicebron, Asia was much more important. When they're rested, gather them to the meeting hall, Naruto commanded. I need to know what happened with the others. Semiramis, the devil Cao Cao was meeting with. Can you tell me anything about him? Naruto asked as he studied the blade in his hands. There must have been something else. Eyeing the distant blonde with curiosity, she pondered the question before considering her answer. Cao Cao had been planning with the devil to cleanse the hero faction. That much was true. But, with all her attempts, she had failed to find out more from their conversations. Not only had it left her in an annoyed mood, but it also personally damaged her pride. No, all I know is that he spoke to a devil, Semiramis responded with her brows furrowed in thought. I believe it may potentially be that same devil we encountered during our mission for the Sephiroth Grawl, or even that boastful Gremory girl your sister knew. We have no idea where that cur will be, Naruto confirmed with a nod of his head as his mind lingered on the Gregory girl. But, that Gremory and her peerage will still be in Kuo. I need you ready for departure soon. We will be paying those devils a visit. Of course, Semiramis replied with a smirk etched across her beautiful visage. But that little annoyance that has been following the Hanging Gardens, what of him and his little group? I have had enough of the mindless mongrels following us around. I shall grace them with my presence and deal with this issue personally. With that said, Naruto strolled out of the throne room, leaving Semiramis behind. As his footsteps gracefully trudged through the halls of the Hanging Gardens, he wandered the halls in search of Dearmood and Mordred. The two have long since healed from their wounds and the two were eager for blood. Mordred's pride did not allow her to lose against the competition she had faced, while Dearmood on the other hand took the kidnapping as a personal attack, leaving the loyal man ready for bloodshed. As he continued to search, Naruto pondered the group of three which were following his faction. It had been a while since he had been informed of their presence by Semiramis. While he held little respect for the fools stalking him from the shadows, he felt no need to disturb them. After all, the fools should have felt honored to merely follow his magnificent being. But, their idiotic actions have finally brought annoyance to his emotionally distraught mind. It was time to finally grace them with his presence and finally put a stop to their currish actions. Tobio Ikus had finally felt the long-term effects of boredom. having been following the Hanging Gardens for almost a month or so now. Him and his team were growing aggravated due to the lack of action. Not only were they cold and hungry, they were also forced to keep out of range from the flying fortress. Enduring the conditions were fine, but the time spent scouting the residents of the Hanging Gardens were coming crashing down. None of them could stand any of the limited living any longer. He himself felt the pain. Not only did he wish for something to happen, but he was growing tired of the tense atmosphere created by the animosity of time. "You heathens should be kneel not laying," a voice full of annoyance called out. "Not only have you curs been following myself around, but you refuse to kneel have struck my last nerve." When the words echoed throughout the quiet forest, Tobio immediately felt the overwhelming prescience outclassing anything he had ever felt before. Unconsciously backing up from the figure garbed in shimmering golden armor, Tobio quickly called for Jin his Longinus to come forth. Growing with each step, a large midnight black dog with glowing red eyes marched toward Tobio's side as it readied itself for battle. The action only caused Naruto narrow his brows. "Who are you?" Tobio finally asked between the growls of Jin. "Jin here doesn't like surprises like the one you sprang on us. Now tell me, who are you?" Naruto could feel the anger of the beast through its growls. Unfazed by the terrifying snarl of the beast, Naruto merely ignored the question with an arrogant snort as he felt his own anger rise. He felt no real threat from the group the mongrels seemed to lead, but his emotions were high and he had no patience for the morels standing before him. "You dare speak to me in such a manner, mongrel?" Naruto hissed as his regal features snarled into a scowl. Snapping his features and unlocking his treasury for the battle ahead, he continued, "Tell me, you cur, what gives you the audacity to speak to your betters?" Normally Naruto could control his anger, easy. With Asia around it had been much easier. She could ease him out of it with a few gentle words befitting of her soft, innocent demeanor. But now, she was gone, taken by Cao Cao, and his anger was not going to be quelled. His heart held a special place for Asia. Her very existence had been behind his ultimate desire to annihilate Trihexa. Without her around, he would not hold back. "I ask you, mongrel, why are you here? Speak now, mongrel. My patience has reached its limit," Naruto said once more as he ordered his weapons further out of his treasury. "So you are the master of that castle?" Tobio finally responded with a calculative glance. "I have only came for information. There is no need for violence. My superior sent me to gather information regarding the death of Rainier in Kuo." "That answer does not satisfy me, mongrel," Naruto snarled. And like that, a barrage of weaponry shot out from Naruto's treasury as it made its way to the three intruders. One of the two unnamed heathers erected a shield as they stood behind it. Tobio had called for Jin to transform as he attempted to parry all of the destructive projectiles. While he stood strong against the ruthless assault, Tobio could hear the screams of the men under his command. Turning around, Tobio could see the weapons easily penetrating the shield and making their way into the two men, killing them upon contact. The blades soon vanished, leaving the mangled bodies on the blood-soaked ground. "Jin, now!" Toboi shouted as he turned towards his partner. "You'll pay, you bastard. I sing for the slaying of 1,000 humans, I celebrate the killing of 10,000 goblins." The name submerged in total darkness, that of imitation of God drifts through polar night. "Thou will perish by mine own black blade," to be something absurd, the god of the deformed. Once the last of the chant echoed throughout the starry night, Tobio was masked by a blanket of shadows. His entire form took on the shape of a dog's. His limbs, forearms all were shrouded in pitch-black fur, claws stretched from his fingers and toes, his maw finally taking shape of a dog's, growing in size and teeth enlarging. Twirling from behind the beast were a set of 6 midnight black tails. As Tobio took on his new form, Jin, the Mont's loyal companion, also took on a new appearance, enlarging to the same height as Tobio. Jin's features turned massive as the claws and teeth of the Longinus expanded in size. "You truly fit your title, mongrel," Naruto said with a snort, "but even if you take the shape of a beast, you still grovel beneath me." Growling, the two beasts charged, shaking the earth with their trample forward. Naruto eyed them with hate. His feelings for the two were not high. Using them to vent pent-up anger was his entire idea. Forcing the weapons forward in a frenzy surpassing his last assault, Naruto watched as his weapons sliced massive cuts throughout their bodies. While most of his weapons missed, Naruto saw some of his weapons deliver serious wounds for the duo. Yet, the two continued to push forward, ignoring their wounds, forcing them to dodge each and every assault. Naruto watched ceaselessly as the pair weaved through his attacks, not at all impressed. As the two reached Naruto, the blonde merely rolled his eyes as a series of chains wrapped around their bodies, holding them in the air. Eyeing the pair in distaste, he snapped his fingers and rearranged his weapons. Watching them struggle brought some form of amusement in Naruto's eyes. Gods had most trouble with Enkidu, humans or beings with divinity were no exception. While it did not affect them as well as divine beings, the chains were the best. They were simply unable to be broken by normal means, powerful enough to bind gods without much effort. Naruto could not imagine anything or anyone strong enough to break them in such situations. How amusing. You attempting to break free from my chains which have bound gods. Naruto chuckled humorlessly as he eyed them with a scowl of annoyance. I want to know who sent you to shadow us, mongrel. I'll never tell the likes of you, Tobio hissed as his eyes flashed in defiance. I was hoping you'd say that, Naruto said with a smile. Snapping his fingers, Naruto watched on as a sword hovered before Jin. The horror in Tobio's eyes were met with a sight he had never hoped to see. Chained to the sky with an armory of weapons waiting to impale his dear partner, as Jin howled in pain, Tobio continued to struggle against the chains. While he continued to struggle, another blade made its way into Jin. Tobio could not describe the horror he was seeing. His partner, Jin, the one friend he had from start, was suffering because of him. He couldn't watch the scene, but Naruto had no pity for him, as he forced him chains to bind him to watch on. Now tell me, who sent you? Naruto shouted as his eyes shined in a brilliant red glow. Azazel, Tobio sputtered as his eyes watered and the tears of defeat cascaded down his cheeks. It was Azazel. Please, let Jin go. You see, everything in this world belongs to me. I inherited the riches from my ancestors, Naruto replied as he stared directly at Tobio. I honored your promise and let Jin go, but you on the other hand. No. Once his chains released Jin, the still transformed world charged at Naruto, allowing the beast to close the distance between the two. Naruto merely summoned a sword and pierced the skull of the beast. Tobio's screams were the only sounds heard as a moment passed before Jin slowly reverted back into his old form and lost all of his hate. Walking toward Naruto, the Longinus circled the king and lowered his head for a pat. Excalibur. This blade had performed a number of miracles after its possession by the British king, while its power grew stronger under his care. I hold in my hands the original blade, before the king, before the legend, and your Longinus. Well, it simply learned to kneel. No. Jin, listen to me. We've been partners for years. Please, Jin, snap out of it. Tobio cried out as his tears flooded his visage as his desperation grew more obvious by the second. Please Jin. Please. Even with the pitiful cries, the dog had been turned, smiling. Naruto turned toward Tobio and snapped his fingers, screeching in the air as the golden blade shot through the chained man, ending his life. As Naruto eyed the beast under his command, he eyed the Excalibur in his free hand and released the effects of the blade. Your user was pitiful, his honor nothing short of pathetic. He could not even hold his word for the man he swore allegiance to. Naruto spat with a hiss. That was when Jin charged, using the ground as a platform to jump. The pitch-black dog growled as it leapt for Naruto, simply dodging the attack with a smirk. Naruto simply called for another blade as the dog leapt once more, dodging once more. Naruto dragged the blade down for a strike to only find a black blade stopping his attack, allowing the dog to run to gather more ground between them. Naruto called forth his chains and forced the Longinus down. Tobio Ikus is dead. Your master is dead, Naruto said as he eyed the creature whose red eyes screamed of death. And I see absolute loyalty in your eyes. While your master was a cur, I find potential in you. Longinus, serve me. As the chains loosened, Jin rushed out once more ready for battle. Rolling his eyes, Naruto prepared for another encounter to only find Semiramis walking toward him with her hand raised. Naruto merely watched her as she shrouded her hand with magic and forced Jin to the ground once more. Walking to his side, Semiramis eyed the surroundings with a raised brow. Having trouble taming a Longinus? Semiramis asked with a smirk on her visage. Seeing that you killed his owner, it would be best to allow it time before taming it, especially if you're the killer. Shaking his head, Naruto turned toward the growling Jin and simply smirked in response. Only one man could stand before me. Can you, Longinus? Waving for Semiramis to cancel her binds, Naruto eyed the beast with his smirk growing each second. Immediately after he was loose, Jin shot straight for Naruto. Ma opened wide, aimed for the kill, gleefully shouting at the Longinus. Naruto tackled the beast down and gave a laugh of triumph. It did not last long as Jin quickly used its superior body weight to toss Naruto off of him. As the two continued to wrestle on the blood-soaked mud, Naruto took a hold of the strong dog and pressed his legs to the ground before tossing the creature away. Semiramis, do it, Naruto said as he ordered the witch forward. I am impressed. His loyalty to that lowly fool is desirable. Nodding her head gently, Semiramis summoned a potion as she approached the downed creature, pouring it down its maw. The witch gently rubbed the dirty fur as Jin slowly got up from its downed position. The potion had been one of her most prized possessions, It had been an accidental discovery, but a discovery nonetheless. It used a rare combination of ingredients when brewed properly, made a deadly poison which ate away memories of the past, completely leaving one a blank slate. It is done. The Longinus is yours, she said with another smile. The Hanging Gardens are ready to be teleported. All I need is your magic reserves. Nodding his head in approval, Naruto hunched beside her as he gave Jin a rub on his head. Good, let us be going. I want to make it to Kuo immediately. The devils know something about Asia and Cao Cao, that I want to know. Rias Gremory was a bright girl for her age. She was a great student and excellent learner, making her a popular face among the humans and the devils. While not as intelligent as her rival, Sona Citri, her mind was no laughing stock. When Kokebiel attacked, her mind immediately went to Issei. While perverted, the young man had a power some could not even hope for. In his left hand was a sacred gear, not any sacred gear, a Longinus. Not only was it a Longinus, but it was a mid-tier 1. Even the lowest levels were capable of killing gods. A mid-tier 1 trained properly would be much more. Issei, I will need your help for the next attack, Rias said as she glared at the fallen angel flying above her with a twisted smirk on his visage. Kokebiel is too strong for my attacks alone, but, with yours we can beat him. Yosha. I'll give you my beast, bucko, the lanky pervert said as he raised his left hand and allowed the glowing gauntlet to be seen by the fallen angel. Here you go, bucko, transfer. As a red light emitted from the gauntlet, Rias felt the power of the Welsh dragon flood through her magic reserves, channeling the extra power into a massive attack, greater than all the combined efforts of her peerage so far. She launched it as soon as it reached the size of a large sphere of crimson-red magic. The attack seemed powerful at first, but Kokebiel showed them why he was one of the strongest fallen angels in Grigori, easily baiting away the attack with a lazy swipe of his hand. Kokebiel only laughed at the defeated expressions of the weaklings under him. Do you understand, Rias Gremory? I am a fallen angel who survived the Great War. Your power is nothing compared to mine. Kokebiel cackled aloud. I will start a new world war, and this time the fallen angels will win. Just as his deranged words ended, the entire sky shook. Like as if a meteor was falling from the heavens, a titanic magic circle appeared in the colored sky, lighting it up in a flurry of colors. Emerging from the magic circle was a fortress floating in the sky. Once it had died down, the entrance captured the attention of everyone. There were no words to describe the majestic sight. Then again, floating fortresses were never a common thing, even for the supernatural. Kokebiel took note of the flag being flown by the castle. The hero faction, Kokebiel hissed in dramatically. More annoyances show up. The castle began lowering itself closer to the battle as the occupants of said castle began departing. One by one, 5 figures landed from the fortress in the sky. For the Gremory peerage, some of the faces were all too familiar. How could they forget? One of them had single-handedly took down their powerhouse with a single strike. Not only that, but the blonde had the most intimidating aura Rias had ever felt in her life. You. Issei shouted with an indigent growl. You bastards took Asia from us. Give her back, you bastard. Jin, attack. When Issei heard the words the blonde bastard had said, he immediately felt the hate of the black dog next to Naruto, channeling what power he could muster after the transfer. Issei raised his left arm and fired. The shot of red magic only shook off the dog named Jin as it continued to charge. Issei could hear the screams of his friends as they attempted to help by their injured state, attempting to dodge the pounce. The perverted devil could not react fast enough as he felt the sting of pain erupt from his shoulder, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. Jin continued to ferociously bite the wound he had already made. Ah! Issei screeched as he fell to the ground under the weight of Jin. Bucko, help! Rushing to her pawn's aid, Rias gathered her magic and forced a blast of crimson-red blast toward the hostile dog. Her attack had no effect upon the first strike, leaving Jin more angry than hurt. Leaving the whimpering pervert on the ground to coddle his injuries, Jin growled as he approached the red-haired heiress with hunger in his eyes, backing away from the frightening animal. Rias shifted her gaze from the beast and toward her peerage. From her first attack, she understood how powerful it was. Though her attack was not as powerful as her normal ones, it was enough to kill any normal magical beasts. Devil, I must ask you where Asia is, Naruto began as he stalked toward Jin. My former partner had been conversing with a devil in hopes of eliminating myself and my followers. They took Asia in return of their failure. I have had enough of devils, so tell me, mongrel, where she is and I shall spare you. I don't know. Rias stammered against the overwhelming presence of unchained rage. I never talked to anyone. I swear. I didn't even know Asia went missing. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto simply snapped his fingers as Jin stalked forward with a growl. Jin, here is a Longinus, the Canis Lycaon, an independent sacred gear that allows it to act on its own. Tell me, mongrel, can your pathetic tool there even compare to Jin's power? Bucko, a soft, defeated whisper escaped Issei's mouth as his wounds continued to be left unattended. Ill protect, your, Opai. Was that you intention with Asia? Naruto hissed as he caught the last part of his words. Turning his head to the downed devil, Naruto called forth his blades and glared at the pawn with hate-filled eyes. You disgusting mongrel. How dare you even gaze upon my sister? Curs such as yourself does not possess the honor to simply look upon her. Asia's benevolence had saved you from my wrath before, but now, this attack will not go unpunished. Calling forth a blade, Naruto stalked toward the downed pervert with murder in his eyes. The action was not met without any resistance. While Issei attempted to crawl away from Naruto, Rias called out in fear, dragging his limp body across the ground. Issei struggled to even keep his conscience clear. After the bite from Jin, he felt his body slipping into numbness, leaving him incapable of moving. Left arm correct? Naruto hissed with a glimmer of glee in his eyes. Is that where your Longinus is? Asia told me about your sacred gear. I wasn't planning on killing, but your perverse words disgraced my beloved sister's image. Such words cannot be left unpunished. Issei, no. Rias cried out as tears threatened to fall. Please, run. Without a moment of hesitation, Naruto brought the blade up and sliced the arm right off, leaving behind a wave of blood running out of what was left of the pervert's arm. Naruto merely snorted at his screams. As the boy cried over his lost limb, Naruto took note of how well Semiramis poison was working. Having coated Jin's teeth with a potent neurotoxin, Naruto had been interested on how well the poison worked. No. You monster. Rias shouted as tears cascaded down her countenance. Issei, talk to me. Ha ha ha. Yes. Fight. 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 Kokebiel screeched in a mad cackle as he pointed at the scene occurring before him. This is warfare I wished for. With her death I shall start another great war. Scowling at the chaotic proclamation, Naruto simply turned to Deermood and simply nodded to the man. Bowing to the nod, Deermood rushed away from the group and unleaded his spears in preparation for Kokebiel. As Deermood moved to stop Kokebiel, Mordred focused on the blue-haired woman laying a small distance away from the Gremory group, alongside what seemed to be the Excalibur fragments fused into a whole. Immediately moving toward the fallen weapons, she took note of the large broadsword laying beside the woman as well, which emitted a destructive aura. Semiramis, take care of the mongrel, Naruto commanded as he marched toward the recovering devils. You, Gremory, tell me what you know of a white-haired devil and his retainer. My patience has reached its limit. What are you doing to Issei? Rias demanded with anger obvious in her eyes. What is she doing? Tell me, you bastard. Eyes narrowing at the last comment, Naruto snapped his fingers and turned his summoned weapons to the Gremory peerage. The words of the insolent devil had finally pushed his anger to its limit. Their lack of cooperation had been a gnawing annoyance in his mind. He hated being held in the dark, that had always been an annoyance of his, but, adding that to the fact that the devil standing before him might have information on the location of his sister was pushing him to edge. Fine. If you wish to deny my request, then you shall be punished by the king, Naruto said with a hint of happiness in his regal features. Now then, suffer the consequences you have brought upon thyself. Eyes widening with fear, Rias immediately dashed away from the enraged blonde and straight for her peerage. She could feel the polished projectiles skim past her, missing by the smallest of margins. Though they missed, the sheer speed and power of the throw easily placed a multiplicity of cuts on her figure. Finally, reaching them in her painful run, Rias covered her peerage with her body in hopes of saving them from the destructive barrage. Curled up against the bodies of her friends, she felt the explosive nature of the weapons as a series of explosions rocked the ground. Pathetic, Naruto muttered as he held off from destroying the devils bundled together. For a devil you were weak, a king and yet unable to protect your subjects. Simply pathetic, you worthless cur. Kokebiel was having fun. Feeling the rush of battle brought a joyous cackle as he felt the intensity of the blows delivered the spearmen, dueling against him around the campus of the school. The insane fallen angel never felt such struggle since the Great War. He could finally enjoy a battle against an equal opponent, one that would push him to ecstasy of battle. Come human. I shall show you the might of the fallen angels. Kokebiel shouted as he readied another spear of light, but this time it amassed to a degree larger than his last. Launching the massive projectile, Kokebiel continued to laugh hysterically as he watched the spear of light soar through the air, flying straight for the man. Deermood merely grunted as he readied himself to dodge. Leaping out of the way, Deermood did not stay at the spot for long. Dodging another attack, he leaped once more, positioning himself to jump towards the fallen angel in the sky. The loyal knight readied both his spears as he waited for the next attack. That was when Kokabeel fried another deadly light spear aiming from the entire area he stood upon. Your days are over, Kokabeel, by my honor as the loyal servant of Lord Naruto Uzumaki. I will slay all that oppose him. Dirmud called out as he sliced through a light spear and charged. Brace yourself, today I shall slay you. Don't make me laugh, human. I am a fallen angel, we are the greatest of the three biblical factions. You are nothing but a mere human severing under a pathetic lord. Kokabeel replied as he sent more and more light spears down. Dodging an attack, Dirmud used all his might to leap off of the ground. Soaring toward the floating fallen angel, Dirmud saw the attack heading his way. In the air, it was impossible to maneuver unless there was something to push off of. For Dirmud, it was not he case, waiting for the attack to come. He merely pushed against it with Gai Bidhi as he approached. Kokaniel growled and charged, creating a sword of light. The fallen angel positioned the blade at Dirmud's head and followed it up by sweeping down toward him. In an explosion of sound, they clashed, directing the blade directly to Dirmud's head. Kokabeel merely smirked when he saw Gai Bidhi miss the parry. The fallen angel knew his sword was longer and the spear passing his guard was nothing to worry about. On the other hand, trying to stop his blade with the thin red spear he had left was simply foolish. It is over, Dirmud commented as he watched the sword. It is fool. Now die. Kokabeel screamed as he drove the blade downwards in hopes of finishing the human off. Imagine Kokabeel's surprise when Dirmud shifted his free hand and a black shield appeared. The shield was a masterpiece. With its simple yet elegant black paint, it boasted a sigil on the base, a sigil Kokabeel recognized all too well. It was Achilles' shield, the Achilles Cosmos, a great weapon created by Hephaestus himself which allowed the wielder to block just about any attack by deploying a miniature world in defensive form. Once Kokabeel's blade vanished upon contact, Dirmud felt the resistance of flesh against his spear. Well, Crow, the dishonor you placed on my liege has been your downfall, Dirmud said as he released his spear and allowed the fallen angel to fall from the skies. Falling with the body, Dirmud simply allowed his own body to face the impact. His body had faced more than a simply fall, the amount of pain he had been graced with were greater than this. Creating a crater on the school ground upon contact. He slowly walked out with a frown on his visage when he saw the red-haired devil stand before Naruto. In his short life, he had been graced with the position beside Naruto Uzumaki, the inheritor of the gates of Babylon, a treasury which contained every single weapon created at the time. Throughout their less than stellar adventures in search for members, Dirmud had to give his life to the man he called king. To see anyone stand before Naruto felt like a perusal insult to him. Oi! Pretty boy, come help me over here. Mordred called out with a grunt. I found some of those Excalibur pieces Uzumaki liked so much. Nodding his head, Dirmud marched toward the blonde-haired knight, ignoring the two bodies laying on the ground. Dirmud eyed the sword with a curious gaze as he moved from the bodies to the blade left unattended to on the ground. The blade certainly looked like an Excalibur, but it lacked some defining features the pieces had. Taking hold of the blade and studying carefully, the loyal knight gave Mordred a nod. I believe it is, though it is fused with other pieces, Dirmud muttered as he handed the blade over to Mordred. The girl, is she? Yup, she's with the Vatican, Mordred said as she eyed the girl carefully. All I know is that she has one of the holy swords with her, but I doubt she's as good as I am. Anyways, let's pick her up. I am sure Uzumaki will want me to get that sword. Shrugging at her words, Dirmud lifted the girl and carried her towards the raging battle up ahead, Mordred following him along with the fused Excalibur in her hands. You disgust me, savage, Naruto hissed as he glared at the downed pervert. To think Asia thought you were her friend, fooling my baby sister is one thing, but, to think of her in such a putrid way. Naruto turned around and stalked toward Semiramis and Jin. He had left Issei in a pile of his own blood, crying for help as his body fell victim to the poison of Semiramis. The mere thought of the perverted fool attempting to even approach Asia made him bloodthirsty. When she had saved them during their first meeting, Naruto had given the mongrels their lives due to the benevolence of his dear sister. Now, hearing the atrocities the heathen spoke of, Naruto could not let the fools go unpunished now. Semiramis, extract the fool's sacred gear, Naruto said as he kicked the agonized Issei to the woman. I want it done now. I shall personally punish them for their crimes. I want the boosted gear. Of course, Semiramis responded with a giggle. Maybe we should collect all of these sacred gears. They would be so fun to play with. Ignoring her comments, Naruto focused on the fallen Gremory peerage. His eyes still bore hatred for the devils, but he did not bother killing them. They were needed in order to summon the Satans from the underworld. If not for them, he would have disposed of them. Turning his head toward the approaching members of his faction, Naruto gave the girl in Dirmud's arms a curious glances. My lord. I have returned, Ddraig said with a makeshift bow. This girl has been knocked out when we have arrived. It looks as if she is in possession of the holy sword Durandal. Durandal. That was the blade old man Vasco wielded, Naruto said with interest in his eyes. Well then, move her to the Hanging Gardens, such a sword would be honored to join our cause. Nodding his head, the knight marched toward the castle. Mordred merely glanced at Semiramis as she continued her ritual with a smirk on her countenance. Ignoring the teasing witch, she turned to Naruto and showed him the blade that was in her hands. While shaped oddly, she could easily tell from the aura it emitted to be an Excalibur. Have it secured in the Hanging Gardens. I shall return with Semiramis soon, Naruto commanded as he turned to the witch. It is complete, Semiramis declared happily as she showed the armored blonde the gauntlet she held in her hands. The boosted gear is now in our possession. The Welsh dragon seems to be interested in speaking. Good work, let us go. I tire of these disgusting devils. Tell me, Welsh dragon, what are your intentions? Naruto asked as he sat upon his throne. His eyes bore down on the red gauntlet set to the side. Your host was weak. Pondering the question, Ddraig could not help himself as he stared at the blonde. It had been ages since anyone had attempted to extract him from his host. Not only that, but it ended in a successful extraction. Inside the sacred gear he had been sealed into by the biblical god. He could feel the power the child before him emitted. While young in his eyes, Ddraig felt the ambition for dominance. It was refreshing, really. Not many of the beings in the current generation had any real ambition. His old host, for example, wanted to be a harem king. Yes, pathetic as it was better than the Gremmaries, which was winning rating games. It has been long since I have spoken to a human, much less one that is not my host. Ddraig hummed from the gauntlet. As for my intentions, I have none. I have been inside this sacred gear for centuries, awakening in hosts for ages. Smiling, Naruto stood from his throne and walked to the boosted gear. Placing a hand on the sacred gear, Naruto felt the very might of the Welsh dragon. If I were to offer you a body? That question completely put Ddraig in a shocked state. He in all his life never expected some human to offer him a new body, much less one who extracted him from his weakest host to date. In his life he had never believed it to be true. Reconstructing a body left to rot by the three factions was tough, but, to break the seals the biblical god had placed on the boosted gear was another miracle he knew was impossible. Yet, here the boy was, offering him a new body as if it were the easiest thing in the world. If I accept, then what do you wish of me, boy? Ddraig asked. I want your power, Welsh dragon, Naruto replied with a smirk. I wish for the destruction of Trihexa, the apocalyptic beast. I want you to fight beside my side every step of the way. I want your loyalty. You have a deal, human. Naruto, not human, Ddraig. Are you ready for the process, Semiramis? Naruto asked as he walked into her lab with the boosted gear in hand. Ddraig has accepted my offer and I wish for the dragon to have his body. Yes, it has been completed, Semiramis responded as she set her book to the side. The Sephiroth Graal was the greatest gift to science. Its powers are out of the world, allowing the user to know every aspect of life. Simply amazing. Good. Then let use begin. Placing the gauntlet on the table, Semiramis walked to the edge of her lab and retrieved one of the two cups she had in storage and walked over to the boosted gear, holding the Sephiroth Graal higher. Naruto took note of the large amounts of magical power surrounding the witch. Closely looking at the process, Naruto took notice of the gauntlet. As the green gems slowly lost color, Naruto could see the gauntlet lose color altogether. Let us go, Semiramis said as she walked away from the gauntlet. This room is too small for the dragon. We must revive him in the Hanging Gardens exterior to avoid any collateral damage. Following her with a nod, Naruto could not help but feel giddy over the fact that a dragon was about to be revived from the confines of a sacred gear. They had finally reached the outside of the Hanging Gardens, as Semiramis walked to the very edge of the balcony and lifted the Sephiroth Graal once more, and once again, Naruto could feel the magical powers surround Semiramis. Once the magic began building shape for the dragon, Naruto walked forward as the process ended in a shimmering light enveloped both Semiramis and the form of the dragon. Once it died down, Semiramis nodded to him and he approached the dragon. Ddraig, you have been granted a second body. Awaken, he bellowed with a gleeful smile. Well, it's about time. You're awake, miss, Ddraig said gently. How are you feeling? Blinking at the man seated before him, Zenobia concentrated on the last memory she could remember. All her mind could trace back to was the final clash with Fried. She had remembered Durandal finally beating the Mad Mons fused Excalibur. That was it, nothing else. And then it came. A sharp twisted pain soon flashed in her head, forcing the young woman to wince under it. Taking note of it, Ddraig moved to the table set by the bedroom. He poured a glass of water for Zenobia. Here, some cold water should help, miss, he said once more with a friendly smile etched on his visage. We recovered you from the battlefield in Kuo. You were knocked out next to 2 blades. That was when my master decided to take you with us. Accepting the answer with a nod, she pondered the words for a couple of minutes as he considered the possibilities. Then it hit her. The devils. They were assisting her in the attempt to retrieve the Stalin caliber fragments or destroy them. She was curious as to what happened to them. While they were against her beliefs, they still assisted her. The devils, that were there. Where are they? Zenobia asked with a tired voice. I know some of them were still conscious before I got knocked out. Are they with us, in this castle? Shaking his head, Dyrmund smiled once more. No, the devils were not welcomed on this fortress. My master holds little care for them, especially the Longinus wielder. My master's lack of trust or care left them to the battlefield. But Kokabiel is still alive. Leaving them as a death sentence. She replied with a hint of worry in her eyes. We have to go back for them. Do not worry, miss, we were successful in defeating Kokabiel. When Dyrmund had said that, Zenobia was surprised. Even with the combined might of her and the rest of the Grimaori peerage, they were still unable to do anything to the fallen angel. Not only that, but, from the looks of it, they did not have many injured either. As she pondered the information, Zenobia felt her stomach growl. Blinking at it for a moment, she then turned to the man that had been caring for her. I shall get you food now, miss. Do you have any specific requests? And no. My apologies, miss. I am Dyrmund Uadwivna, faithful knight to my liege lord Naruto Uzumaki. I shall be taking care of you until you recover. Zenobia Quarta, Exorcist for the Catholic Church. Turning toward the door, Dyrmund gave the recovering woman a smile before walking out of the room, heading straight for the kitchens in search of food for the newest guest in the Hanging Gardens. As he walked, he pondered the power of the sword Durandal, in great hands. The blade had been one of the most powerful blades made by man. He was indeed curious about the skill of the blue-haired woman. The Hanging Gardens were a magnificent sight. It was breathtaking. A floating fortress that seemed more like a doomsday weapon than a regular building. While odd in shape, the design was spectacular. With a multiplicity of rooms built inside the Hanging Gardens, boasted a grand army of dragon-tooth warriors as a line of defense against the enemies foolish enough to oppose the Hanging Gardens. It had been home for the hero faction for some time now, a home which could move and destroy opposition, but still home. It's wonderful, is it now? Semiramis asked aloud with a stunning smile etched across his countenance. I believe it is my greatest creation. What do you think, fallen angel? The question forced the tall man with a set of 12 midnight black wings to stop admiring the oddly charming fortress. Turning his head toward the progenitor of the voice with a charming smile, surprised by the looks of the woman he came face to face with, the man could not believe his eyes. In his eyes, Semiramis was simply outstanding, with the grace and looks of royalty. The woman's enchanting voice and her breathtaking glances simply pushed her beauty to new levels which surprised even Azazel. This is your creation? Azazel asked with his smile growing with every glance he made on the young woman. I never expected a woman of such beauty to construct such a fortress. Giggling at his flirtatious remarks, Semiramis decided to indulge the man in her charms. Allowing the fallen angel to flirt with her was simply enjoyable to some degree. Flirting lacked in the hero faction. She enjoyed a great deal of fun when she teased the men she met, pulling their strings and controlling them with mere looks and laughs. The fallen angel ate her flirty actions right up as she continued to play her charms. I am Azazel, Governor General of Grigori, Azazel said as he extends his hand for a shake. May I have the honor of asking the beauty standing before me her name? Semiramis, advisor to the King of Heroes Naruto Uzumaki, she replied with a bewitching smile stretching across her features. But I must go. Conversing with fallen angels are frowned upon by my little group. Be careful, Azazel. My king has a legendary rage. The last one who spied on us was executed by the king himself. Why tell me this, Semiramis? Azazel replied with a fake smile stretching across his countenance. Before he even received his answer, the woman vanished in a flurry of doves. Like the flirtatious woman, the castle which occupied the space too vanished. Even with his own magical power, he did not find a trace of the two. For Rias, she was terrified. Her entire peerage were in the infirmary recovering from their wounds they sustained during the last battle. She was lucky to have only got a couple scratches and bruises, while the other members had much more concerning injuries. The worst of them were Issei. Her beloved pawn had suffered the ferocity of the blonde. Not only had he took the arm of the pervert, but he took what gave him strength, the boosted gear. It was a mess, nothing more than a mess. I am sorry, she whispered with a single tear falling from her eyes. They were more than we could handle. You shouldn't have fought him like that. He's greater than all of us combined. During her tearful apology, Rias caught the sight of the crimson glow of a magic circle fill the room. As the circle shimmered, two people stepped out of it, wiping her eyes to the best of her ability. She stared at a tall crimson-haired man garbed in a series of armored robes. The silver-haired woman wearing the uniform of a maid followed the crimson-haired such man. "Big brother," Rias cried out as tears began falling. They were as so. Taking one big step, the crimson-haired man wrapped his arms around Rias as he whispered sweet nothings to the girl. He knew of the situation, that had been why Grafia and her made their way to Kuo in the first place. Kokabiel had been one of the reason he had decided to visit Kuo, but he had secretly wanted to visit his beloved sister. Now, he found her in the infirmary room crying over her defeated peerage. Simply thinking about it infuriated him. Thinking of anyone hurting his sister brought a bloodthirsty rage out. He was Sairaorg's Lucifer, the one who inherited the title of Lucifer due to his overwhelming control with his power. "Where are they now?" Sairaorg asked as he gave the girl a comforting pat on the back. "I need to know, Rias. Last time I saw them were when they extracted Issei's boosted gear. They were near Kuo Academy. That's all I know," Rias replied with a sniff. "Big brother please, there were so many of them. All I need to know now is how they look," he said once more. Accepting his words, Rias went on to describe the images of the attackers. More so on Naruto than anyone else, sharing a glance with his wife. Sairaorg let the girl out of his hug and passed her to Grafia. He was angry. That was not enough to describe his rage. Stepping back from his beloved sister, Sairaorg marched out of the school with fire burning in his eyes. There were ages things in the world which infuriated him. People who refused the diplomatic way of speaking through issues and scoundrels who made his sister cry. He was glad Grafia did not accompany him. A small part of him called for the use of all his might in order to make the attacker suffer. Sairaorg looked over Kuo Academy with a glare as he shrouded himself in a simple spell which left him undisturbed by the unknowing humans that attended the school he controlled. From Rias' words, he had scanned every inch of the large school in hopes of finding some humans related to the images she had described. Unsuccessful in his attempts to find the group, the eccentric Satan took flight from the spot he stood on and began searching for the supposed castle they had been residing in. It had taken him more than an hour or so for his perception to pick up on the magical energy shrouding many buildings. When looking for a massive castle in Kuo was not hard, he had taken note of the magical veil which disguised the massive structure. "Naruto is going to love to know about you." The voice of Semiramis came once more, this time with a hint of glee in her voice. Turning his head to face the voice, Sairaorg narrowed his eyes when spotting the bewitching woman standing a small distance away from him. When he had landed on a building to investigate the odd amount of magical energy surrounding the area, he had been a bit surprised by the woman but simply overrode the emotion with an expression of indifference. Staring at Semiramis, he took note of the similar feature Rias described in the woman who had extracted the boosted gear and left the pawn in an almost half-dead state. "Tell this Naruto to show himself," Sairaorg said with a cool voice as he continued to glare at the woman standing before him. "You and your group left my dear Rias crying. This shall be punished by myself, Sairaorg's Lucifer." This had only pushed Semiramis to laugh. She giggled at the proclamation as she attempted to calm herself. "My goodness, you two were quite similar. But, if you wish to suffer against him then so be it. I gave the fallen angel who visited us a warning." Now before Sairaorg could say anything, a barrage of weaponry soon pelted the roof he stood on. Summoning a shield of magical energy, Sairaorg waited for the weapons to stop. His power of destruction was holding the weapons back very well, but he knew it would not last long. With every strike from a blade, he would have to reconstruct the shield with greater magic, forcing him to waste his magic left and right. Soon, they stopped as Sairaorg felt the pressure pressing against his makeshift shield vanish moments later. "Yes, the little devil did heed my warning," Naruto said as he walked toward Semiramis. "Naruto Uzumaki," Sairaorg hissed with a scowl stretching across his visage. "Be honored by my presence, devil," Naruto started as he eyed the woman standing next to him. "But, you must give me the information I require. Tell me, mongrel, what do you know of a white-haired devil?" Sairaorg's mind immediately jumped toward his wife Grafia, but he frowned on the thoughts. Why would a human want with his wife of all people? Then again, there were more than a single devil with white hair. Grafia was merely their most prominent of them all. But, he wondered why the man called out for such an individual. White hair was not common in the underworld, but there were enough people to make it difficult to locate a specific one. "I need answers now, mongrel," Naruto said once more. "There are more pressing matters which require my time. My patience is at its limit now. Tell me. You were the one who attacked my sister and took the boosted gear from her pawn," Sairaorg stated as a crimson aura began surrounding his figure. "There are more pressing matters. Yes, I am here to punish the man who hurt my sister. If death is what you wish for, be honored, you shall die by my hands." Narrowing his eyes into a murderous glare, Sairaorg channeled a furious wave of his magic to blast the Golden King. Raising his hand, Sirzeks pushed his magic forward as the wave of destructive magic diminished under the flurry of blades. In his lifetime, Sirzeks had been considered one of the greatest users of the power of destruction. His might had been so great he had managed to gain the position of Lucifer. Never in his life had he been rivaled other than his close friend Ajuka in battle. Naruto did not wait to act. Raising his hand, the blonde brought forth an army of weaponry as he pushed them forth. The weapons converged as they formed into a torrent of weaponry. The wave of blades tore through the air as they moved toward the red-haired devil, showing little care as his treasures halted behind a shield of red magic. Naruto merely forced more weapons toward the devil. Spotting the cracks in the shield, the blonde snapped his fingers as he watched his beloved chains encircled Sirzeks, awaiting his commands to trap the devil. So tell me, mongrel, what do you know about a white-haired devil? Naruto commanded with a glare resting on his visage. I will force you if I must. My benevolence is running dry. Ignoring his words, Sirzeks spread his wings as he shot up to the sky, forcing the chains to encircle the air he once occupied. Weaving through the maze of weaponry and chains, he continued to maneuver without a plan in mind. From what Sirzeks understood, the blades that were attempting to impale him were not exactly normal magical blades. Not only did they possess out-of-the-world abilities which were not of the same, but the speed they were being shot made counters impossible. Considering the situation he was currently in, Sirzeks stole a glance at the blonde studying him before being forced to dodge the blades. Pondering the words of the blonde, he considered white-haired devils in the underworld. The only ones he could even think of were the Lucifuge clan and the descendants of the old Lucifer clan. Following his set of speedy maneuvering, Sirzeks readied a stream of magic before turning on the blonde and firing the attack. He did not have much time to watch as another series of blades shot past him, once again forcing him to dodge. Naruto had merely glared at the attack as he waved his hand and transporting a shield before him. The attack merely vanished inside the mirror-like shield as Naruto continued to fire away at the devil. The Yada mirror he had used to protect himself was a wonderful defensive shield. Not only did it protect against offensive attacks, the shield also protected against magical attacks. Wielding the shield, Naruto could protect himself from any possible attack. Nothing had penetrated the shield, nor will it ever. My patience has finally vanished, devil, Naruto hissed as he beckoned for another wave of blades. Shimmering behind him was a golden shroud of sparkling light. Calling forth the arc of green and gold, Vimana, the throne of the heaven-soaring kin, a masterfully crafted war machine appeared. The great weapon had been built for battle, surpassing modern physics. It potentially traveled at the speed of thought. The machine previously held ancient nuclear warheads and other ancient weapons ready for war. Not only did it travel in speeds surpassing any other vehicle, Vimana was reworked to allow the Gate of Babylon to be used at its full potential. And now, devil, you shall face the wrath of a king, Naruto said with a smile creeping across his visage. Prepare yourself, mongrel. Sirzeks could feel a pained feeling in his gut as he dodged the last of the blades shot his way. The current Lucifer turned back towards the blonde. His eyes widened when he caught sight of the incoming blonde, seated on a throne atop of a golden ark with green wings folded out and an array of golden circles forming behind him. Pushing himself forward with his magic surrounding his form, Sirzeks shot a number of magical blasts toward the approaching blonde, weaving through the much faster weaponry. His eyes widened with fear when he caught sight of the golden ark pull up next to him. This is not over, human. Sirzeks growled as he continued to pelt the blonde with his powered-up magical blasts. Very well then, Naruto merely said with a shrug, how shall you fare against Mordred? As he said that, a blade of golden shade fired from one of the many gates, soaring through the sky with a golden magnificence. The great weapon known as the prototype of both Graham and Caliburn, its power remained great as its light-based attributes only grew through time, creating a blade which killed worthy foes with a single slash. But the devil proved to be stronger, by some degree, piercing through the aura of magical energy that had shielded Sirzeks from some weapons. The blade had immediate effect, burning through the fabric and skin of the devil, leaving a gaping hole in the chest. You are one pesky devil, Naruto commented as he recalled Mordred. Very well then, how about this? Graham, you have managed to evaded many of my treasures with that aura. He never managed to finish his sentence. Screeching at him in a speed unimaginable by some was a bolt of crimson-red energy. Glaring at the attack for interrupting his sentence, Naruto aimed at the attack with another one of his weapons and fired. The contact resulted in an explosion of red and gold, leaving Naruto more annoyed than scared. Eyeing the devil who had taken a blow by Mordred, he pondered options to eliminate the supposed super devil. I am Sirzeks Lucifer, Super Satan and inheritor of the title Lucifer. I will not fall to a human. Searsx growled as he channeled the magical power resting in his body. Now suffer, human. Pathetic. Naruto muttered in response as he raised his hand. Appearing out of the gate was a blade shacked by a large amount of chains. Be honored, mongrel. Be honored, mongrel. You shall face one of my most prized treasures. Vanish. Raising the ethereal blade, Naruto felt the familiar hum of Aya as he watched the crimson attack come. As the blade began circulating and glowing in a shade of red, magical power began building. Faster and faster. The blade gathered more and more energy with every millisecond that went by. Gathering what he felt as enough, Naruto pushed the Aya forward and released the power that had been building. Upon contact, the two colliding powers ended with Aya's magical might, sending the super devil to the ground unconscious after the contact with Aya. Rizevim Lucifer, interesting. Naruto mused as he took a glance at the broken devil. Good work, Semiramis, you broke that Satan. Any other information he spouted? Nothing important, Semiramis replied as she placed the potion bottle down. The so-called Lucifer sang like a dove, beautiful, yet so satisfying, breaking strong men, forcing them to submit. This is. Raising his hand to stop the odd ramble, Naruto gave the witch a look. Eyeing the seemingly lifeless devil, he simply snorted at the supposed super devil, broken by Semiramis' very interesting methods. He simply laid there without a single thought flowing in his mind. Backing the forward bewitching woman, Naruto strolled out of the dungeon-like room and moved towards the throne room. The information had been quite helpful. Learning about Cao Cao's secret boss brought more understanding to him. Ddraig is recovering his powers, is he not? Naruto asked once more as his eyes remained glued to the front. The Sephiroth growl should have been enough for him. Yes, it was, Semiramis responded with another smile. The Welsh dragon has gained his strength back in such an astonishing rate. The Longinus is truly a wonderful creation, to bring back the dead. Absolutely amazing. We could bring back the heroes of the past. An army like. Enough. Naruto said as he cut off the witch, a firm look of denial on his visage. Bringing any more back would cause more troubles than they are worth. Simply bringing back Ddraig left you inactive for days. This shall remain an idea. Oh, so our King Naruto is worried about me. I wonder why our lord is so against that. Are you scared the heroes will take me away? Naruto had simply ignored the words as he focused on the throne. Sitting on the polished seat was someone he had never expected to see. That was how a ghost of a smile stretched across his visage, purely of happiness, tall and regal. The man with bronze skin and a pair of sun charms eyes. It was unmistakable as to who he was. Ozymandias, the glory of Ra has brought me home, my friend. The benevolent voice of Ozymandias boomed aloud, bringing a smirk of amusement across Naruto's visage as he approached the only man he considered an equal. Smirking with all of the arrogance befitting of the name Gilgamesh, Naruto walked closer to his only friend and chuckled marvelously. With Ozymandias at his side, he would no longer need to worry about the safety of his sister. No. With his rival around, his plans would be secure. They had fought to a standstill ages ago, and now, his fruitful ambition would be left unchallenged, and the Uzumaki blood would ever be tainted by the mongrels who wished to bring forth the beast of apocalypse no longer. Come. We have much to discuss, old friend, Naruto said as he gave Ozymandias a smile. Our final battle with the beast is approaching, and we may finally slay it. May Horus pave the way for victory. Ozymandias agreed wholeheartedly, unfazed by the fact that they were going to face an opponent supposedly matched with Great Red. For tonight we shall celebrate your return. Asia would be happy to see you again, Naruto replied as he then turned to Semiramis and beckoned her forward. Semiramis, this is Ozymandias, my oldest friend. Your beauty even surpasses Hathor's. Grunting slightly, Naruto collapsed on his bed, allowing himself to close his eyes and sleep. The blonde released a string of curses when his eyes opened. He stood in a massive throne room with symbols and markings etched in the polished stone. A massive stone throne sat at the room's end with decorations lining the wall behind it. He recognized those symbols. They were ancient Sumerian. Eyeing the room, Naruto finally found the only other occupant in the room. Seated on a simple wooden chair beside the throne, a man with long glossy green hair and a kind smile on his gentle visage. It is good to see you again, Naruto, the man said. Enkidu. Why am I here? Naruto asked as he stared at the man. I have called you here in order to warn you, the newly named Enkidu replied as he beckoned for him to sit down on the chair opposite to him. There is much we need to discuss. Nodding his head, Naruto took the offered seat and waited for the host to speak. He had been in the throne room a total of 3 times. The first was when he unearthed the Bab-ilu and accepted the curse which came with it. The second time when he demanded the usage of Aya, and now, his third time in the throne of Gilgamesh. He had met Enkidu a total of 3 times. The green-haired man being the key to unlocking the powers of Bab-ilu and the Hero King's items as a whole. You have overused the Gate of Babylon and its treasures. Naruto, when I first gave you the ability to use Gil's treasures, I warned you that his spirit resides within the key. Overusage of it would be your downfall. The more you use the Gil's power, the more he assumes control of you. Gil's legendary arrogance is associated with his treasures. If you don't stop, Gil will have your body. Enkidu said as he sighed somewhat. Gil wanted immortality when I passed on to the afterlife, and once he passed, his spirit bounded to his treasures. You have told me about Gilgamesh's spirit already. If he takes my body, then so be it. Once I slay Trihexa and bring Asia home, my ambition will be complete. I hold no more wishes other than such. Naruto replied with a frown. Asia will understand once I eliminate the beast who has been haunting our blood ever since its imprisonment. Are you content with allowing Asia to live without you? I have assembled an army willing to die for her. Once my body is no longer mine, they shall protect her in my stead. You are stubborn. Gil's power is indeed tainting, but to sacrifice one's own body to use it. How long do I have? Who knows? Gil could assume control of you in a day, perhaps a year. Eyeing the blonde, Enkidu could still see the determined little boy who had broke into Gil's temple looking for the bad ILU. He showed a determination that outshined Gil's that day, doing whatever he could for the betterment of his little sister's life. To accept a loss such as that, however, seemed alienating to him. Then again, he had never been a human to understand their emotions. Nevertheless, the boy had been the first to accept the conditions. In the years he watched over him, he noticed the drastic influence of Gil's personality clash with his own before it became an absolute mirror of Gil's. Though Naruto acted and talked like Gil, he could still see slivers of humanity reside within his body. However small it may be, there was still hints Naruto in that body. I wonder how Asia would think of your ambition, Enkidu mused. She will understand. Everything I do is for her. Once Trihexa is dead before me, I shall not allow Gilgamesh to control my body. Naruto replied, wincing somewhat at his choice of words. His influence on you is becoming more palpable with each passing day. So be it. As long as Asia is safe, you are as stubborn as a bull. So I have been told, walking down into the empty halls of the Hanging Gardens. Naruto moved towards the throne room. Everyone seemed to be asleep. He knew Semiramis would still be awake brewing her poisons. Walking into the empty room, Naruto ignored the sleeping dragon lying behind his throne and took a seat on the cold throne. Eyeing the large room a moment longer, Naruto watched as Ddraig's armored tail swung back and forth, chuckling somewhat at the resemblance of the mighty dragon to a sleeping dog. The blonde pondered his little predicament for a moment longer until his attention was set on the waking Ddraig. How long were you planning on sitting there? Ddraig asked. His booming voice filled the empty room. Just a moment longer, Ddraig, Naruto replied as he released a small grunt. Ddraig, I have a request for you. Fight for you, I understand, the mighty dragon responded as he released a plume of fire from his nostrils. No, if I ever fall, I wish for you to protect Asia. Is that it? Once she is safe, you may do as you wish. Humming in thought, the Welsh dragon thought about the request for a moment. He understood the blonde's intention, but what truly made him question the request was the fact that Naruto's voice or words did not reek of arrogance or confidence. They were blank and empty. The normally arrogant blonde remained silent and thoughtful, something he never seen before from the blonde. Rotating his body so his eyes could be placed on Naruto, Ddraig took a moment before responding. Very well then, I shall protect your sister. You have my thanks, Ddraig. Why ask the question now of all times? I am merely doing what I can for her. Rest for now, Ddraig. Strolling away from the throne room, Naruto made his way toward Semiramis' room. Knocking on the wooden door, Naruto heard the mysterious beauty open the creaking door. Ignoring her surprised expression, he watched as she schooled her visage and beckoned him in. Studying the large room decorated with beakers and tubes which contained a variety of oddly colored liquid, Naruto decided not to question the contents. He spotted a number of peculiar other objects, but he knew asking about them would only launch the conversation into something he come to regret. What are you doing here so late, Naruto? Semiramis asked as she pushed some hair away from her face. Would you drink with me? Naruto asked as the gate of Babylon opened and out came 2 goblets and a bottle of wine. Oh ho! Are you trying to get me drunk, my king? Semiramis asked as she leaned in whispering into his ear, and have your way with me? What of it? Naruto replied as he poured himself a helping of the wine. How interesting, the witch murmured before taking a seat before him and eyed the lavish goblet he provided. Picking the goblet up, she took a small sip of the wine, smiling somewhat at the taste. The young woman crossed her leg and leaned closer. I have news on Rizevim. My doves found an interesting piece of information you would love to hear. Eyeing her, Naruto's body tensed at the mention of Asia. Frowning somewhat, the playful grin which consumed Semiramis' visage, Naruto took an unhealthy gulp of his wine before scowling somewhat at her. He knew she enjoyed toying with his emotions, playing a game of cat and mouse with the information surrounding Asia. His undying love for his little sister was obvious, and the witch enjoyed watching him squirm, seeing the uncrowned king of heroes lose his cool when mentioning the only person he cared for. My doves found one of the many headquarters of the Koa's brigade, she said, studying Naruto's pondering visage. I managed to capture a little bird, and like our little devil, I made him sing. It was simply breathtaking. The mystery devil is the leader of Olipothe's sub-organization under the Chaos Brigade. Any information on those filthy curs? Naruto hissed. Shrugging her shoulders, Semiramis placed her goblet down and replied with a small hum. No exact information, but I recommend we get the Chaos Brigade's attention and extract our information the fun way. Frowning somewhat, he then clenched the goblet at the thought of Asia. I will make the mongrels suffer for daring to cross me. By the divine wrath of Set, I shall smite thee. Waving his massive crook to the side, Ozymandias watched with a smirk of satisfaction as a massive sandstorm roared to life, enveloping the surrounding buildings. Releasing a laugh of mirth, the all-powerful magician looked to the side, watching Naruto's hail of weapons shower the unlikely heathens who escaped his sandstorm. Standing on the airship, Vamana, the descendant of the great pharaoh Ramesses LL, laughed manically as he watched the destruction unfold below him. The fools behold them were fleeing like rabid dogs. His mirth was shared with Naruto, who watched the calamity they just created from his throne on the airship. Jin, destroy the fools, Naruto commanded with a wave of his hand. Watching the Longinus jump down from his airship and enter the Chaos Bellow, he smirked in satisfaction as it began tearing through the stray mongrels unaffected by the storm. He held pleasurable amounts of joy from watching the mutts from the Chaos Brigade suffer. His rage remained unquenched, but for now he would need to settle for the lowly curs the organization employed. Ozymandias' attention however landed on the beast his friend employed to champion his deeds. Smirking in turn, he eyed the bloodthirsty animal tear through anything that stood in its way. Their little show however came to an end when the sandstorm began to give. Frowning somewhat, the magician then realized the fact that they had eliminated all that had inhabited the little base, executing them in a fashion befitting of kings such as they. Releasing another smile of amusement, he watched the beast Naruto called Jin tear a man in half, separating his legs from his body in a single swipe. Pathetic. Mongrels such as they are unworthy of our presence, Ozymandias declared as Jin jumped onto Vamana, shaking off lingering sand before laying on the airship content with its position. Reaching down and giving Jin a rub on the head, the blonde king smirked as he sent the ship flying away. Their path of destruction, the two left, seemed more like a war zone than a simple attack on an enemy base. Bodies were scattered around the destroyed buildings. A thick layer of sand covered everything in sight. The only signs of population would be the blood-stained bodies. Many were either suffocated by the sand, executed by a variety of weapons, or shredded by Jin. None of them were pleasant to any degree. That had been the sight Ophis was greeted by when she arrived at the base she had instructed be built. Eyeing the destruction around her, the Infinity Dragon spotted a single spear planted in the sand with a bloodied head resting at the end. Gazing upon the marred head forever set in a visage of horror, the opened mouth containing an envelope. Breaking the wax seal, Ophis read the paper left inside and felt her lips dip somewhat. The letter only held 2 names inside, and she knew just who they were. Seated on his throne, Naruto studied the goblet he held in his hand. Seated by his side on a throne as extravagant as his own was none other than Ozymandias. Ozymandias rested his head on his closed fist, a glare of irritation marring his visage. With his crook resting by his legs, the self-proclaimed King of Kings studied his golden gauntlets, attempting to quell his growing vexation. Naruto however remained calm as he drank his wine. The two returned from their little fun, and neither of them were enjoying the waiting. However, their little wait ended soon enough as a black magic circle illuminated the room and a small girl appeared before them. Ophis, the Infinity Dragon. A pleasure, I suppose, Naruto mused as he eyed the new arrival, with the appearance of a little girl who wore a gothic outfit, but her chest remained revealed and tape covered his breasts. Ozymandias however glared at the dragon with minor distaste. He held no love for the Infinity Dragon nor her army of curs. His opinion of the silent-seeking dragon dwindled when he had heard of Asia's capture. He had a liking to the sister of his closet friend. To know someone captured her enraged him. Though he held no love for her, he decided to let Naruto control the conversation for now. He knew how important Asia was to Naruto, so allowing him to do the talking and find Cao Cao was ideal. You destroyed my base and killed my servants, Ophis said, her voice quiet, but the emotionless tone did not go unnoticed. And your men kidnapped my sister, Naruto replied, his sharp hiss not even drawing a change in her emotionless countenance. Finishing off his drink, the blonde reined in his deep-set anger. What do you want? I want Cao Cao's location. Once I have the heathen's head, then you shall escape our wrath. Naruto said as kept his steady gaze set on the emotionless dragon standing before him. And if your demands are not met? Ophis asked, her indifferent gaze never leaving contact with Naruto's menacing glare. Taking a step closer, the dragon stopped immediately when a golden blade pierced the ground before her. Eyeing the two, the Infinity Dragon could feel the putrid hate the second human sent at her. Though she cared little about their words, she knew the two were powerful in their own right, potentially becoming members of the top 10 strongest beings in existence, making them worthy additions to the Chaos Brigade while sacrificing a single outspoken Longinus. Then we will rain death and destruction upon your measly gathering of mongrels, Naruto replied evenly. We are not enemies you would wish to make, Infinity Dragon. Do you truly believe your threats frighten me? Ophis asked. If words shan't reach you then our might shall. Cur. Ozymandias threatened, joining in the conversation with his vexing voice brining all attention in his direction. Grabbing hold of his large crook, the mighty king aimed the heavy weapon straight at Ophis, daring her to move. I have no love for your minions, Infinity Dragon. If you deny Naruto's request then I shall personally execute you. I am the Infinity Dragon, human, not some weak devil. You may do as you wish, Ophis replied, her tone still emotionless. Then a gift perhaps? Naruto mused as if on cue. The large double doors leading into the throne were thrown open and Dyrmid entered, dragging the bound Seirsex with him. Making his way to the thrones situated at the end, the ever so loyal knight shoved the fallen devil not so gently on the ground, forcing him to kneel. Seirsex Lucifer, the mighty devil, foolishly considered the mightiest among his breed, for the price of Cao and my little sister's safe return you shall be gifted with the Satan. Beckoning Dyrmid to grab the prisoner, the knight forcefully dragged Seirsex to Ophis, throwing him before the petite dragon. Semiramis has not broken him too much, still a prized trophy. Eyeing the disgraced devil, Ophis took the deal in consideration. To give up Cao she would receive Seirsex. Though beaten and mentally damaged, the Satan could still be useful. All she needed was the human, and she would receive her very own super devil and potentially the favor of the arrogant humans. A worthy deal indeed. Returning her gaze to Naruto, she responded. Very well then, King of Heroes, I shall give you Cao and your sister. The devil is yours, Naruto announced before he gave the dragon another harsh glare. If you double-cross me, I will have your head. Nodding her head at the threat, the Infinity Dragon turned to her prize and quickly teleported out of the room, leaving the three heroes to their thoughts. Once Ophis vanished from their room, Naruto smirked, turning to Dyrmid. The blonde king nodded to his knight. Moving to the doors, Dyrmid ushered the occupants waiting outside into the great hall. Stepping with unimaginable grace, Semiramis walked into the room with a dove on her shoulders. Accompanying the bewitching woman was Mordred, who glared at the smirking woman with venomous hatred. How did our little plan go, my lord? Semiramis asked, a hint of curiosity escaping her playful tone. Splendidly, as expected, Semiramis, Naruto replied before releasing a chuckle of mirth. Now that she has taken the bait, we shall await her contact. If she does betray us, we shall storm their base. The little devil is properly controlled, correct? I enjoyed breaking him, my lord, making the mighty devil scream aloud and turning him into my toy. Rolling her eyes at the comment, Mordred turned to Naruto. Uzumaki, how is the devil going to help us? As expected, a barbarian such as yourself has little brainpower to decipher the situation, Semiramis said before giving Mordred a sad shake of her head. Well, this barbarian is going to kick your ass, witch, Mordred growled, brandishing her blade in anger. Behave, Mordred, Naruto muttered in annoyance, grabbing Mordred's shoulder before she could stab Semiramis. Turning to Dyrmid, who had stood before Semiramis. Dyrmid, how goes the Exorcist? Lady Zenobia is recovering well. She is anxious to meet you, my lord, Dyrmid replied with a small smile. Filing the piece of information away for later, the blonde smiled at his little group before beckoning for Mordred and Semiramis to follow. Taking off out of the throne room with Ozymandias following by his side, Naruto commanded his knight return to the hospital ward and check on Zenobia. Her presence created a few possibilities for him in the future, but if she refused his offer to join the hero faction then he would need to deal with her. Nevertheless, he kept the train of thought running before turning to Ozymandias. Semiramis, I have a task for you, Naruto said, finally turning to the woman. I need you to send your doves out to the remaining members of the hero faction. It is time we all reunited. Of course, my lord, Semiramis said, smiling at the thought of every single member of the hero faction returning to her fortress. The chaos was simply intoxicating. Oh, the intense rivalries which brewed ever since Naruto gathered them under a single banner. Only the blonde king could keep the hero faction under control. The members, even if they did not admit it, held a sliver of respect for the blonde. In any case, the large and very dysfunctional faction amused her to no end. To see them argue and bicker amusing indeed. Would that be all? Yes, And monitor Seirzex and Ophis closely, I want no mistakes, Naruto said, which the smirking woman only nodded in turn before vanishing in the hallways of the Hanging Gardens. Turning to Mordred, the blonde then laid out the task he wished for her to perform. Now, Mordred, I want you to deliver a message for me. Who to? Uzumaki? Mordred asked as Naruto handed her an envelope sealed by wax. The devils, of course. A little warning if they step out of line, the smirking blonde replied. A gift, to rest their wary hearts. Hey, you are a real bastard, Uzumaki. I'll have it to them by an hour. Come back alive now. Oh? Does the mighty King Naruto care back little ol me? Rolling his eyes at that comment, Naruto proceeded to walk further into the Hanging Gardens with Ozymandias by his side. All of a sudden, Naruto decided to stop, and he gave his rival and friend a look of seriousness. Frowning somewhat at the sudden stop, the golden-eyed king gave his friend a look of confusion before Naruto spoke. Promise me if I ever fall, you would take care of Asia for me. Faltering somewhat at the sudden change of tone, Ozymandias relented a moment later. You have my word, Naruto. If you pass on to the next life, I shall defend Asia in your stead. Ajuka Beelzebub could not stop his painful headache as he sat behind his large oak desk buried in a sea of papers. After Seirzex disappeared to who knows where, his workload had doubled and his time in his laboratory died down to mere hours a day. He, by a vote of 2-1, had been given the Seirzex daily work until he returned, meaning more paperwork and more responsibilities, forcing him to run not just one but two territories. Though a part of him worried for the lack of contact from his longtime friend, the other more logical part argued that he, wherever he was too busy to contact them. From the report from Rias and her beaten peerage, he knew the attacker or attackers were ultimate class level or perhaps higher. Shaking off those thoughts, the reigning Beelzebub sighed as he looked over the reports to construct a new hospital in Lucifers, a city in Seirzex territory. He needed to write a report either accepting or declining the petition from the company. Send over to inspect the current area first before writing his report, and go through a series of other painful legal processes that were set in place for projects in that specific level. Cursing his friend for leaving him to the tiresome process, the green-haired Satan looked over his other pile of papers to see if he could finish them off before calling it a day. Much to his dismay, the larger pile of unfinished paperwork seemingly grew while he pondered his situation. Eyeing the stack, Ajuka prepared himself before tackling into the first pile. Working in a frenzy, he felt the stack dwindle. Giving a smile of triumph, he signed off his current form and placed it in the finished pile. Just time, his ears picked up on the shouts from his security outside, and then screams followed a moment later. Standing up, he walked toward the double doors leading into his office and prepared to solve the distraction. Just then his doors were forcefully opened and one of his security guards crashed through the polished wood and landing roughly on his desk, shattering the decorative furniture. Feeling a small part of him die, Ajuka watched as his papers cascaded down from the air, mixing his work he had done for some time now. What is the meaning of this? Ajuka all but demanded as he eyed his unhinged doors in annoyance. Walking through the destroyed entrance, a girl with pulled-up blonde hair smirked in amusement as she eyed his fallen guard. Just who are you? You do realize attacking a Satan is punishable by death, correct? HMPH. So you're the pansy I was supposed to deliver this letter to. Strolling up to the man, Mordred offered him the letter before smirking at the groaning guard once last time. This a letter from my boss. He told me you'd want those pictures. Quickly breaking the wax seal and pulling out 3 photos. Ajuka's veins ran cold as he saw them. They were all of Seirzex. Instead of looking his usual self, the red-haired Satan was tied up and beaten in one photo, and in another his friend was collapsing on the ground naked to the world, laying in a pool of his own blood. The third and last picture the Satan voted on as the worst out of all of them, as it showed Seirzex laying on the ground licking on the dark boots of an unknown woman, who smirking viciously onto the obedient devil she had broken with vigor. What did you do to him? Ajuka bellowed as he blasted Mordred with a spell, but the knight was faster than him, dodging the sudden attack. She smirked wildly at him. No, no, no. I can't possibly tell you that. After all, what fun would it be if I did? Mordred asked, her shit-eating smirk expanding when Ajuka clutched the photos with unhinged rage. Taking a step closer to the enraged devil, Mordred gave him a playful grin before whispering, "Remember now, Mr. Devil, we have your friend, and if you do anything my boss doesn't like, well, say goodbye to Seirzex over there. I'll show myself out." Eyes still bulged in both anger and shock, Ajuka took a step backward. His friend was possibly the strongest devil he had ever met, outshining the others with power and potential he never thought his closest friend would fall. Then, a thought struck her mind. Just what sort of monster took Seirzex down? Laughing mirthfully, Mordred began reciting her tale about her encounter with Ajuka Beelzebub, and describing his expression the blonde knight cackled again. She had returned from the underworld only a few minutes ago, and she decided it was in the best interest of everyone if she recalled her little adventure into the home of the devils. Apparently the woman found some sort of pleasure from watching the all-powerful super devil crumble into putty, something Semiramis seemingly shared, much to the worry of Dyrmund. And then, he tried attacking me, but I was just too fast for him and I dodged, but that look he had on was hilarious. You should have been there, Mordred said, stifling her last laugh. It ended much better than we expected, Ozymandias mused before smirking widely. Beelzebub remains their second strongest devil. If we manage to shock him, then the moral of the heathens will dwindle, worthy of their title as pests. Nodding his head in agreement, Naruto sipped his ever-present wine goblet and smiled. The news made him happy to no end. If they held the devil as a political ammunition, they would be capable of gaining more from the unexpected surprise than he originally thought. Dangling Sirzek's life to the devils who adored their Lucifer, he could stop the pests from attacking them and wasting his time. The way Semiramis broke the mighty man could give gods nightmares. The simplicity behind her tactics were astounding, but were efficient none of the less. Now, will another faction subdued? All he needed now was Ophis to complete her end of the bargain. If not, he would storm their base. Either way worked with him. Now that we have the filthy mongrels under control, we shall await the arrival of the others and then bring Asia back, Naruto said, sipping his wine before a flame of determination illuminated in his sharp eyes. I want to give that bastard Avicebron a piece of my mind, Mordred said, scowling at the name. He betrayed us to Cao Cao. I want his head. Nodding his head in agreement, Dyrmund's eyes hardened as he thought about his greatest failure. They shall be punished for their deeds. Do not worry, my lord, I swear I will defeat Siegfried in your name. With me by your side, we shall not fail. I, by the blessings of Ra, will bring down the unsightly curs, old friend, Ozymandias said, his golden eyes glimmering with unnatural confidence. Lifting his head to heed the call of the gentle flute, Semiramis smiled as she heard the charming melody enter her room. Making her way to the garden of her large mobile fortress, the beauty soon found herself eyeing a man standing under the large oak tree at the center of the garden, with his long purple hair swaying through the wind. The man had a matching kimono on and a katana strapped to his. Being the only man to wear traditional Japanese garments for any occasion, Semiramis knew just who the silent musician was. You have returned, Sasaki. Naruto will be pleased by your arrival, Semiramis commented as she eyed the tall man. Recognizing the gentle features of Naruto's prized swordsman, the enchanting woman crossed her arms as he returned his flute to its simple case. I am happy to return by the call of Naruto-sama, Semiramis-san. The newly named Sasaki replied as he gave the woman a calculative look before walking back to the halls of the Hanging Gardens. He valued his position in Naruto's faction of heroes. Being the only man that bested him in a duel, the swordsman accepted the defeat. Naruto offered him a position by his side, impressed by his skill with the katana, but the ever-so hard-headed follower of the blade could not bind himself to a lord without defeat, and here he stood as a loyal follower of Naruto and one of his most trusted advisors. While he felt respect towards his lord, he could not speak the same to the other members of the hero faction. Oh ho! You have returned, Sasaki. Naruto's words filled the garden before the blonde king smiled. I answered your request, Naruto-sama. How may I serve you? Azazel, I am glad you could meet me here, Ajuka greeted as he gave the fallen angel a small polite smile before offering the man a handshake. After their little formal greeting, the super devil offered Azazel the seat as he awaited for his second guest to arrive before starting his presentation. Their wait inside the spacious meeting room ended a moment later when a soft knock resonated from the wooden door leading into the room. Opening the room to reveal the leader of the angels, the devil beckoned him into the room. Once they were all seated, he cleared his throat and began. As you know, there has been a new faction led by one Naruto Uzumaki. While there is little we know about them, I have discovered they are based on this flying fortress they call the Hanging Gardens. He was the same brat who killed Tobio and his men, Azazel said as his frown deepened at the mention of his former subordinate. He had received the news after escaping from Semiramis, who greeted him outside her creation. He knew firsthand at the sheer magnificence of the fortress. Its ability to fly was hard to comprehend. For an object of such a size to float into the air, much less fly, took a great deal of magic, something he doubted many had at their disposal. He gathered enough information surrounding the supposed hero faction to consider them an overarching threat, something he rarely considered others. He is the supposed king of heroes and his small army of heroes are exceedingly loyal to him. Ajuka continued as he produced more photos of the other hero faction members. Placing the picture of Semiramis for the two to see, the super devil continued with his words, that is Semiramis. Rias said they encountered her a few times. She is a talented magician as well as a poison brewer. I investigated the situation with the Tepes faction and found a powerful potion lingering in their castle. They managed to assault as well as annihilate the entire faction with little effort, though their numbers are not confirmed. This is Dirmud Uadwivna, another member of the hero faction. Rias had told me that his 2 spears are powerful magical objects able to sever the connection between Issei Hyodo and his Longinus, the boosted gear, though we barely have any other information on him other than his undying loyalty to Uzumaki. The others are unknown to us, we have no names nor capabilities, though if they are associated with the faction we can assume they are dangerous. Why show us this information, Ajuka? Michael asked as he eyed the pictures. They attacked Kuo and killed Kokabiel and injured the Gremory peerage. Your 2 exorcists were present when he attacked, Ajuka replied. So what do you want, Ajuka? I don't have time for pleasantries, Azazel interrupted as he eyed the devil with impatience in his tone. I propose a joint attack on the hero faction. They have commented crimes against all of our factions. To unify against them will provide us a reason to mend our damaged status quo, Ajuka answered. When do we start? Another night? Naruto asked as he took a seat beside his friend and poured himself a goblet of wine before seating himself next to Ozymandias. Ignoring the cold grass they sat below. The blonde king took a helpful gulp of the cool wine, eyeing the starry night with content in his mind. Brushing a hand on his messy hair, Naruto allowed his locks to sway under the influence of a gentle breeze. I see her at times, her gentle voice awakening every morning. Her warming touch, memories which are not of my own. This life, yes, this is not my own. Ozymandias mused as he smiled painfully, drawing a similar pained expression from Naruto, who raised his goblet at that before chuckling humorlessly. Unlike the heroes which filled their faction, neither of them inherited their abilities per se. Like the blonde, Ozymandias obtained the object of power from the specific king. Perhaps out of every living being in the world, Naruto remained the only one he could relate to. Conceivably their pursuit for power brought them together, an unlikely bond but a bond nevertheless. The power of the deceased kings were unimaginable, and to forcefully eject it from its resting place brought forth a deal of displeasures and punishments neither had foreseen. For Naruto, he would lose his sanity little by little before all that remained was a simple copy of the King of Heroes. However, Ozymandias' punishment could be described as inherently worse. Bombarded by memories of the pharaoh, the man could not escape the constant mental strain which accompanied the memories. Every minute of the day he watched the events of the former pharaoh play out. All the voices, all the people he saw made life a living hell. The voices were everywhere in his sleep. During his meals all the whispers and growls would fill his mind, leaving no room for silence. HMPH. I suppose unearthing those objects of power were a bad idea, Naruto mused, but his voice lacked the conviction behind his words. Perhaps, though my quest for power was short, but I do not regret my actions. The guardian warned me of my difficult path. I accepted the consequences before the warnings were spread, Ozymandias declared as he ran a warm hand along the cold grass, gingerly crushing the blades in his palm. His reasons to grow stronger could all be directed towards his less than desirable childhood. Growing up in the slums of Cairo where conditions were inhumane helped influence his decision to raid the tomb of Ramesses LL. He remembered having a father and a mother as well as a great deal of siblings. But he could not exactly remember their names or faces. One of his many siblings died in his early ages and another followed less than a week later. One by one, they vanished from his life before he was left to the unwelcoming arms of the streets. His time with the street urchins strengthened his resolve. The people who lived outside of the slums were against their very existence, looking down on them like mere rats polluting their streets. The corrupt nation ignited a fire of hatred towards the unprincipled fools who ruled Egypt. His ideals were drawn to Ramesses LL. His influence brought Egypt into a new age of glory. Thus he raided the ancient pharaoh's tomb, obtaining his crook return, his ambition guiding him every step of the way. Then we have nothing to complain about, Naruto declared as he stood up and offered the man standing next to him a hand. Grasping the man's forearm and pulling him to his feet, Naruto summoned a bottle of wine and an extra goblet. Offering Ozymandias his own goblet, Naruto poured plentiful servings to each of their awaiting cups before raising it for a toast, to us, and our damned ambitions. Chuckling, Ozymandias mimicked his actions before clashing the jeweled goblet against Naruto's, and they shared a drink, allowing the comforting alcohol to enter his body. The man smiled. Has Semiramis found anything on trihexa yet? The beast remains asleep. Once we have gathered everything, then we can finally free Asia from the curse. Not yourself. I don't plan on living that long. Our battle will wipe away those who dare destroy the fragile we have built. I am asking you to raise your arms to fight against these fiends. They have taken one of our leaders to help in their selfish reasons. That is why we the leaders of the three factions will unite as a whole in order to fight against the villainy they have brought upon our people. Ajuka bellowed as he eyed the gathered forces, looking down on the army with a deal of pride. Raising his arms he continued his speech, "For hundreds of years our people have fought and died for petty reasons we can no longer remember, so I beseech you to fight for our peace. Look around you. The people who reside in this room are your comrades for this struggle for peace. By setting our differences aside we champion the ideals of peace not for ourselves but the future. What Lord Beelzebub speaks is nothing short of peace. These terrorists could have sparked a second great war which would have caused thousands of our own kind to fall to the tyranny of war, to bring forth a brighter future not for ourselves but the future generations to come. We have lost friends and family. For our attack on the faction who dares proclaim them as heroes we shall preserve our way of life," Michael said as he smiled warmly at the large army surrounding them who gave him a loud cheer in response. Raising his hand to silence the army, Azazel took a step forward and gave the unified forces a smile of his own. The hero faction is based in this floating fortress. It is called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. For all we know it is massive and can hold a small army in its barracks. For all we know is that the faction contains only 5 members but there could be more. I cannot stress this enough. Do not engage any of them alone. Distract them until one of us arrives or fight them in groups. A majority of them remain unknown to us, thus their abilities could be dangerous. Their leader, Naruto Uzumaki, is extraordinarily powerful. If you meet him, flee. Only us can engage him. Their battle strategy revolved around their strength in numbers. The enemy faction remained small but they had quality to their minuscule numbers, with their leader being a member of the 10 strongest beings, making him a major threat with his unknown goal. Azazel prided himself in the vast army of spies he had in his disposal. But his network knew nothing about the newest addition to the list. All the leader of Grigori knew was that his power revolved around weaponry. He could not find anything else about the blonde. With his victory over Sirzex put him on the alarms of many other factions. Other than his overwhelming power, nothing else could be deciphered from his encounters. Many who interacted with the blonde were either slain or were unwillingly to rat him out. Either way the situation did not work for their future assault of the hero faction. "Now, we attack their base at sunrise," Azazel said. "Their sentries, if they have any, would be tired from their watch, and catching them by surprise is the key in our attack. We move in swiftly and attack with everything we can muster. Catch them by surprise and annihilate any opposition before they could even begin their counteroffensive." The wait ended surprisingly fast as Azazel and the other leaders discussed strategies for taking out Naruto while eliminating the loss of lives before the battle officially began. Between him and Ajuka, they were able to improve their original battle plan by minor details, reinforcing the idea of ranged warfare against the floating fortress. No matter how large their forces were, they could not confront the hero faction directly. Attacking them from a distance would force them to engage them on their terms, giving them a massive advantage of the field. For all they knew, none of the faction was capable of flying, so they pushed some of their strongest magic users above to cut their ground forces off. "Lord Azazel, it's time," a soldier said as he saluted to the man who nodded in response before his grim frown widened when he stood and followed the soldier out. "Azazel, good morning," Michael greeted as he offered his brother a small frown before beckoning to the large numbers of their soldiers beginning their assault on the large fortress. Their sudden attack worked in their favor, that much was true. Shooting out of the castle were skeletal warriors with a pair of wings jutting out from their back, charging relentlessly against their air forces. Ajuka frowned in annoyance as he sent a few spells at the warriors, annihilating them from the air, but much to his further annoyance, the sea of defenders did not relent as they flooded the air forces, caring little about their dwindling numbers. "Dragon-tooth warriors, how annoying," Azazel grunted as he watched the battle before releasing his wings. "They must have created thousands of those to defend the fortress." "Thousands of expendable soldiers," Michael replied, a small frown adorning his visage. Ajuka remained at the large makeshift headquarters as he watched the 2 other leaders join the fray. His eyes then widened somewhat when he saw more warriors charge with objects strapped to their bodies. His worries were confirmed when the warriors were shot down, but a small explosion engulfed their destroyed bodies. The soldiers who were unfortunately caught in the explosion fell from the air, collapsing into the forest in an unfortunate manner, quickly barking out orders to the officers around the camp. Ajuka nodded in satisfaction as the forces thinned out and spread around the fortress, shooting down the defenders before they could self-destruct. "Dearmood, you and Mordred take half of the Dragonbone warriors and wipe out their ground forces. Sasaki, you stay here and guard Semiramis while she controls the Hanging Gardens." Turning to Ozymandias, Naruto gave his one and only rival a nod before he watched the wizard stalk out of the large room, his crook by his side. As the various heroes moved to perform their orders, Naruto turned to the massive red dragon laying down on the stone floor, his sharp green eyes bearing down on the blonde. "Come, Ddraig, we have an appearance to make." Walking toward the dragon, Naruto hopped onto the Dragon Emperor, much to the annoyance of the dragon. Like many dragons, they were extremely prideful and did not allow anyone to ride them. Such an act was shameful and showed them to be submissive. Filing away his annoyance away, the mighty dragon blasted the stone wall and shot into the cool morning air. Ignoring the surprises of the large army outside, Ddraig released a second jet of flame at the unified army, killing any who were unfortunate enough to be caught in the high-temperature fire. Their sudden appearance caught the thousands by surprise before horror filled their faces, as the duo tore through the forces with ease. "Die, you filthy mongrels!" Naruto screamed as his visage twisted into a maniacal, rage-filled smile. The pain from losing Asia to Cao Cao stilled clang to his heart, though he cancelled his emotions behind the exterior of a king inside his heart. The same small boy who lost his parents years ago cried out. Everything he did, no matter good or evil, rested on his desire to bring forth a world where Asia could live in happiness, to protect that innocence she had before the Uzumaki clan was wiped in a single minute. No matter the costs, the Uzumaki name would die with him and she would be finally freed from their curse of existence. "Burn them, Ddraig. Spare no one," Naruto bellowed as he shot weaponry at anyone who he did not recognize. As he commanded, Ddraig poured fire at the unlucky fools surrounding them. His rage reached the ones who dared to attack his faction. His anger needed to be released. Sniping a devil who was hidden from Ddraig's view, Naruto glared menacing at the ones who backed off at the sight of his precise attack, unwilling to confront him in the dragon. However, a series of magical chains entrapped Ddraig as Azazel and Michael appeared. "Do you think these chains would hold me?" Ddraig asked, a hint of annoyance in his booming voice. Breaking free of the magical chains, the dragon glared at them as he snarled. Crossing his arms, Naruto glared at them as he watched the magical beams of magic disintegrating the enemy forces. Under the ground, Dirmud and Mordred were slicing the forces with ease. Dirmud fought them with a blood-red blade and his short spear, dodging and parrying gracefully as if dancing a deathly waltz. Mordred, however, was brutal in every manner. Tearing through the enemies, she sliced and gutted any who opposed her, no mercy in her actions. The army of skeletal warriors were flooding the others, fighting against an army of warriors who were continuously filling the battlefield. Semiramis easily regenerated the lost forces with ease, supporting Ozymandias with beams of magical energy, though she used her magic wisely. "So it was you mongrels who dared to attack us," Naruto hissed as he surrounded the three with the golden ripples, with weapons appearing ready to skewer the three at a moment's notice. Smiling somewhat at the rage, Naruto presented the new arrivals. Ddraig marveled at the human with the fury worthy of a dragon. The boy seemed much more interesting by the day. Perhaps agreeing to work alongside the blonde could be much more entertaining than he had expected. Nevertheless, the Red Dragon Emperor waited as they chatted away. He never understood why the politics between them. Far too little action for his tastes. The bastards were too underhanded for him to like any politicians. "I wouldn't act too high and mighty, brat. It's 1-on-3, we have the advantage here," Azazel said, crossing his arms with a curious expression hidden behind his sharp frown. He was curious of the boy, especially since he took down Sirzex, though he held a great deal of animosity towards the blonde for killing Tobio. "I will need no help to execute you curs. For your insolent attack I sentence you to death," Naruto hissed as he filled the air with weapons. Watching the golden projectiles falter against a shield, the blonde smirked before a spear pierced the shield, shattering it into pieces. His barrage was met with a blast of white magical energy, but the blast remained ineffective against a few golden discs protecting him from the attack. "How fun!" Ozymandias proclaimed as the man appeared beside Naruto, standing on his massive wooden boat standing at the front of his floating ship. Ozymandias smiled menacingly as he waved his crook and engulfed the three in blue flames. However, his scorching fire slowed as a second larger shield protected them, though the golden-eyed Egyptian's smile grew a little wider. "Oh ho! I am curious. How long can you survive my flames? Come forth and annihilate." Beckoning his arms to his sides, the mighty mage called forth a sphinx standing tall with a body shrouded in the very stars themselves. Releasing a mighty roar, the large beast shrouded its body in dark flames as it attacked the forces on the ground. As it ignited flames to its surrounding area, the sphinx tore through the enemies with ease. Though the enemy commanders were holding up their blank expressions, Ozymandias knew they were uncertain of defending their troops or facing off against the two. "Ozymandias, let us finish these fools. I grow tired of this," Naruto said as he turned to Ddraig and gave the dragon a smirk. "Go enjoy yourself, we will handle them ourselves." Sending off the Red Dragon Emperor. "You sure are confident," Ajuka said, his cool tone changing their attention to the green-haired devil. Raising his hand and forming a green magic circle, he surrounded the two in a green light. Ozymandias blasted through the attack before sending a sandstorm at the three, unimpressed by the attack. However, Ajuka narrowed his eyes and the incoming sandstorm was redirected at Ozymandias, who looked furious at the return of his attack. Brushing the howling storm away with a flick of his fingers, Ozymandias stomped on the boat and tendrils of stone shot out from the ground, rapping at Ajuka. However, Michael destroyed the attack with a blast of holy magic, vanquishing the hardened stone into a flurry of powder, making Ozymandias smirk. I suppose these mongrels are much more capable than expected. How amusing. Ozymandias chuckled as he gave Naruto a nod before he watched Naruto bombard them with his weaponry. This time they dodged, hoping to avoid using more magic to shield themselves. Turning to Naruto, who grabbed 2 matching twin swords as he assembled them into matching tonfas. So you decided to use Enki, I am curious to see how they match against them. Naruto replied as he nodded to Ozymandias. Raising his crook, the man casted a spell which surrounded all of them, raising the gravity levels. Shooting to the ground, Naruto waited as he charged at Michael, slashing Enki at his chest. Azazel stopped the sharp blade before it could kill Michael with a light spear. Though he stopped the attack, Naruto was physically superior as he threw the fallen angel to the ground before he returned to Michael. You'll regret that. Ajuka hissed before blasting Naruto, who sliced straight through the attack, eliminating it with a single slash. The green-haired devil could not retaliate as Ozymandias crashed against him, taking to their private little field. Oh my. Be careful now, I wouldn't want any of you dying on me, Lavinia said as she smiled warmly at the soldiers, panting softly as she froze a group of Dragonbone warriors. Turning to Carnage in front of her, the beauty frowned a little as she watched Mordred stalk towards their group, her bloodied armor glowing under the morning sun. Dragging her blade softly through the ground, the sick, twisted smile Mordred wore on her visage spooked the unified forces. One brave or perhaps foolish devil ran towards her, his blade aimed at her exposed head. Grasping the blade with her gauntlet, Mordred crushed the sword and tossed it away. She clasped the Mon's head, adding extreme pressure before a sickening crunch was heard. The opposing forces were horrified at the display of brutality, much to Mordred's pleasure. I am Mordred Pendragon, Knight of the King of Heroes and the descendant of the Knight of Treachery. You bastards are unfortunate enough to get in my way, so I beseech you, die for me. Mordred cackled as she charged, knocking away the soldiers. She was coated in ice. Much to the dismay of the other soldiers, she shattered through her cold imprisonment with ease. Uzumaki never lets me have this much, so I am going to enjoy gutting you all. Such brutish behavior. You lack the elegance of a knight, Lavinia said before freezing the area surrounding Mordred. You sound just like the witch. Uzumaki won't let me kill her, but you're not under his protection, are you? Mordred muttered. Her haunting words sent shivers down the spines of soldiers. Cracking her neck, Mordred sliced a man in half as she smirked more as blood showered her body. Unlike Dermod, who gracefully dispatched his enemies, she used her inhumane strength to crush her enemies, even willing to throw her blade at enemies if it meant she could win the fight. Her unnatural bloodlust seemed to complement her brutal fighting style that she perfected. Before she could even attack the remaining targets, a hooded man swiftly dispatched them all except Lavinia, who moved just in time. With a red hood shrouding his visage and silver body armor cloaked by the same hooded cloak, holding a bloodied black combat knife, he reached for the Thompson contender strapped to his side as he looked at the ice mage with little care, revealing his calico M950. The cloaked man could not reach for his weapon before Mordred stabbed her blade at his feet. Why the hell are you here, Emiya? This is my fight. I don't need you in my way. Mordred hissed as she glared at the man who pulled the red hood down, revealing his snow-white hair and emotionless dark eyes. Kiritsugu Emiya, or Naruto's personal attack dog as she liked to call the emotionless assassin. Naruto-sama ordered my return, Mordred. My only existence is to serve him. I will slay any of his enemies without question. Kiritsugu said. His cold tone remained unchanging as Mordred snarled at him in rage. This bitch is mine. Stay out of my way. Mordred replied before glaring at him. Without responding, Kiritsugu pulled up his hood and vanished into the morning air. Thanks for watching.